Chapter 51 Siege Translator Atlas Studios Editor Atlas Studios After saying that Charlotte felt extremely aggrieved too, which woman had never fantasized about marrying into a rich family, enjoying a privileged life of luxury and being the subject of envy of everyone. Charlotte was just an ordinary girl too, so when she suddenly received the huge betrothal gifts from the Sawyers, she was so elated that she didn't even bother to find out what Ethan Sawyer's son looked like and what his personality was like. She had a sense of vanity too, and she was extremely pleased when she enjoyed the praises of her relatives and the looks of envy cast at her by the passers-by. When she was driving in her luxurious and comfortable Lamborghini, she felt that a golden pie had fallen onto her lap and that her life was about to change drastically. But who would have thought that it was all just a misunderstanding? At the Intercontinental Hotel the other day, Ethan Sawyer denied the matter right in her face, making her feel incredibly ashamed and embarrassed. For the past few days she had been extremely sad and aggrieved, but there was no one she could pour her feelings out to. When saying those words in front of Dominic, Charlotte burst into tears, unable to hold them back and contain her sadness any longer. Ethan Sawyer's son is already married. Hearing this, Dominic was surprised too. That's not right. The words betrothal gifts were clearly written on the list there. Betrothal gifts, all right. Did Ethan Sawyer propose on behalf of his son, or is Charlotte going to be? Dominic did not say the word second wife, but everyone was clear about what he was implying. Charlotte didn't catch what he meant and only heard the words betrothal gifts. It turned out that they were really betrothal gifts, but not for her. Instead, they were meant for Cheyenne from Lucas. Ironically, she even mocked Lucas and said that he would never be able to afford to give Cheyenne such expensive gifts. She even called him a loser and said that he ought to get out of the house. I was such a joke. Karen rubbed her hands rather awkwardly. Dominic, those betrothal gifts really weren't for Charlotte. It was all just a misunderstanding. Dominic Carter immediately lost his temper. He had already wasted several hours at their home and even got provoked only to hear that it was all a misunderstanding and that Charlotte was not going to marry into the Sawyer family at all. He stood up, stared at them with a hostile gaze and roared, "How could you make a mistake with such an important matter? Weren't you very proud and conceited when you bragged about it in front of me before her? All you do is brag and show off, but you are so useless at solving problems. You are a bunch of garbage. I am telling you, you people are the reason for the current situation that the Carters are facing. If you don't hurry up and find a solution to get the Carters out of trouble, all of you will get it from me." In a moment of pique, Dominic left. Karen chased after him and tried to make him stay, only to watch him get inside his car and leave. She was so furious that she stomped her feet non-stop at the door. William was in a foul mood too. "What are you yelling for? He's long gone. Do you really think I care about him? I just want to ask him if he's still going to let us move back in and work at the Carter Corporation," Karen said. William sneered. "Obviously not. Can't you tell that? He just came here to reminisce with us because the Carters are facing a huge crisis and he wants us to go beg for leniency from the Sawyers. If we could have helped the Carters solve this crisis, he might have considered giving us some benefits such as giving us the house and jobs. However, now that we can't help him, he's obviously not going to care about us." Karen was rendered speechless by William's snide remarks. Indeed, if they were not useful to Dominic Carter, he would not even pay any attention to them. However, William's words just now gave Karen some inspiration. She clapped her hands and said excitedly, "Right, it's not impossible. If we can help the Carters solve this crisis, Dominic Carter will definitely be very grateful to us and value us highly. Hell, give us the house and jobs in pay company too. He might even hand the entire family over to you." William looked at Karen like he was staring at an idiot and gibed. "What are you dreaming about? The Carters must have come to us as a last resort. What makes you think we can solve a problem that so many people can't? Do you still think we're in-laws of the Sawyers? Do you think we haven't embarrassed ourselves enough?" Karen actually didn't feel that she had embarrassed herself in front of Ethan Sawyer back then because it was just a misunderstanding. However, it was indeed a shame that she couldn't become the Sawyers' in-laws, and indeed she didn't have a say. The two of them were so focused on complaining that they didn't even notice that Charlotte had left the house at some point feeling upset and dejected. Charlotte didn't want to continue staying at home and listening to her parents complain. However, since she had nowhere else to go, she called her best friend Sophie Turner. "Sophie, I feel so terrible. Come out for some drinks with me." When Sophie arrived at the bar, they agreed to meet at. Charlotte had already downed several glasses of wine and was tipsy. There were many men next to her staring at Charlotte without any restraint. From time to time there would be people coming over to hit on her. Even after being rejected by Charlotte, they refused to leave and continued surrounding her and flirting with her. Extremely worried for her, Sophie dashed forward to pull Charlotte away. "Sophie, you are here. I want to drink." Charlotte opened her reddened eyes to look at her best friend. "Okay, well, go to my house and drink. Let's buy more liquor and you can drink to your heart's content." Sophie hurriedly tried to coax Charlotte and helped her out of the bar. The duo were about to get into the car when a man suddenly rushed out from the side and stopped them at the entrance. "Charlotte, you must help me. Just go to the Sawyers and put in some good words for us. It's very simple. I know I've done wrong things before and I hereby apologize to you. If you don't help, the Carters will be doomed and Grandpa will kill me. Just help me out this time." Bryce exclaimed anxiously as he grabbed Charlotte's hand, his breath smelling like alcohol. After being berated and driven out by Dominic in the afternoon, Bryce had some drinks with a few friends. However, if he couldn't get Charlotte to agree to beg for mercy from the Sawyers, his grandfather would let him step foot back inside the house. Thus he tracked down Charlotte and tried to stop her again. "Go away. I already told you, don't look for me for this matter." Charlotte opened her eyes and shot Bryce a look of disgust. "All of these people keep coming to me, but what's the point of that? I have nothing to do with the Sawyers." Bryce went forward and still wanted to say Something but Sophie hurriedly shoved Charlotte into the car, started the engine and quickly drove away. Bryce stared at the car from behind with a menacing expression. Since you've decided to be ruthless, then don't blame me. Chapter 52 Abduction. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. While driving, Sophie looked at Charlotte's reflection in the rearview mirror and asked worriedly when she saw how unwell Charlotte seemed. Charlotte, did something happen? Charlotte shook her head as teardrops rolled down her cheeks. She wiped her eyes and forced a crestfallen smile. Nah, I'm just in low spirits today, I'll be fine. After a while, Sophie felt that it would be inappropriate to ask further and decided to probe again. When they returned home, she felt upset seeing how dejected her best friend was. While Sophie was driving on a secluded road, a Hummer suddenly sped over from the intersection ahead and collided into the passenger side of her car. Bang! With a loud collision, Sophie's car was forced to come to a halt as glass shattered all over the place. Charlotte passed out under the impact. Sophie was feeling dizzy as she anxiously tried to check on Charlotte's condition while picking up her phone to call the police, but at this moment the doors of the Hummer that crashed into her car opened and several burly men who didn't seem like decent people opened the passenger door beside Charlotte. What are you doing? Sophie yelled in horror, but a hand reached in through the window and smacked her on her neck, causing her to pass out immediately. Meanwhile, several people pulled Charlotte out of the car and carried her into the Hummer. Soon the Hummer restarted and quickly disappeared in the darkness of the night. Amid the dark shadows in the distance, the dim flickering lights lit up a parked car and Bryce's face, making him look extremely terrifying. Charlotte Carter, you forced me into this. After you end up in the same state as your sister, I'll see how you can still be arrogant in front of me. The secluded street was empty and the car, which had been destroyed beyond recognition due to the collision, remained stationary in a corner quietly. After a while, Sophie regained consciousness, and when she opened her eyes to see the ruined car, she finally recalled what had happened earlier. In a panic, she frantically looked around. The passenger seat was empty, the car door was open, and there were shards of glass scattered all over the ground. Charlotte was nowhere to be found. Charlotte at this moment, Cheyenne had tucked Amelia in at home and was mulling over and over about the things that happened over the past few days. However, there was only silence in Charlotte's room. Cheyenne knocked on the door, but there was no sound inside. Charlotte, are you there? She knocked again and turned the knob to open the door, only to see that Charlotte's room was empty. She frowned. It's almost 11. Isn't she home yet? Karen was wearing her pajamas and munching on some snacks in the living room downstairs. Mom, where did Charlotte go? Is she not at home? Oh, SH's not. Karen finally noticed that her youngest daughter was not at home, but she didn't take it too seriously. She simply said nonchalantly she must have gone to her friends. Cheyenne was speechless and was about to call her sister to ask when her phone suddenly rang. When Cheyenne picked up the phone, she heard Sophie crying on the other end. Cheyenne, bad news. Cheyenne is in trouble. Cheyenne's face instantly paled. At this moment, Lucas was sitting in the back seat of a Jaguar sedan and listening to Jordan report some information that he had found from asking around lately. All of a sudden his phone rang. It was a call from Cheyenne. When he saw that Cheyenne was actually taking the initiative to call him, his face could not help but look gentler as he answered. Cheyenne, Lucas, Charlotte has been kidnapped. What should we do? Do you have a way to save her? As soon as the call went through, he heard Cheyenne's flustered voice. Lucas' face grew stern immediately. Don't panic, talk to me slowly. Where did she get kidnapped? Did anyone see under? Lucas' calm asking. Cheyenne told him everything that Sophie had just told her, including of course Dominic's visit and the fact that Bryce had approached Charlotte twice but was rejected by her after hearing her words. Lucas had a vague guess. He comforted Cheyenne, don't be too anxious, just stay at home and wait, don't go anywhere. I am going to search for Charlotte now. I'll definitely bring her home safely. After hanging up, Lucas said to Jordan, who was driving with a cold and grave expression, turn around, we're going to the Carters. Hearing Lucas' icy why cold voice, Jordan couldn't help but feel his heart palpitate. Yes, Lucas. In the Carters' main residence, Dominic was pacing back and forth in a room in frustration. Usually he would have long begun resting, but now that the Carters were facing a crisis, he was overwrought and full of anxiety, so he wasn't the least bit sleepy at all, seeing that it was already 11 p.m. and that there was only an hour to go before the deadline for the loan repayment. He felt incredibly flustered. However, he had already resorted to all solutions and tried to contact his old friends for help, but to no avail. Are the Carters going to be ruined just like that? No, I can't let that happen. While Dominic was thinking about how he could send some expensive gifts and have a chat with the director of the bank tomorrow, he heard loud banging, clattering and some shrieks coming from downstairs. He immediately flew into a rage. He pulled open the door and yelled, what's the commotion about? However, when Dominic saw the situation downstairs, his eyes suddenly widened in horror. The tall and luxurious gate of the Carter residence had already been deformed from violent kicking in. There were pieces of tempered glass scattered all over the floor. There were also more than 10 people lying on the ground, all of whom were Carter family members and security officers. Only one person stood in the center of the hall, exuding a fearful aura. Who are you? Why did you suddenly barge into the Carter residence? Dominic's heart was thumping fast as he mustered the courage to ask. This person raised his head, revealing a familiar face. It's you. Dominic received a great fright, after which he flew into a rage. How dare Cheyenne Carter's loser husband barge into my home? Does he really think we're pushover? Security, hurry up and get this person out of here, Dominic hollered. Lucas remained unfazed. Jordan stayed outside. Many people had already passed out on the ground. Where's Bryce? Carter, get him to come out, Lucas said coldly. Dominic flew into a rage. Who are you to call my grandson's name directly, you good for nothing? Before he could finish his words, his vision blurred and Lucas immediately vanished in the blink of an eye. He already reached Dominic and was choking him. I don't have the patience to listen to your nonsense. Where is Bryce? Carter Chapter 53 Questioning to find her whereabouts. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Lucas was so fast that he appeared at the top of the stairs in the blink of an eye and strangled Dominic Carter. Dominic was greatly shocked and he tried hard to move Lucas' hand away, but to no avail. As soon as he started speaking, Lucas tightened his grip on his neck and interrupted him. Lucas coldly looked at Dominic's face that was gradually turning red. I am going to make things clear first. If anything really happens to Charlotte, the Carters will die along with her for the first time in his life. Dominic felt the threat of death facing the stern and grave-faced young man. He felt that his life was in danger. There was a trace of fear in Dominic's cloudy eyes. Lucas flicked his hand in. Dominic immediately slammed into the wall like a rag, covering his throat with his hand. Dominic coughed hard several times before he could catch his breath. He looked at Lucas with his eyes full of resentment and fear. Lucas glanced at him and Dominic immediately looked away in fright too. Don't know where Bryce is. Call him and tell him to bring Charlotte back in one piece. If SH is wounded, ill kill him. How dare you? At the door, a woman glared at Lucas furiously. If a cheap person like you dares to touch Bryce, I'll kill you. Before she could finish her words, Jordan kicked her downstairs and sent her flying far away. She passed out on the spot without even uttering another word. How dare you be rude to Lucas? You've got a death wish. Jordan roared furiously. Lucas was the god in Jordan's heart and he would never allow anyone to insult him. If Lucas hadn't instructed him not to kill anyone earlier, this woman would have died just now. Jordan's fierceness instantly subdued all those still wanting to resist, and they all looked at Lucas with fear in their eyes. Dominic looked at Lucas' expressionless face, swallowed a mouthful of saliva, and then took out his phone to call Bryce. With shaky fingers at this moment, Bryce was sitting in a club called Lux and smiling lewdly at a burly man with the unconscious Charlotte lying beside them on the couch. Mr. Douglas, my cousin is quite pretty, isn't she? Bryce asked with a subservient smile. The person addressed as Mr. Douglas stretched his fingers out and pinched Charlotte's face, feeling the tenderness of her flesh. He nodded in satisfaction. SH is indeed very beautiful, but kid, you are really ruthless. How you are willing to give your cousin away. It's all for you, Mr. Douglas. Besides, this girl is really recalcitrant and I am just teaching her a lesson. Bryce hurriedly said, if not for the fact that he and Charlotte were cousins in name, and it would be inappropriate if word were to get out, he would have bedded Charlotte right away instead of getting Mr. Douglas to do it anyway. His intention was just to take some explicit photos and videos of Charlotte before using them to threaten her into pleading with the Sawyers for him. HMPH, not bad. Don't worry, as long as this girl serves me well tonight, I'll definitely offer you some benefits in the future, said Douglas, acting as if he was showing him some kindness. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Douglas. I won't get in your way. Then just send me the photos and videos later, Bryce said gleefully. Hurry up and get lost. After saying that, he eagerly rushed to rip off Charlotte's clothes. Charlotte suddenly retched and vomited. She had drunk a lot of alcohol in the bar alone just now, and so she threw up while lying on the couch. Not only did she soil her own clothes, but her vomit also caused the entire private room to be full of the pungent stench of vomit. Shit. Douglas hurriedly dodged in annoyance. Mr. Douglas, don't worry, I'll get someone to come and clean her up immediately. Please go to another room. I'll send her to the new room as soon as possible. Bryce hurriedly got 2 service attendants to come and take Charlotte away to clean her up. At this moment, he received a call from Dominic. Bryce, where are you? What exactly did you do to Charlotte? Hurry up and bring her back, Dominic hurriedly yelled as soon as the call connected. On the other hand, Bryce exclaimed with excitement, Grandpa, don't worry, I will complete the task you've given me as soon as possible. I'll get Charlotte to plead with the Sawyers. Bryce's words made Dominic feel like he had plunged into ice while Lucas' gaze turned icy cold. Bastard, hurry up and bring her back. Do you hear me? Otherwise both of us will die a miserable death, Dominic hollered at the top of his lungs. From the moment Lucas came to his door to ask about Bryce and Charlotte's whereabouts, Dominic had already had an ominous premonition. If Bryce really did something horrid to Charlotte, Dominic was certain that Lucas would really kill them. At this moment, Dominic was truly terrified and could only pray that his grandson hadn't done anything outrageous yet. However, Bryce was extremely indignant. He had already reached the crucial point of his plan, and Mr. Douglas was already waiting. He couldn't just bring Charlotte home. Grandpa, Charlotte is with Mr. Douglas at the Lux. She won't be back tonight. Just stay out of it anyway. I will definitely complete the task and get her to go to the Sawyers. After saying that, Bryce hung up directly without waiting for Dominic to continue speaking. Hello, Bryce. Bryce, Dominic shouted into the phone several times and even tried to call him again. Unfortunately, Bryce hung up right away and he could no longer reach him. Dominic's body shivered. He could clearly sense the terrifying aura coming from Lucas. Since your grandson is seeking his own death, then you can't blame me. Lucas turned around and left. Wait, Dominic was shocked and hurriedly shouted, please let him go. He's still insensible. Insensible. Lucas turned around and continued in an icy cold voice. He's much older than Charlotte and Cheyenne. If anything really happens to Charlotte, wait to collect his corpse. Lucas stopped bothering to listen to Dominic's nonsense and led Jordan straight out of the Carter's home. Head to the Lux as fast as you can, Lucas ordered Jordan after getting in the car. Yes, Lucas. The black Jaguar instantly disappeared into the darkness of the night like a swift cheetah. Chapter 54 The Lux. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. In a certain corner of the lobby on the first floor of the Lux, Bryce was holding a scantily clad escort. Usually he would have flirted with her merrily, but today he was rather distracted. Bryce reckoned that Charlotte should have already been cleaned and sent to Mr. Douglas' room by now, but the photos and videos he wanted hadn't been sent to him yet, so he felt uneasy. Besides, for some reason Dominic's voice made him feel vaguely agitated. Damn it, what am I feeling so agitated for? When I get those photos tomorrow and force that bitch Charlotte to go to the Sawyers to put in a good word for us, or else the Carters Will end up with nothing. Bryce clenched his teeth, grabbed the beautiful woman beside him forcefully, and raised his head to down a glass of alcohol. At this moment the black Jaguar sped toward the Lux, and came to a halt at the entrance. After a sharp drift, two figures got out of the car and hurriedly stepped into the club. Bryce happened to be facing the direction of the door, and when he saw Lucas enter, he couldn't help but be shocked. Lucas, good for nothing. Do you actually have the money to come to a place like the Lux? Then he smiled joyously. HMPH, does that stupid bitch Cheyenne know that her loser husband is spending her money on fooling around? TSK. At this moment Bryce's phone rang. Again it was a call from Dominic. He initially wanted to reject it, but thinking that the task was about to be completed, he decided that it was time to break the good news to him. Hello Grandpa, don't worry, the deed is almost done. Once I get hold of the video and photos of Charlotte Carter, we won't be afraid that she won't listen to us. Dominic froze when he finally realized what Bryce was thinking. He was so furious that his face flushed. You bastard, who told you to do that to Charlotte? Do you really have a death wish? Hearing how furious and anxious his grandfather was, Bryce thought that he must have misunderstood something, so he hurriedly explained, Grandpa, I didn't do it. I gave her to Mr. Douglas at the Lux after he's done with her hell. Sent me the videos and photos. This matter will then be completed. Previously, with Dominic's approval, he had also colluded with outsiders to set Cheyenne up. Bryce felt that there must be something wrong this time. Besides, the Carter's crisis would be resolved soon, and he reckoned that Dominic would be glad about it. To his astonishment, Dominic was not happy to hear the news and instead lost his temper. You are really going to be the death of me? Hurry up and bring Charlotte back in one piece, Bryce said in displeasure. Grandpa, SH's already been sent to Mr. Douglas' room. How can I bring her back? Dominic was so furious that he almost vomited blood. Hurry up and leave. Then Lucas is rushing over to your side. Don't let him find you. Got it? Bryce finally realized that Lucas was not here to have fun but to look for Charlotte. That's interesting. The Lux belongs to Mr. Douglas. If Lucas tries to look for Charlotte here, he naturally won't be able to take her away. Besides, Mr. Douglas will definitely make sure that he won't be able to bear the consequences of creating trouble here. Bryce suddenly got excited and exclaimed, Grandpa, Lucas is already here. I have to go and watch the fun. I hope Mr. Douglas beats him into a pulp. He'll get to take revenge for my broken wrist. After saying that, Bryce quickly hung up, eager to see how badly Lucas had been beaten up. Hello, Dominic yelled while holding his phone and trembling incessantly in exasperation. You are going to be the death of me. If Lucas nabs him, Bryce will be in huge trouble. Bryce was Dominic's only grandson, whom he regarded as the successor of the Carter family. If something were to happen to him, what was he supposed to do? While Dominic was anxious, Lucas and Jordan had already rushed straight to the fourth floor of the Lux, which was the VIP area, but was stopped by several security officers. I am sorry gentlemen, only VIP guests of the club can enter this floor. Lucas ignored him while Jordan stepped forward and barked, where are Brad Douglas and that woman he brought with him? The security officers looked at each other. His tone is so hostile. Is he here to create trouble? The burly men at the side immediately surrounded Jordan. After hearing his words, these burly men were professional fighters who worked for Douglas. Usually they were in charge of guarding and maintaining order in the Lux, solving all conflicts here. They were also the ones who took Charlotte away after crashing into the car in the Hummer. Brat, are you here to cause trouble? You should consider where this is. The burly man who was the leader glared hostilely at Lucas and Jordan. You've got a death wish? Jordan instantly appeared in front of the burly man like a bolt of lightning. He raised his arm and slapped the man hard on his face. The burly man shrieked as he was sent flying by Jordan's slap. He couldn't get up after a long time, and his face instantly swelled while two of his teeth fell out. Jordan's strike was as fast as lightning, and he had applied a lot of force, so these men who were usually the ones to beat others up couldn't help but feel a chill down their spines. Don't you guys know that this club is the property of the Douglas family? The burly men asked sternly. HMPH, were looking for Brad Douglas. Where is he? Jordan questioned. Seeing that Lucas was losing his patience, Jordan decided not to give them any more chances. He clenched his fists with cracking sounds. They were both emitting an incomparably terrifying aura, making the burly men too scared to fight them. They simply stood in front of Lucas and Jordan and broke out into cold sweat. The Carter family was just a small family, and even Bryce, the scion, had to bow down and treat them with respect. The woman they abducted had gotten kicked out of her family too. How could there be such powerful people looking for her? As Lucas took a step forward, the burly men immediately felt oppressed and their hearts began ricocheting violently. They no longer had the intention to resist. Mr. Douglas is in the room inside. So is that woman. The burly men hurriedly spilled the beans, fearing that the terrifying man in front of them would crush them into bits if they were slow. At this moment, in a luxurious room at the innermost part of the VIP floor, Charlotte was lying unconscious on a bed with a man beside her staring at her with strong desire in his eyes. Chapter 55. Tell him to come here. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. The two attendants had already cleaned up the vomit on Charlotte's body and changed her into a translucent silk nightgown that accentuated her figure. At the side, Brad Douglas rubbed his hands and placed a camcorder on the table opposite the bed with the camera facing Charlotte lying on the large bed. He then walked step by step toward her while admiring her curves under the nightgown. His breathing became heavier and the desire in his eyes intensified. Unfortunately, Charlotte, who was still in a drowsy state and had her eyes tightly shut, was oblivious to the impending danger. Ha ha ha, beautiful babe, I am coming. Douglas swallowed a mouthful of saliva and leaped toward Charlotte as soon as he ripped off his pants. At this moment, the door of the private room was kicked open with a loud bang. Throwing the door off its hinges, shocked Douglas turned around and yelled ferociously, who is it? Lux was his turf, but someone actually kicked his door. This person is too insolent. In the corridor, Outside, the two rogues leading the way were even more frightened by Lucas' kick, so much so that their hair stood on end. Lucas managed to send the steel door flying with a single kick. If he were to kick them, they would die. They were certain that their bones were much weaker than steel. Luckily, they were smart enough not to continue going against the two terrifying men. Lucas quickly glanced around the room and was relieved when he saw Charlotte lying on the bed in a nightgown and Douglas still wearing his briefs. Fortunately, he had arrived in time and Charlotte hadn't been violated. Kid, who do you think you are? How dare you come and ruin things for me? Are you tired of living? Douglas barked while glaring at Lucas gloomily, wishing he could rip him apart. He was interrupted right before he was about to enjoy a night with the beautiful Charlotte, greatly displeasing him. In particular, Lucas was creating a huge mess and ruckus on his turf. It was clearly a slap to his face. You should be thankful that you haven't touched her, otherwise you wouldn't be standing here right now, Lucas said indifferently. Damn it, you arrogant bastard. Douglas raised his hand in fury and smacked the hidden button on the wall. In an instant, about 20 ferocious henchmen charged in with menacing auras. Beat these two people, leave them at their last breaths, and then break one of their hands each before throwing them out. Seeing that his subordinates had come over, Douglas was extremely conceited. After ordering them, he sat on the couch at the side and began smoking a cigar leisurely. This was the only fate troublemakers would suffer after creating a ruckus here. HMPH, break our hands. Lucas glanced at the henchman and remained composed. Not phased at all, he snorted. Since you like hands so much, all of you will stay. Jordan, break both their hands. Yes, Lucas, Jordan exclaimed with excitement. In his eyes, it had been a long time since he got to hit someone like a phantom. He instantly appeared beside one of the henchmen before they could see Jordan's movements clearly. The crisp sounds of bones being snapped rang out, followed by miserable cries from the henchman whose wrists had been crushed. Ah, my arms. The intense pain on his wrists caused the tall and burly henchman to kneel on the ground and break out into cold sweat immediately before the shock could appear on pay others' faces. Jordan's figure reappeared beside another henchman like a bolt of lightning. No one could evade him at all. Kaka kacha kaka. The crunching sound of bones being crushed one after another resounded in the room, and the henchmen began wailing one after another. Finally, someone was so terrified that he wanted to flee, but before he could run away, the terrifying hand of death that was like an iron clam landed on his wrists and crushed his bones right away. Help! Ah, there! Miserable cries rang out one after another. In an instant, the nearly 20 burly henchmen fell to their knees and began wailing while clutching their broken wrists. The cigar in Douglas' mouth had fallen to the ground, and he couldn't help but shiver, frightened by the scene before him. He no longer felt fearless and bold like he was earlier, and was now as pale as a sheet. His lips trembled and his legs had already turned into jelly. He could not even utter a word now because Jordan and Lucas were both staring at him coldly. All of a sudden, Douglas' phone on the table began ringing. Lucas took a glance at the caller ID and sneered when he saw the words wastrel of the Carters. Bryce Carter. Yes. Douglas hurriedly nodded. Frantically answer the call. Douglas dared not defy Lucas' order and hurriedly reached his trembling finger out to painstakingly press the answer button. Mr. Douglas, are you done? Bryce asked. Why don't you send me a few photos? In the future you can toy with that woman however you like. Lucas snorted coldly. Bryce Carter really doesn't know any better. Frightened by Lucas' murderous snort, Douglas immediately fell to the ground holding his phone. He wished he could rip Bryce into pieces. Damn it, what a lousy idea from this dog. Bryce made him kidnap Charlotte and said that it was a special tribute to him, but instead of getting to enjoy sleeping with her, he ended up provoking two horrifying people. All the henchmen whom he had spent lots of money on had their wrists broken before they could even attack. Get him to come here, Lucas ordered coldly. Douglas was clenching his jaw with resentment, seeing that Lucas seemed to want to deal with Bryce. He frantically said, hurry up and get your ass here. After hanging up, Douglas hurriedly begged Lucas for mercy. I really don't know anything. That bastard Bryce Carter came to me for help and said that he would let me sleep with his cousin as long as I take some videos and photos of her. Had I known earlier that SH is related to you, I wouldn't have touched this beautiful girl. Mr. Douglas, are you looking for me? Bryce's voice abruptly ceased at the door. He thought that Douglas had called him up because he was done and was going to give him the photos and videos, but he was dumbfounded by the scene before him. What did he see? The burly henchmen in the room were rolling on the ground while the mighty Brad Douglas was kneeling in front of someone, and that someone was Lucas. Chapter 56. Paying people back in their own coin. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Bryce's legs instantly went weak and he knelt on the ground. Everything in front of him made him suspect that his world had become fantastical. Brad Douglas is actually kneeling in front of Lucas. Lucas glanced at Bryce indifferently as though he was looking at something dead. He looked back at Douglas, who was lying on the ground. You said he came to you for help. In that case, was he the one who instigated you to handle the incident 6 years ago? Which incident? Douglas was a bit confused. For a moment over the years, Bryce had approached him and asked him to do many sordid things. All of a sudden he couldn't guess which one Lucas was referring to. Cheyenne Carter, the Brilliance Corporation, Lucas reminded snappily. Oh, as soon as he heard Cheyenne's name, Douglas instantly remembered and nodded frantically. Yes, Bryce made me do it. At that time he wanted to encroach on the Brilliance Corporation and snatch it away from Cheyenne Carter, so he came to me and asked me to help him get some drugs. Afterward, due to a freak combination of factors, Cheyenne got involved with a lowly chauffeur. Later on, Cheyenne became pregnant and Bryce got us to go make trouble. That woman was so angry that she ended up going into premature labor, resulting in them taking over the Brilliance Corporation. Douglas was afraid of Lucas and almost immediately answered all the questions asked. Lucas' face got increasingly gloomy. At the end he began glaring daggers while smashing his fists on the wall, causing a large cobweb-like crack to appear on the finely furnished wall with a pit the size of a basin in the middle. Douglas instantly fell silent, not daring to continue. Meanwhile, Bryce's fear intensified and he almost got shocked into peeing his pants. Douglas was clearly terrified of Lucas too. Lucas and Jordan had clearly attacked the henchman, clutching their broken wrists in the room. In that case, what will happen to me? At the thought of how much he had been bullying Cheyenne over the past few days, the insults he had hurled at Lucas, the misdeeds he had done to Cheyenne back then, and how he had just tried to set up Charlotte, Bryce's heart immediately began ricocheting violently as cold sweat surged out of his body. He felt a warm and moist sensation in his lower body at this moment. Bryce recalled everything that Dominic had said to him over the phone earlier. Lucas Gray has gone to look for you. Hurry up and leave. Don't let him find you. Now he finally knew why Dominic gave him this warning. It was because Lucas was really too terrifying at this moment. Bryce was full of regret. He regretted not listening to his grandfather's warning and not bringing Charlotte back home earlier. He even regretted digging his own grave by provoking and offending Lucas. Lucas, I know I did something wrong. Please let me off, Bryce pleaded. Spinelessly, Lucas glared at him coldly and sent him flying. With a kick, he slammed against the door frame and immediately spat out a mouthful of blood. Then Lucas kicked Douglas until he wailed endlessly. Of course, this was the result of Lucas restraining his strength, otherwise both of them would have died long ago. Lucas obviously wouldn't let them die, but he didn't plan to let them off either. HMPH, don't you guys like playing such tricks? Go ahead and have a taste of your own medicine. Then Lucas turned his head to face Jordan. Carry them both to the room at the side and feed them their own drugs. Remember to record a video. Thinking about that image, Jordan couldn't help but shudder in disgust. However, in order to deal with such people, they had to pay them back in their own coin. Soon Jordan enthusiastically carried both of them to the room next door, bringing with him a camera and the bottle of medicine. Before long, bizarre sounds of pain mixed with pleasure came from the room next door. The henchmen on the ground couldn't help but shiver when they heard the sounds. They didn't even dare to shriek in pain. This man is too terrifying. Soon Jordan came out with a camera. Damn it, it was such an eyesore. I have to wash my eyes when I get back, Jordan exclaimed with a look of disgust. Lucas, what do we do with this? Put it on the internet with their names spelled out. Make sure their faces are in HD. Yes, Jordan put the camera away excitedly. The henchmen were frightened too ruthless. Not only did they film such a video and decide to put it on the internet, but they also wanted to make sure their faces were in HD and clearly seen. The two of them were going to be shamed thoroughly, and they would never have the cheek to face others again. Even their families would be disgraced by them. Lucas looked at the group of horrified henchmen and barked, get lost. The henchmen immediately stopped rolling around and wailing as if their pressure had suddenly been released. They hurriedly got up and scrambled out of the room in panic, fearing that Lucas would change his mind if they were too slow. After everyone was gone, Lucas walked over to the bed. He frowned and draped a large bathrobe over Charlotte's translucent and revealing nightgown. Lucas was utterly disgusted by Bryce and Douglas' behavior. As men, they actually resorted to using such despicable tricks on women. Not only did they ruin the women, they even recorded videos and photos to threaten them. They were worse than beasts. Back then they successfully set up Cheyenne, but something went wrong in between and Lucas was made to take responsibility for her. Otherwise Cheyenne would have had her company taken away from her due to her premature labor. Instead, she would have had explicit photos taken and used against her. Her life would have been ruined. Charlotte ended up in such a setup today too. If he hadn't rushed here in time, she would have really had her body and reputation tarnished by Douglas. Charlotte might not be able to endure having the explicit photos taken, while Cheyenne would be sad for life because of what happened to her sister. They deserved to be punished harshly. Taking a deep breath and forcing himself to suppress the anger within, Lucas bent over and pinched Charlotte's temple skillfully. This was a method he had learned in the military, which was very effective for awakening unconscious people. Indeed, after Lucas pressed a few times, Charlotte's eyelashes fluttered and she slowly opened her eyes. Charlotte clearly still hadn't gotten a clear idea of the situation yet. The moment before she passed out, she was still sitting in Sophie's car. Afterwards, something seemed to have rammed into her. Charlotte blinked, sat up and then realized that the bathrobe draped over her had already slid off, revealing her translucent nightgown. To her horror, she wasn't wearing anything underneath. Ah, Charlotte screamed. She covered her chest and slapped Lucas, who was in front of her. You are shameless. Chapter 57. Heartwarming family. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. A trace of anger surfaced on Lucas' stunned face, but he immediately saw Charlotte picking up her bathrobe anxiously. Before starting to wail like a child, he instantly curbed his anger. You have the wrong idea. I'll call your sister over. You still have the cheek to call my sister to come, you bastard. Lucas didn't bother paying attention to her again. He simply called Cheyenne and told her the address of the Lux. Lucas originally wanted Jordan to go and pick her up, but she had been extremely worried at home for a long time now that she had received some news about her younger sister. How could she continue waiting? She simply said that she would call a cab and rush over immediately. Lucas asked Jordan to wait for Cheyenne downstairs so that she would run into some idiots when arriving at the club. Soon after, Cheyenne rushed up from downstairs under Jordan's escort. Where's Charlotte? Cheyenne asked worriedly. Inside, Lucas tipped his head toward the room behind him. Cheyenne dashed in immediately. Cheyenne, upon seeing her sister Charlotte, hugged her and cried her heart out. Cheyenne hugged her for a while to comfort her and confirmed that her younger sister hadn't been violated. Charlotte finally calmed down and said sobbingly, Cheyenne, Lucas is a bastard. Just now if I hadn't woken up, he would have gotten what he wanted. He even had the cheek to call you to come. Cheyenne, you have to leave a scumbag like him. Cheyenne was caught between laughter and tears. Charlotte, there must be some misunderstanding. Lucas came to save you. If it weren't for him, you would have really been in Danger! Charlotte was instantly stunned. Before she passed out, she was still in Sophie's car, and when she woke up again, she saw Lucas right in front of her while she was surrounded by a strange aura. Her clothes had also been changed into a skimpy nightgown, so she subconsciously thought it was Lucas who brought her here and committed some disgusting acts on her, yet it turned out that Lucas was here to rescue her. How did I end up here then? Charlotte hurriedly asked. Cheyenne told her in general everything that happened earlier. After hearing this, Charlotte clenched her fist fiercely and punched the bed. Gritting her teeth, she barked, Bryce Carter, it's all his fault. I am not going to spare him. However, when she thought about the slap she had just given Lucas, Charlotte felt extremely remorseful. Cheyenne, I am sorry, I misunderstood Lucas just now and slapped him. Oh, Cheyenne was at her loss for words and merely coughed twice. He won't blame you. Let's hurry home. After they cleaned up and came out, Lucas seemed to be acting as per usual. It's late, I'll send you guys back. Charlotte blushed and followed him, together with Cheyenne feeling grateful yet embarrassed. She wanted to apologize but didn't know how to, so she felt very complicated. By the time Lucas drove them to the entrance of the Carters' old residence, it was already almost midnight. Karen and William had no idea that Charlotte had been kidnapped and almost violated tonight, so they had already fallen asleep. Cheyenne looked at Lucas and hesitated for a moment before saying, do you want to stay with Amelia tonight? She hasn't seen you all day today and she kept clamoring about you before she went to bed. Lucas saved Charlotte tonight, but he ended up getting slapped by her because of a misunderstanding. While feeling grateful, Cheyenne felt bad too. Biting her lip and looking at Lucas, Charlotte suddenly said, Lucas, just stay. Seeing both Cheyenne and Lucas look at her in surprise because of what she said, Charlotte hurriedly turned around and scurried upstairs. I am going to take a shower first. You guys rest early too. Seeing her reaction, Cheyenne shook her head helplessly. Soon the two of them went back upstairs to Cheyenne's room. As soon as they entered, Amelia, who was lying on the bed, rubbed her eyes and got up. Mommy, you are back. When Amelia saw Lucas beside Cheyenne, her eyes instantly lit up in surprise and she was suddenly awake. Daddy! Amelia leaped into Lucas' arms happily. Daddy, where were you today? I didn't see you all day. Lucas stroked her head. I was busy with something today. It's so late. Why are you still awake? I was waiting for you. Daddy! Mommy went out too. Mommy, did you go out to find Daddy just now? Is Daddy going to sleep with us tonight? Amelia blinked her large innocent eyes expectantly. Cheyenne's face turned red and she pretended to be angry. What nonsense are you saying? It's late. Quickly go to bed. Amelia leaned closer to Cheyenne and touched her face seriously with a look of worry. Mommy, your face is so warm. Are you sick again? Cheyenne had been running a high fever a few days ago, which had given Amelia a fright. Hearing Amelia's words, Cheyenne felt even more embarrassed. Fortunately, Lucas carried Amelia away. Good children have to sleep at night, otherwise if you can't get out of bed tomorrow, you'll be late for kindergarten. Amelia put her arms around Lucas' neck and smiled. It's Saturday tomorrow. I don't have to go to kindergarten. Lucas froze for a moment. Amelia continued, Mommy, Daddy, take me to the amusement park to play tomorrow. Other children often go there to play with their parents and take a lot of photos. I've never played at the amusement park with both of you. Amelia's voice grew softer, but there was some cautious anticipation in her eyes, as if she was afraid that Lucas would turn her down. Lucas felt heartache and was overwhelmed with guilt too. His daughter was already 6 years old, but he had never taken her out to play. He had indeed failed as a father. He turned his head to look at Cheyenne and asked for advice softly. What do you say we take Amelia out to the amusement park to play tomorrow? Okay, Cheyenne agreed with a nod without looking at him. After hearing this, Amelia leaped with joy and gave Lucas and Cheyenne each a kiss on their cheek. She was as happy as a lark seeing their daughter being on cloud nine over such a simple matter. Both Lucas and Cheyenne felt a little upset. Okay, cut it out, go to sleep quickly. If you get up late tomorrow, we won't be able to go to the amusement park. Cheyenne carried Amelia back to the inner side of the bed and covered her with the blanket. After hearing this, Amelia was so anxious that she hurriedly laid down obediently. Okay, good night, Mommy. Good night, Daddy. I am so happy. Soon Cheyenne slept on the same bed as Amelia as usual, while Lucas quietly lay on the mattress on the ground beside her. The room was silent except for the tender sounds of breathing that made Lucas' heart grow warmer. Chapter 58 Danger on the Bridge. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Bright early the next morning, many people tapped away on their phones or computers while eating breakfast to catch up with current affairs, only to be shocked speechless by a piece of groundbreaking news. They almost spat out the food in their mouths. The astonishing images, videos, high-definition faces, titles and articles that directly exposed the identity of the people involved in a scandal occupied the front pages of countless forums and social media platforms. All of a sudden, the scandal caused a huge uproar in Orange County. After all, the people involved in the scandal were famous figures with whom many in Orange County were familiar. Wow, oh my god, I didn't expect those two to be so disgusting. They even played with glass. TSK, aren't they the playboys? Brad Douglas and Bryce Carter. Everyone knows them. They seemed like decent people, but I didn't expect them to be so ugly. Countless people were discussing that matter and perceiving the Carter and Douglas families in a different light. When Dominic saw the images and footage of the news, he shook violently and almost vomited blood. Bryce, his grandson, whom he regarded as his successor, had done something so unsightly and outrageous that he became the laughingstock of the entire county. At this juncture, the butler of the Carters walked in and reported softly, Mr. Carter, Mr. Bryce Carter has returned, but he doesn't seem too well. Before the butler finished speaking, Dominic immediately lost his temper. Tell him to get lost, get him out of here from now on. Dominic Carter, will have nothing to do with Bryce Carter again. At the same time, the esteemed and authoritative patriarch of the prestigious Douglas family was also infuriated, as he slapped his hand on a table ferociously. Bastard, everyone in the county knows about your Scandal. Brad Douglas knelt in front of the old man, not even daring to breathe. However, he still tried to explain. Grandpa, I was set up by someone. He beat me up, drugged me and locked me up with that loser Bryce Carter. He even deliberately filmed those videos and spread them around. Who did it? The old man was even more furious when he heard this. Anyone who dares to do that to a Douglas must be tired of living. It's Lucas Gray, that useless son-in-law of the Carters. Brad gritted his teeth when he woke up last night. He had already looked for Bryce and forced him to reveal the culprit's identity. To be toyed like this by the live-in son-in-law of the Carters was his shame. HMPH, a loser like him managed to land you in this state. You are such a disappointment. If you can't settle this matter, you don't deserve to be my grandson, Mr. Douglas Sr. said coldly. Brad hung his head low and clenched his jaw. Don't worry, I will definitely get revenge on him. A resentful gleam of light darted out of his eyes. Lucas Gray, I must get revenge or I am not a human. At this moment, Lucas was taking Cheyenne and Amelia to the largest amusement park in Orange County. They first boarded the Ferris wheel, followed by the Viking ship, and lastly the carousel. Amelia, who was wearing a beautiful princess dress, was smiling elatedly. She finally went to the amusement park with her parents. Just like other kids along the way, she had been holding Cheyenne's hand with her left hand and Lucas' hand with her right, with pure bliss written all over her face. All of a sudden, Amelia stopped and placed their hands together. Daddy, Mommy hold each other's hands upon his hand, coming into contact with Cheyenne's small and tender hand. Lucas' heart skipped a beat while she felt helplessly embarrassed. She was about to retract her hand, but Amelia put their hands together tightly. Jamie told me that if Mommy and Daddy hold hands like this, they will soon have a little baby. Daddy, Mommy, hurry up and give me another little brother or sister so that I won't be an only child. Cheyenne's face instantly turned red and even her ears reddened. She quickly retracted her hand like she had been electrocuted. Children shouldn't be spouting nonsense, Cheyenne chided Amelia. Huh, is that wrong? Then how do little brothers and sisters come? Amelia asked, tilting her head in curiosity, looking at her daughter's innocent and expectant little face. Cheyenne couldn't resist her at all. She glared at Lucas angrily. Dumbstruck, Lucas laughed, finding the angry Cheyenne from embarrassment just as adorable as Amelia. He couldn't bear to let Cheyenne continue being embarrassed, so he picked Amelia up in his arms and ran forward. Quick, let's go watch the dolphin show. Wow, dolphins. As soon as Amelia heard that they were going to see dolphins, she immediately forgot about the things she just clamored about. Cheyenne let out a long sigh of relief watching the father and daughter duo running in front of her and laughing happily. She couldn't help smiling gently. After playing in the amusement park for more than half the day, Lucas and Cheyenne left together with Amelia, who was reluctant to leave. Lucas drove Cheyenne and Amelia home in his black Jaguar. After a day of fun, the three of them became closer as the car drove along. Amelia climbed in the back seat and snuggled up to Cheyenne while chattering happily about what she had seen today. Then she said to Cheyenne, Mommy, when will we go out to play with Daddy again? I am so happy today. Cheyenne pinched Amelia's little nose. We've already played for an entire day. Aren't you tired yet? The two of them laughed and played with each other in the back seat while Lucas watched them through the rearview mirror, the corners of his mouth curling into a smile. Suddenly, Lucas' gaze turned cold. On the bridge they were on, a Hummer was speeding toward them diagonally from the lane beside them, trying to collide with the black Jaguar. Be careful. Hold on tight, Lucas exclaimed. He floored the gas pedal while turning the steering wheel, revving up the Jaguar and speeding off, avoiding the Hummer by a close shave. On the other hand, the Hummer couldn't brake in time because of its enormous momentum and thus crashed directly into the bridge railing and then into the river below. Are you guys alright? Lucas immediately turned around to check on Cheyenne and Amelia. After pulling over to the side of the road, scared soulless Cheyenne hugged Amelia tightly and had turned as pale as a sheet from the fright. In contrast, Amelia hadn't realized the danger they were in just now and was simply shocked because she thought that Lucas had braked in an emergency. Luckily, both of them had their seat belts securely fastened and were not injured. With lingering fear, Cheyenne turned around, looked at the destroyed bridge railing and asked softly, what's the matter with that car? Lucas shook his head, pretending to be thankful to have escaped a close shave with death. No idea, maybe the brakes broke. It was so close to hitting our car. Looking at the vast river worriedly, Cheyenne said, I wonder how the driver is doing. They were on the bridge and couldn't see what was going on in the river below. Someone over there has already called the police. The police and rescue teams should be arriving soon. We'd better go first or the road will be closed later, Lucas said. Cheyenne nodded. She hugged her daughter tightly, feeling fortunate. Lucas restarted the car, but this time his eyes were ice cold. Chapter 59. Creating a Ruckus. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Lucas knew very well that this was definitely not an accident, but rather someone had deliberately tried to crash into them to kill them. Given the size and speed of the Hummer just now, they would have either been pushed to the edge of the bridge or knocked over and dropped into the river below. If Lucas hadn't reacted quickly and dodged early, if he were alone, he could still escape from the danger, but there were two vulnerable females in the car. They were also the two people he loved the most. They were his weakness and no one was allowed to touch them. A figure dived silently into the river below the bridge and swam to the Hummer that was gradually sinking into the water. He then punched the window to break it and pulled the driver out. After swimming to the shallow waters hundreds of meters away, the figure finally dragged the driver, who was about to drown and suffocate, ashore. The figure was Jordan, Lucas' right-hand man. Jordan turned the driver's body face up and stepped on his stomach. Immediately afterward, a large amount of river water mixed with mud and sand surged out of the driver's mouth and nostrils. The driver came to and coughed violently, coughing up the water in his stomach. After the driver was almost done, Jordan stepped hard on his stomach and questioned, Speak. Who put you to it? The driver just had a near-death experience. As he stared at Jordan towering above His face turned even paler. I don't know what you are talking about. You still don't want to come. Clean her. Without hesitation, Jordan picked up the driver by his collar and pressed his head toward the water. If you don't say anything, you can stay inside watching the icy cold river water getting closer and closer to him. The driver, who just experienced drowning, immediately shrieked in terror and began struggling. However, Jordan was pressing his hand hard against the driver's neck, rendering him unable to struggle. Seeing that his head was about to be pressed into the water again, the driver no longer cared about anything else. He simply broke down and started yelling loudly, He'll speak up. Please spare my life, Terrier. The driver begged for mercy. Jordan pulled his head up slightly with one hand and ordered, Speak. It was Mr. D. Douglas. Brad Douglas was the one who instructed me to hit that car. Lucas sent Cheyenne and Amelia back home and watched the two of them enter the house, but he didn't stay behind Lucas. Just as Lucas was about to drive away, Cheyenne suddenly called out to stop him. Do you have something to do now? Cheyenne asked hesitantly. Lucas nodded. Yes, I have some trivial matters to handle. You were the one who did those things to the Carters recently, right? Cheyenne asked, her jaws clenched. Since Cheyenne asked, Lucas did not intend to hide it from her. He nodded. Yes, but they deserve it. Cheyenne hesitated for a while but nevertheless said, Can you let them off? They must have learned their lesson from what happened lately. It was not that Cheyenne was being a saint, but rather she had grown up with the Carters after all, and those people used to be her relatives. She still cared about their kinship and didn't want to take things too far. Lucas looked at Cheyenne affectionately and nodded okay. When Lucas was driving in halfway into his journey, Jordan called, Lucas, the culprit is really that bastard Brad Douglas. HMPH as expected. Lucas snorted coldly. He stepped on the gas pedal and sped to the Lux maniacally. Seems like Brad Douglas hasn't learned his lesson yet. Lucas wasn't fazed by the fact that Douglas was a member of a first-tier family that commanded great power among the gangs in Orange County. Anyone who dared to harm the two people he cherished the most and put them in danger deserved to die. At this moment, Douglas was sitting in the Lux with a menacing expression. The incident last night made him utterly embarrassed and even left him in great pain, especially in his private area. He couldn't even sit properly without feeling agony. Mr. Douglas, that bastard must be dead now. Even if he didn't die from the collision, he must have died from drowning. Our people also deliberately created some obstacles on the road so that the rescue vehicles wouldn't be able to get there in time, said an underling. It was too easy for him. I heard that his beautiful wife Cheyenne Carter was also in the car. It's quite a pity she died with him. Otherwise it'd be nice to toy with the former greatest beauty of Orange County. Douglas gibed as he puffed out a mouthful of a cigar. Haha, Mr. Douglas, you can get any kind of woman you want. The one yesterday's Cheyenne's sister SH is quite pretty too. If you'd like, I'll get her immediately. A few of his underlings were hurriedly trying to curry favor with him. Haha, good, yesterday that bastard messed things up for me and even incurred my wrath. I must get that woman over here again too. Let's see who'll try getting in my way again. Douglas began laughing without restraint while people around him egged him on. At this moment, the black Jaguar stopped at the entrance of the Lux. Lucas stepped out of the car and Jordan, who had been waiting at the side, immediately greeted him. Lucas, tell me what to do. Lux looked up at the luxurious Lux clubhouse with an icy cold gaze. Smash it. Upon receiving the order, Jordan immediately charged forward without hesitation and kicked the exquisite door and the stone monument with the word Lux carved on it, smashing them into pieces. Flying stone debris smashed against the huge tempered glass door with a loud bang and glass shards scattered all over the floor. The numerous people in the club were frightened by the sudden noise and started screaming loudly. Several security officers and henchmen immediately came over. Who are you people? How dare you make trouble at the club? Get lost. All they received in response was a series of sounds of things breaking. Jordan broke a stool leg in his hand and smashed everything in sight. He smashed the opulent bar counter. He smashed the wine cabinet full of famous and expensive alcohol. He smashed the dazzling chandelier. He smashed the tables, windows, chairs and other furniture. Everyone in the club frantically scurried out, shrieking, Damn it, these two are here to cause trouble. Just beat them to death. A henchman as burly as a tower immediately hollered. More than 10 of his subordinates rushed over from all directions. Lucas snorted coldly. Brad Douglas, 20-odd henchmen got their wrists broken yesterday and definitely can't make it to work today. He probably hired these backup goons from somewhere. They really don't know any better. Jordan charged forward and shuttled through the people as quick as a phantom. In less than a moment, 10-odd people had their wrists snapped just like those yesterday. One of the henchmen scrambled into the private room where Douglas was and exclaimed in a fluster, Bad news, Mr. Douglas, the two people from yesterday are here again. Chapter 60. Paying the price. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Hearing his underlings report, Douglas immediately stood up and asked with a glowering expression, What did you say? Are you sure it's those two from yesterday? The underling nodded profusely in horror. Yes, it's those two from yesterday. I wouldn't recognize them wrongly. They are currently smashing the things in the main hall of the first floor and the guests are terrified. Douglas kicked the coffee table furiously, but he accidentally touched his hidden injury, making him fly into a rage. Didn't you say that Lucas Gray was knocked off the bridge? Why is he still alive? The one who came to report the matter earlier didn't seem too well, and cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He indeed fell into the river. We saw from afar that he fell off the bridge and plunged into the river. The rescue teams rushed over, but they were stopped. Bam! Douglas slapped the underling hard on the face. Bullshit. If he really plunged into the river and drowned to death, are the ones here creating trouble. Ghosts, you trash. Douglas was just celebrating the fact that he had killed Lucas and took revenge, but now they were here slapping him in his face. Let's go, gather everyone and go down with me. I refuse to believe he can defeat us, Douglas exclaimed as he hurried downstairs with a furious and menacing expression. At this moment, The people in the hall below were all badly bashed up by Jordan and broken glass wine bottles. Ceiling lights and shattered debris of furniture covered the ground. The initially luxurious hall was smashed and ended up looking like a garbage dump. Today Douglas had just hired more than 10 henchmen, but they were all currently rolling in pain on the ground with broken wrists. Seeing this, Douglas was overwhelmed with exasperation. Those bastards, damn it, beat them. Hearing Douglas' order, his underlings behind, who were all holding steel rods and weapons, immediately charged forward. HMPH. You must have a death wish. Before Lucas said anything, Jordan picked up a chair and rushed over. His movements were far quicker than Douglas' underlings. Before the underlings' weapons could hit him, the leg of Jordan's chair had already slammed onto their wrists and thighs. Bang! Ahwa! With Jordan's fast and accurate hits, the dozen or so people who rushed up all shrieked in pain miserably as they dropped their weapons and started rolling on the ground, clutching their wrists and thighs and wailing loudly. Seeing this, Douglas became terrified and furious. The 10 odd people holding weapons actually failed to even harm Lucas in the slightest. Instead, they were beaten up by the other party. Stop, Lucas, what exactly are you trying to do? Douglas gritted his teeth and glared at Lucas while the fear and horror in his heart surged again. Like yesterday, what do I want to do? Aren't you aware of what you got someone to do today? Lucas looked at Douglas with an icy cold glare. On that bridge today, his wife and daughter had had a close shave with death. How could Lucas let Douglas off easily? Douglas suddenly choked. He had sent someone to run over Lucas and his wife and daughter with a car. But his plan failed and Lucas was now at his door and seeking revenge. This was totally out of his expectations. Facing Lucas' icy cold eyes, Douglas subconsciously took a few steps back. There must be some misunderstanding somewhere. Actually, there's no unresolvable feud between us. Why don't we sit down and have a good talk? What do you think? Despite saying that, Douglas didn't really plan to bury the hatchet. He would never forget the shame Lucas had brought him last night. He would never spare Lucas. When they sat down to chat, he would have someone spike Lucas' drink and then get his subordinates to make him have a taste of his own medicine. Once he was done taking revenge, he would make him vanish forever. Lucas sneered and glanced at Douglas in disdain as if he had seen through his thoughts. Have a good talk. Who are you to do that with me? Lucas gripped the wine bottle on the table next to him and fiercely smashed it on Douglas' head. Smack! With a crisp sound, the bottle shattered and cut open Douglas' head. Crimson blood began gushing out from the top of his head. After being stunned for a while, Douglas touched his bloodied head and glowered at Lucas furiously. You, how dare you? HMPH, you'd better remember this. If you dare to provoke me and the people I care about again, it'll definitely make your life a living hell. Lucas kicked Douglas in his knees, twisting his legs into a warped angle and made him tumble out far, far away without being able to utter a single word. Douglas passed out. Everyone in the room was scared into silence, not daring to breathe a single word, as they watched Lucas and Jordan leave. Too terrifying. Only when the figures of these two people had completely disappeared did someone from the Lux quickly take Douglas to the hospital. Soon Brad, Douglas' father, Gordon Douglas, hurried to the hospital when he saw his son, whose head was wrapped in bandages and legs were covered with casts. Gordon Douglas was infuriated. In Orange County, no one had ever disrespected the Douglas family or had the guts to beat his son so badly. Find him, get someone to find him. I must take revenge and kill him. At this moment, Lucas was already on his way back to the lakeside villa with Jordan. He was covered in blood just now, so he didn't want to go back to the Carters lest Cheyenne and Amelia saw the state he was in. Thinking about Cheyenne's request for him to let the Carters off today, Lucas called Flynn Davis and gave him some instructions. After taking a shower, Lucas stood by the railing on a balcony and looked at the sparkling lake outside with a bitter smile. Previously, he proposed to Cheyenne at the Intercontinental Hotel but was turned down by her. Later on, he revealed his identity to her and wanted to return the Brilliance Corporation to her. Unfortunately, Cheyenne refused to accept it. Cheyenne had always had a strong backbone and wasn't willing to accept favors for nothing. She merely said that she would go to the Brilliance Corporation, but she hoped to work her way up to her former position from the bottom. Cheyenne was determined, so Lucas had no choice but to give in. This was how kind-hearted, intelligent, and independent the woman he loved was. The following morning, Dominic Carter, who had stayed up all night, suddenly received an excellent piece of news. The Brilliance Corporation, which the Stardust Corporation had snatched away, suddenly gave the Carters an offer to become the guarantor of their debts and even decided to sign a cooperative contract with them. Chapter 61. Treat you to a meal. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. When a member of the family came in to report the good news, Dominic was so excited that his fingers began trembling. He asked profusely, really, are you not lying to me? The family member nodded agitatedly. Yes, the Brilliance Corporation has really decided to cooperate with us and they have already sent someone over to sign the contract with us. Our factories are also back in operation and the bank has decided to give us some leeway for the loan repayment because the Brilliance Corporation has decided to be our guarantor. They are no longer going to apply for compulsory execution. Good. Dominic was so excited that he rubbed his hands together. The Carter's crisis would be resolved at this moment. Another family member hurried in. Good news, Mr. Carter Sr. The companies that previously terminated their partnerships with us have called to resume their cooperation with us. Great, wonderful. The Carters have finally gotten through this ordeal. Dominic's face reddened in excitement. All the Carters were overjoyed after surviving this calamity. God knows how hard it had been for them the past 2 days. They almost wanted to leave the family and find their own way out. Bryce deserves credit for this matter. A woman's voice suddenly sounded. It was Bryce Carter's mother, Sarah Hadley. At the mention of Bryce, Dominic's face immediately turned gloomy again. Don't mention that sinful bastard in front of me. That impudent bastard acted presumptuously and got embroiled in a scandal that embarrassed us greatly. Sarah began pouting aggrievedly. Dominic, you know very well that someone set Bryce up. If That loser Lucas Gray hadn't spiked Bryce's and Brad Douglas drinks and even filmed a video of them. They wouldn't have ended up like that. Besides, if Lucas hadn't suddenly gone to create trouble that day, the crisis the Carters faced might have been resolved 2 days ago. With a few words, Sarah blamed everything on Lucas and reminded Dominic of the horror he experienced when Lucas broke into the Carters' main residence and strangled him. He was now full of fear and hatred toward Lucas. Sarah Hadley looked at Dominic's face and continued, Bryce was chased out of the family and he's very upset. Too, yesterday he was going around running errands for the Carters. Doesn't he deserve any credit also? Bryce is your only grandson. After all, it's right for you to be angry with him and you can teach him a lesson as much as you'd like, but can you really bear to drive him out of the family? Sarah pretended to wipe her tears. Dominic felt conflicted as well. Bryce was his only direct descendant, and he would definitely take over the family in the future. Yesterday he chased Bryce out of his family only because of a moment of folly, but he mainly wanted to teach Bryce a lesson and did not really want to disown him. Seeing Sarah keep pleading for mercy and several other family members also helping him, Dominic sighed and agreed, okay, since you are all pleading for him, I'll give him another chance, but if he creates any trouble or disgraces the family again, don't blame me for being ruthless. Yes, definitely, I'll also take Bryce in hand and make sure he listens to you. Sarah agreed frantically with a joyful expression. On the other hand, after hearing Dominic's decision to let him return to the family, Bryce simply felt that should have been the case anyway. He was Dominic Carter's only biological grandson and the entire family would be handed over to him in the future, so how could Dominic really drive him out? Lucas is too despicable. He went against me and ruined things for me. He even made me become the laughingstock of the entire county. Bryce swore that he would never let Lucas off easily. While the Carters were immersed in the joy of the family crisis being over, no one knew that it was only because Cheyenne had asked Lucas to give them a way out on account that they used to be family, otherwise the Carters would have long fallen apart. However, neither Lucas nor Cheyenne thought of letting the Carters find out the truth at this moment. Lucas suddenly received a phone call and the person who called was surprisingly Charlotte. Are you free now? I'd like to treat you to a meal. Charlotte's voice was shaky and she clearly felt uneasy. Lucas burst into laughter. Of course, he knew why Charlotte wanted to treat him to a meal out of the blue. He had saved her that day, but she got the wrong idea and even slapped him after Cheyenne explained it to her. Charlotte had been feeling very embarrassed and conflicted. She wanted to thank him and apologize to him, but in the end she was too shy to say anything. She should have mulled over it for a long time before finally calling him. Lucas smiled. He did not intend to hold it against Charlotte. There's no need to treat me to a meal. Before Lucas finished, Charlotte quickly interrupted him. I'll book a private room and be waiting for you at Lion Restaurant. After saying this, she hung up a phone. Lucas was caught between laughter and tears. How can she insist that I let her treat me to a meal? Nevertheless, Lucas arrived at Lion Restaurant at noon. The relationship between him and Cheyenne had finally become less strained and Charlotte mattered a lot to Cheyenne, so no matter what Lucas had to give in to Charlotte, Lion Restaurant was a long-established restaurant in Orange County, and it was famous for being the go-to place for banquets held by businessmen and ordinary patrons. As soon as Lucas got out of his car, he saw Charlotte waiting for him not far away. When she saw him, she finally heaved a sigh of relief, as if she was scared that he would come. Lucas walked over and touched his nose. Actually, there's really no need to do this. Charlotte glared at him. Since I said that I'd treat you to a meal, I have to honor it. I can still afford to treat you to a meal. Lucas was instantly dumbfounded and speechless. Well, Charlotte was actually not an annoying girl, but she was childish and arrogant. Lucas did not blame her for it. As they were about to enter the restaurant, a voice suddenly sounded from the side. Hush, Charlotte, it's really you. Gazing at Charlotte, a young man walked over with a gleeful expression. There was a woman with bouncy curly hair standing close beside him. They were obviously very intimate with each other. Charlotte's expression instantly changed when she saw the man. Afterward, she held onto Lucas' arm somewhat uneasily and smiled radiantly at the couple in front of her. Ah, it's you, Declan. I didn't expect to run into you here. Lucas was caught by surprise when Charlotte suddenly held onto his arm, but afterward Lucas felt Charlotte turning stiff. It seemed that there was some history between her and this man. Chapter 62 Coincidental Encounter in the Restaurant. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Declan Adams was tall and seemed to be around his mid-20s. His features were handsome and he dressed fashionably. Although he was a man, he put a lot of effort into skincare and he looked just like the young heir of a well-to-do family. The long-haired woman next to him was about the same age as him. Her face was covered in exquisite makeup and she was decked out in luxury designer labels such as Gucci, Chanel, Hermes and others. She was beautiful at first glance, but unfortunately her face was too plastic. She had obviously had cosmetic surgery on her eyelids, and Joe Declan's gaze lingered on Charlotte's arm for a second, after which he smiled and held onto the shoulder of the woman beside him. He introduced, "This is my wife, Estelle Brooke." Estelle snuggled up to Declan and sized Charlotte up. Well, introduced Charlotte, sensing Estelle's vague jealousy. Declan hurriedly put his hand on her waist to comfort her. "SH's Charlotte Carter, my schoolmate from college." Hearing Declan introduce her in this manner, Charlotte couldn't help but bite hard on her lower lip. "Ah, so it's Charlotte Carter." One heard Declan mentioning before that there was a schoolmate from college who had been courting him for years, but he never agreed. "I didn't expect it to be you." Estelle said these words smilingly and casually pretended to reveal a large diamond ring on her ring finger. Charlotte's smile stiffened. She did like Declan Adams back in college, but she felt mocked when his wife said it to her face and in such a sarcastic tone. It was worse, especially because even Declan seemed conceited. Charlotte was about to say goodbye when she heard Declan say, "It's a coincidence today, Estelle, and I happen to have Booked a private room here for a meal. You two should also come along. After all, it's been a long time since we've seen each other. After glancing at Declan, Estelle said, yeah, the Lion is the most famous and established restaurant in the city. It's noon now and it'll be hard to get a private room. Let's eat together. Declan and I will be bored if it's just the two of us. Charlotte was about to decline because she had already booked a private room long ago, but Lucas suddenly nodded sure. Then Charlotte immediately panicked, but since Lucas already spoke and agreed, she could not refute him in front of them, so she could only pinch Lucas' arm secretly. However, Lucas kept a straight face and wasn't bothered by it at all. Soon a waiter ushered them to a room on the second floor. After they were seated, Declan grabbed the menu and handed it to Estelle. Estelle, see if there's anything you'd like. You can order first. Estelle grabbed the menu smilingly, but she chided Declan, our guests are still here. How can I order first? She glanced at Charlotte and Lucas but remained still, not intending to hand the menu over to them. Were former classmate. What's the point of being so formal with each other? They won't mind, right? Declan held Estelle's waist as he kissed her forehead affectionately. He was directing his last question at Charlotte and Lucas. Back in the day, Charlotte used to bring me my meals for several months. When she was courting me, she never missed my breakfast or lunch. Unfortunately, I didn't reciprocate your feelings and shared the food with our classmate. Charlotte, you don't hold it against me, do you? Declan chuckled. Charlotte squeezed her own fingers tightly under the table, almost digging her nails into her flesh. She had once spent a lot of time and effort bringing food for him with her utmost sincerity. Every day she would get up early just to cook for him, no matter rain or shine, yet she ended up becoming a laughingstock. Charlotte remained silent, controlling her emotions was already extremely tough. Seeing the sullen expression on Charlotte's face, Estelle giggled provocatively and coquettishly. However, I really have to thank Miss Carter for being so nice to my husband. I also have to be thankful that Declan didn't give in to your pursuit, otherwise we wouldn't have gotten together and be living such a blissful life. Declan held Estelle in his arms gently. It's my honor to be able to marry you. The two of them were showing their affection for each other like nobody's business, while Charlotte clenched her jaw and said, I wish you conjugal bliss. Estelle suddenly seemed to realize that there were outsiders around, so she sat up straight shyly. Fortunately, you've found your better half too, Miss Carter. Are you married yet? How may I address this man beside you? Charlotte tried to calm herself down before saying calmly, not yet. His name is Lucas Gray. Oh, hello, Mr. Gray. We're both about the same age, so you don't mind me addressing you as Lucas, right? Declan chuckled. Lucas glared at Declan with a mirthless grin. It had been long since anyone talked to him in such a condescending manner. Besides, he was a few years older than Declan. But Declan talked down to him so haughtily, not at all bothered if Lucas minded it or not. Declan continued to ask in an arrogant tone, Lucas, where do you work now? Lucas smiled. I was a soldier for a few years, but I am now a freelancer. Hearing this, Declan's and Estelle's eyes were full of disdain. On the other hand, Charlotte glared at Lucas. Why do you have to be so honest? Freelancer, you mean unemployed? Estelle gibed, then covered her mouth while giggling. Lucas, that's not right. As a man, how can you loaf around? You don't want to be sponging off your wife, do you? Ah, I really do. Lucas nodded seriously as if he found that a great idea. Declan was instantly at a loss for words. He found Lucas handsome and sophisticated at first, but he didn't expect him to be an incompetent wastrel. Charlotte must regret not winning my heart and marrying a handsome and competent man like me. Declan was getting ahead of himself while thinking about it, and he even felt a tremendous sense of superiority. Chapter 63 Untitled. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Having confirmed that Lucas was a good for nothing, Declan could no longer be bothered to continue talking to him. He turned to look at Charlotte and asked, Charlotte, what are you doing now? Charlotte was already sick and tired of Declan's attempts to show his superiority and answered indifferently, I just joined the Stardust Corporation not long ago. Hey, that's such a coincidence. Declan clapped and laughed out loud. I am in town this time to talk about the cooperation with the Stardust Corporation. I am old friends with Mr. Davis, the general manager of your company. I'll put in a good word for you in front of him and ask him to look out for you, lest a low-level employee like you have a tough time climbing the corporate ladder. Declan waved his hand and leaned backward proudly as if he had already gotten Flynn Davis to arrange for Charlotte's promotion. Estelle was a little displeased and glared at Charlotte. Declan may be kind enough to help you, but you have to work hard too. Don't depend entirely on him, otherwise it might be difficult for Declan to broach the topic with Mr. Davis, even though they are close. Don't you agree? Her tone was derisive and she made it sound as though Charlotte was pestering Declan to help her get promoted. Charlotte did not have a good temper, and she could tolerate this for such a long time entirely because of her former crush's sake. At this moment she couldn't tolerate it any longer and sneered, did I say that I wanted you to help? I will earn my promotion with my own efforts. I don't need you to worry about it. Having been retorted by Charlotte out of the blue, Estelle immediately looked at Declan aggrievedly. Hubby, we were just being kind by offering to help. Why did she say that? With a gloomy expression, Declan patted Estelle's back to comfort her. He said with a frown, Charlotte, I only offered to help you on account that we used to be classmates. Even if you refuse to accept my goodwill, you don't have to be so hostile. Charlotte was almost going to laugh out of anger at this moment. A waiter knocked on the door of the private room and walked in. Excuse me everyone, today we will be receiving a distinguished guest, so we won't be able to serve you for the time being. I am extremely sorry. As compensation, all your orders will be on the house today, and we will also gift you a few discount coupons. The waiter spoke courteously and handed over a small goodie bag that had exquisite packaging. Although the waiter apologized, it was obvious that he wanted them to leave immediately. Declan flew into a rage and shouted, you are trying to drive me away. Do you know who I am? Get your manager to come here. Excuse me sir, this is our manager's intention. Everyone has to leave. No Matter who, please pardon us for the convenience, the waiter said in a respectful tone. However, his attitude was firm. HMPH, I just don't believe it. What kind of distinguished guest can make us leave if you don't tell me clearly? I will smash this restaurant. Declan pointed at the waiter furiously. However, his movements were too large and he accidentally knocked over a wine glass at the edge of the table, causing it to fall onto the ground with a loud bang, the crisp sound of glass shattering immediately spread. Declan stiffened. He was actually just issuing a verbal threat. A renowned and established restaurant like the Lion was definitely backed by a powerful figure. How could he afford to provoke them? What's going on? A middle-aged man wearing a tag that said restaurant lobby supervisor pinned on his chest came over with a frown on his face. The waiter hurriedly pointed at Declan. Mr. Jones, you wanted us to clear the rooms, but this gentleman here isn't willing to leave. He wants to know which guest is here, and he accidentally broke the wine glass in the midst of throwing a fit. The manager, Mr. Jones, glanced at Declan and said aloofly, I am sorry, sir, but Mr. Ethan Sawyer is treating his guests to a meal in our restaurant today in order to prevent him from being disturbed. Everyone else has to leave. I hope to seek your cooperation. Ethan Sawyer. Declan was flabbergasted. Ethan Sawyer was the richest man in the county and he owned businesses in several states. Even those from outside Orange County had heard of him. Compared to Ethan Sawyer, Declan Adams was nothing. In fact, if possible, Declan wanted to stay behind, as that might give him the opportunity to have a good talk with the richest man in the county. It would be even better if he could become friends with him. Unfortunately, he probably would have no chance of getting close to Sawyer since he was hosting some guests and wanted the restaurant to be cleared. Declan hurriedly stood up and smiled. I am so sorry. Had I known earlier that it was Mr. Sawyer, we would have left long ago. I've created such a mess. He put his arm around Estelle's shoulders and said to Charlotte and Lucas, who were still sitting, Charlotte, Lucas, what are you waiting for? Didn't you hear that we have to make way for Mr. Sawyer? Charlotte looked at Declan, whose smile had become humble and deferential. She couldn't help but feel infinite disappointment. Is this the person I carried a torch for such a long time back? Then HMPH. However, Lucas remained in his seat and even sneered in amusement. Are you still not going to get up? We'll be in trouble if we offend Mr. Sawyer. Declan couldn't help but holler angrily when he saw Lucas sitting still in his seat. Is that so? Is Ethan Sawyer kicking up such a big fuss over a meal? Lucas remarked as he held a wine glass playfully. Panic-stricken and furious, Declan said, you actually have the audacity to call Mr. Sawyer by his full name. He's the richest man in the county and his assets are unimaginable. If you don't respect him, you are going to implicate us, you fool, Estelle said impatiently. Why are you wasting your breath on them? Let's hurry and leave if they end up offending Mr. Sawyer. Tuttle, serve them right. Declan didn't go on any longer and simply glared at Lucas coldly before taking a few more looks at Charlotte's pretty face. Forget it, we have said what we should say. If you don't know any better, don't blame us. Let's go. Holding Estelle's hand, he was just about to leave when a few people coincidentally came upstairs at this moment. They were Ethan Sawyer and his friends, whom the restaurant manager was personally showing the way for. With some joy and surprise, Declan hurriedly greeted them and bowed. Hello, Mr. Sawyer. Isn't this a godsend opportunity for me to get close to Ethan Sawyer? Sawyer frowned. Whenever he was walking, he would often be approached by random strangers trying to get close to him. The restaurant manager at the side was about to step forward to pull Declan away, but all of a sudden Sawyer saw a familiar figure through the open door of a private room. Mr. Sawyer, Declan wanted to say something but get lost. Sawyer had no time for him now. He simply pushed past Declan and hurried into the private room. Chapter 64. Blind translator. Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Declan was caught off guard and began stumbling away, but he definitely didn't dare to get angry. As soon as he regained his balance, he saw a person standing behind Sawyer and his eyes lit up. Mr. Davis, you are here too? Declan hurriedly greeted Flynn. Davis, shut up. Davis similarly pushed past him without even looking at Declan. He hurried into the private room. Sawyer rushed into the private room and looked at Lucas, who was sitting on a chair. He smiled and bowed. I never expected to run into you here today, Mr. Gray. It's such a coincidence. I happen to be treating some friends to a meal here today. Please grant me the honor of having a meal with you. Davis greeted too. Hello, Mr. Gray. He almost addressed Lucas as chairman, but he held it back because he recalled Lucas' instructions not to reveal his identity. Lucas looked at Sawyer and Davis and grinned mirthlessly. Mr. Sawyer, you booked the entire restaurant for yourself just for a meal? I don't dare to stay. Sawyer was puzzled. Booked the entire restaurant? Who said that? The manager at the side immediately shuddered, thinking that his plan to cozy up to Ethan Sawyer by bootlicking had failed. The manager stood up and smiled. I was just scared that others might ruin your mood, but I didn't know that this gentleman here is your friend. I am very sorry. The restaurant supervisor at the side also turned pale in shock. Actually, it was considered a common practice of their restaurant. Ethan Sawyer was the big boss of the restaurant, and since he was hosting some guests, the staff drove everyone away. However, he didn't know that one of the guests he had driven away was Ethan Sawyer's friend. This is horrible. The waiter who came over to clear the room was so scared that he started shuddering in fear and was on the brink of tears. He was just a waiter and these things had nothing to do with him. Mr. Sawyer, I am very sorry. The supervisor hurriedly bowed and apologized to Lucas. However, Sawyer directly interrupted him. Enough, since you've offended her distinguished guest, you are fired. Go collect your salary and leave. The manager and supervisor wanted to plead for leniency, but when they saw the stern expression on Sawyer's face, they were too scared to say anything and had no choice but to hang their heads low and go to the HR department to handle the procedures. Meanwhile, the waiter really felt like crying. Forget it. Lucas waved his hand. They just assumed that that was what you wanted. I wasn't offended either. With a look of embarrassment, Sawyer said smilingly, I will instruct them to pay more attention in the future and never repeat Such a mistake again. After that, Sawyer glared at the three people in front of him. What are you still standing there for? Hurry up and thank Mr. Gray. If he hadn't spoken up for you, you would have lost your jobs. Remember, don't do such things again in the future. I am not that demanding. Hearing Sawyer's words, the restaurant manager, the supervisor, and the unlucky waiter hurriedly bowed to Lucas and thanked him. Thank you for being so generous, Mr. Gray. Thank you so much. This scene made Declan Adams and Estelle Brooke, who were standing at the entrance of the private room, stare wide-eyed at them. None of them expected that Ethan Sawyer, the richest man in Orange County, and Flynn Davis, the general manager of the Stardust Corporation, would actually swallow their pride in front of Lucas. They tried to fire the manager and supervisor because they thought that they had offended Lucas. However, the staff was saved by Lucas' words. How can he be an ordinary person? Declan felt that he was dreaming. In particular, a few minutes ago, he still treated Lucas as a loser who was just sponging off a woman. He even talked to him condescendingly. Thinking of this, Declan wanted to give himself a few slaps. Mr. Gray, I am so sorry for offending you just now. Please let me off on Charlotte's account and pardon me for my ignorance. Declan Adams bowed to Lucas, carefully seeing her husband stooping so low. Estelle couldn't help but be furious. However, she also knew that someone who could make Ethan Sawyer and Flynn Davis stoop low too must be extraordinary, and reckoned that she probably could not afford to provoke him. At the thought of this, Estelle glared at Charlotte with jealousy and resentment. What right does this woman, whom my husband doesn't want, have to find a boyfriend who's even more impressive than Declan? After hearing Declan's words, Lucas smiled. I am just a jobless man waiting to sponge off a woman. How can I compare to you, Mr. Adams, who's so close to Mr. Davis of the Stardust Corporation? As soon as Declan heard this, he broke out in a cold sweat. Earlier, he had blindly bragged in front of Charlotte and Lucas, saying that he had a good relationship with Davis and would help Charlotte talk to him so as to help her get promoted. However, the truth was that Davis didn't know him at all. The worst thing was that Davis was right here. Wouldn't his lie be exposed then? As he had expected, Davis looked at Declan in bewilderment and asked with a frown, "Who are you?" These three simple words were like a loud slap on Declan's face. Declan's face began to heat up and he hurriedly said, "Mr. Davis, I am from the Sunshine Corporation and I am here in Orange County to discuss the cooperation with your company." Davis had long heard what happened. He also understood that Declan must have offended Lucas and even deliberately bragged about being close to him. Someone like him wants to cooperate with the Stardust Corporation. He can forget about it. Davis interrupted Declan, "The Stardust Corporation will not cooperate with you from now on. We will reject all business dealings with you. Please leave." Declan immediately stiffened, but at this moment Sawyer added, "Hey, same goes for the Sawyer Corporation. From now on we will refuse any cooperation related to the Sunshine Corporation." The two big shots spoke at the same time and turned down all cooperations with the Sunshine Corporation, making Declan frightened, speechless. This time he came to Orange County on his family's orders to sign a cooperation agreement with the Stardust Corporation to expand the business scope of the Sunshine Corporation to Orange County. When his family finally handed the task to him, he was full of confidence, thinking that he would definitely be able to clinch the deal with his good looks and even expand into Orange County. However, before he did anything, he was condemned and declined by Flynn Davis, the general manager of the Stardust Corporation, and Ethan Sawyer, the richest man in Orange County, all because of this incident. Chapter 65, Proposing on the Street. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Declan's face was pale. He had completely foiled the matter regarding the cooperation. How could he face the people in the company when he returned? Hearing this, Estelle panicked too. "You guys can't be such bullies, Mr. Davis. You clearly promised to cooperate with our company prior to this, which is the reason we rushed all the way here. How can you go back on your words?" Davis frowned impatiently. "When did I promise to cooperate with you?" Estelle said indignantly. "When my father called your company a few days ago, you clearly promised to consider cooperating with us." When Davis heard that, he was irked, yet amused. He didn't remember promising to cooperate with the Sunshine Corporation, but it turned out that they had taken to his excuse, which was just a common response given to all companies. Thinking of this, Davis lost interest in arguing with the ignorant Estelle. He simply beckoned the waiter to bring them out. Feeling indignant, Estelle wanted to say something, but Declan hurriedly stopped her and dragged her out of Lion Restaurant. "Why are you stopping me? I haven't suffered this kind of mistreatment since I was a child." Estelle slammed her Hermes bag against the floor and threw a tantrum. "I am doing this for your own good. If you keep prodding and end up pissing off Flynn Davis, the Sunshine Group will be in huge trouble too. Your father might be implicated as well," Declan said, as he picked up Estelle's handbag and patted the dust off of it for her. "He's not as impressive as you make out to be. He's just the general manager of a company in Orange County. What's the big deal?" Estelle was agitated. "Hey, pipe down." Declan hurriedly pulled Estelle to the side, fearing that others might hear what she said. After looking around and realizing that there was no one around, he whispered into Estelle's ears, "If it's just Flynn Davis alone, it's not a big deal, but the Stardust Corporation is not simple at all. It's backed by the Huttons, one of the 8 wealthiest families of the capital. You should have heard of how powerful and rich they are." Estelle had obviously heard of the Hutton family, who were well known in the country. She finally knew what the consequences of offending Davis were, and she couldn't help but be a little terrified. However, Davis was not in the mood to hold it against a small fry like her now. Davis and Sawyer were standing in front of Lucas with respectful smiles and trying to persuade him to have a meal with them. However, Lucas shook his head and declined. "No thanks, I am having a meal with my friend here. You guys go ahead." Since Lucas refused, Davis and Sawyer naturally couldn't stay behind any longer. Instead, they ordered the restaurant staff to prepare all the signature dishes as quickly as possible and send them to the private room where Lucas and Charlotte were soon. Various colorful delicacies that smelled heavenly were delivered to Lucas and Charlotte. Charlotte looked at the sumptuous spread on the table, but she didn't move her fork and knife. After seeing that scene just now, she had a ton of questions for Lucas. But she didn't know where to start. Didn't you say you want to treat me to a meal? The dishes have been served. If you are not going to dig in, I will. Lucas didn't care what was on Charlotte's mind and instead just started eating casually by himself. Charlotte picked up her utensils and began eating with pay. Thoughts in her mind made the food seem bland and tasteless. Charlotte began to think about pay. Details of events that occurred after Lucas' return. She thought of the large chest of expensive betrothal gifts that the Sawyers had delivered to her home and the fact that Ethan Sawyer said later on that they were thank you gifts for Lucas. Just now Ethan Sawyer and Flynn Davis were obviously polite and subservient to Lucas, as though Lucas was their superior. But was that possible? Another incident was when they were at the kindergarten and Lucas and Jordan displayed their terrifying combat skills. They even looked like they had killed and witnessed bloodshed before, as they could break limbs and fight without hesitating. The day before yesterday, Lucas also saved her at the Lux, and when they finally left, the security officers in the club looked at Lucas with horror and fear in their eyes. What kind of a person is Lucas? What exactly did he do during pay years he was missing? Charlotte was so absorbed in her own thoughts that she didn't notice that she had been staring at Lucas for a long time. After having his fill, Lucas wiped his mouth with a napkin. Then he realized that Charlotte was still staring at him blankly with her fork in her hand. With raised brows, he knocked on the table. Why do you keep staring at me? Do I have food on my face only? Then did Charlotte suddenly snap back to her senses. Her face turned red and she hurriedly lowered her head to polish off the food on her plate. Unfortunately, she didn't even put any food on the plate and was just pretending to eat to hide her embarrassment. There are so many dishes in front of you. Do you prefer eating air? Lucas asked in bewilderment. It's none of your business, Charlotte hollered, angry because of her embarrassment. After that, Charlotte suddenly felt that she and Lucas were finally back to the way they were before, and she felt a sudden sense of relief. Forget it, no matter who he is, it's enough as long as he treats Cheyenne and our family well. In the afternoon, Lucas drove to the Brilliance Corporation to pick up Cheyenne from work. Although Cheyenne was very familiar with the Brilliance Corporation and there was no need for her to be ferried to and fro, Lucas still wanted to do his best to fulfill his responsibilities as a husband. After waiting outside Brilliance Corporation for a while, Lucas saw Cheyenne coming out with a crowd and was about to walk up to her. All of a sudden, a man dressed fancily rushed forward and knelt on one knee in front of Cheyenne. Seth Miller. Cheyenne was stunned beyond words. Seth raised the diamond ring nestled in a box in his hand and gazed at her affectionately. Cheyenne, I genuinely adore you. So much has happened at home lately, but I still can't forget you. I think about you all day and I even dream of you at night. Every day has been so bittersweet for me, so I've decided to propose to you. Cheyenne, marry me. I will definitely bring you happiness. Many staff of the Brilliance Corporation and passers-by surrounded them. Upon the sight of the street proposal, they started taking photos and cheering loudly. Say yes, marry him. Cheyenne was so furious that her face turned red and she snapped, Seth Miller, what are you trying to do? I've already told you I am married. I have a husband and a daughter. I won't marry you. Her haste proposing to a married woman on the street. That's exciting. More and more people started crowding around them, and many of them even began imagining countless versions of horrible storylines. Chapter 66. Overbearing bully. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Overwhelmed with exasperation, Cheyenne clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She wanted to walk away directly, but she couldn't do so at all because of the gossipy crowd surrounding them. I know, but your husband is a thorough wastrel after going missing for so many years. He's still a good for nothing who's worlds apart from me. I am different. He'll definitely treat you well. I can give you what he can't. That person isn't worthy of you at all. I am thousands of times better than him, Seth exclaimed loudly, wishing he could undermine Lucas as much as possible. Enough, I don't want to hear you talk anymore. Do you know him? What right do you have to say anything about him? Cheyenne retorted coldly, full of disdain towards Seth for thinking that he was thousands of times better than Lucas. Seth couldn't hold a candle to Lucas, but even if he was really better than Lucas, it had nothing to do with her at this moment. Cheyenne's eyes widened in surprise because Lucas was squeezing through the crowd and walking toward her step by step. Why are you here? Cheyenne looked at him in surprise. Lucas Gray. Seth glared at the uninvited guest hostilely, completely forgetting that Lucas was Cheyenne's rightful husband. I am here to pick you up to go home. Lucas looked at Cheyenne and handed her a ring made out of grass. I saw this along the way, so I made you one. It was a small ring woven of thin strands of green grass with a small purple flower in the middle. The crowd craned their necks and looked over, after which they couldn't help but burst into laughter. Oh my God, do people still weave rings out of grass these days? That's so lowly. If he can't afford a diamond ring, he should at least buy a gold ring or a platinum ring, right? A glass ring is worthless. No wonder this man said that he's thousands of times better than the other man. It really seems to be the case. It's such a huge difference. This man proposed with a diamond ring that's at least a few carats, while the other proposed with a grass ring. Oh my God, any woman would know who to choose, but to everyone's surprise, Cheyenne reached out and grabbed the grass ring Lucas handed her and put it on her finger. I like it a lot, thank you. She smiled at Lucas radiantly. What, that woman actually chose the grass ring? Are you serious? Is there really a woman in this world who would choose a grass ring over a diamond ring? I don't believe it. TSK, what a beautiful yet silly girl. Why didn't I meet her earlier? Ah, such a pity. That rascal got an advantage. All of a sudden everyone looked at Cheyenne like they were looking at a fool before looking at Lucas in envy. This rascal is too lucky. Ignoring the bizarre gazes on him from the people standing around them, Lucas took Cheyenne's hand and walked away, boiling with fury. Seth glared at the two of them from behind and watched them leave. Lucas Gray, you loser, I won't let You go, Sate barked while gritting his teeth. Lucas and Cheyenne got into the car and headed to the kindergarten to pick Amelia up. Upon seeing her parents picking her up together, Amelia grinned widely and sprinted toward them. Daddy, Mommy. Lucas walked forward, picked Amelia up and held her in his arms. Cheyenne originally wanted to say that Amelia was already 6 years old and didn't need to be carried all the time, but when she saw how happy and excited Amelia was, she couldn't bring herself to say it. Amelia had been looking forward to having a father for a long time, and now that she finally got closer to him, Cheyenne decided to just let them be. The three of them got into the car and headed home. Throughout the journey, Amelia couldn't contain her excitement and chatted incessantly about the new things that happened at school today, although they were just some childish things. Both of them were happy to hear her talk about them. Lucas was smiling, but he suddenly noticed that Cheyenne did not look too well. She was frowning slightly and seemed to be out of sorts. She only returned to her senses when Amelia shook her hard. Lucas inwardly frowned and asked seemingly casually, did something happen at the office today? Her Cheyenne was in a trance again, and she finally realized that Lucas was asking her a question. Hanging her head low, she stroked Amelia's head and tried to seem relaxed. Nothing, everything's going well. Seeing her reaction, Lucas was even more certain that something must have happened to her at the Brilliance Corporation. However, he didn't state it explicitly. Upon returning home after dinner, Cheyenne said hesitantly, I have to go out to do something. I'll be home late. Lucas was a little surprised because Cheyenne almost rarely went out at night. She didn't like shopping or socializing, and she would spend most of her free time at home with Amelia, apart from the occasional overtime. Where are you going? I'll give you a lift, Lucas offered. Cheyenne shook her head. No, it's alright, I'll get a cab. Stay home and accompany Amelia. Lucas gazed at her and nodded. After Cheyenne left, Lucas immediately called Davis. Find out what happened to Cheyenne at the Brilliance Corporation today and inform me right away. Davis shivered. Yes, Mr. Gray. Lucas had always been very concerned about matters involving Cheyenne. Davis dared not be negligent, as he hurriedly instructed his subordinates to find out. As a result, when the details of the matter were reported to him 20 minutes later, Davis turned pale. Even Davis was irked and angry after reading it. What more? Lucas, who cared a lot about Cheyenne, Davis carefully told Lucas what happened, and just as he expected, Lucas flew into a rage and almost crushed his phone into pieces. Mr. Gray, I'll order them to handle it immediately and cancel that task for Miss Carter. All right, Davis asked carefully. That's not necessary, it's too late. Lucas hung up with a gloomy expression and hurriedly said something to Amelia before rushing off somewhere. Lucas' gaze was cold after he made Davis acquire the Brilliance Corporation. He had nearly fired all the Carters who were employees instead of conducting a purge, yet someone was now bullying Cheyenne. The place Cheyenne was going tonight was a company named Heaven Media, a famous company hail-made by Brad Douglas' father. The task Cheyenne received was to discuss cooperation with Heaven Media. If she failed to complete it, she would be kicked out of the Brilliance Corporation. Chapter 67. His last name is Douglas. 2 Translator, Atlas Studios Editor, Atlas Studios. Cheyenne was just a low-level employee who held little authority and did not have a say at the Brilliance Corporation now, so she couldn't decline the task at all. Heaven Media was supposedly a film and television media company, and the company had signed many small-time artists, but in reality it had failed to produce any decent films or television productions. The artists were more like escorts, specialized in maintaining the social connections of Heaven Media. Therefore, the office building of Heaven Media had extremely tacky decor. It was currently nighttime and thus even livelier than usual. In the office, the small-time artists could be seen entertaining clients in every corner. Their behavior was frivolous and seductive, and the office seemed more like a nightclub. Cheyenne frowned from the moment she stepped into the Heaven Media building, but when she thought about the fact that she was here to discuss cooperating with Heaven Media, she had no choice but to look away and pretend not to see what was happening. She walked straight to the front desk and inquired, hello, is Mr. Douglas available? I am Cheyenne Carter from the Carter Corporation, and I am here to discuss our cooperation with him. The woman at the front desk scanned Cheyenne from head to toe with obvious contempt in her eyes. Mr. Douglas is available, come with me, the receptionist said, as if she was already used to such matters. She then led Cheyenne to a private room upstairs. As soon as the door was pushed open, the pink and purple walls and lights almost blinded Cheyenne. Cheyenne stood at the door of the private room without going in and looked at the receptionist in confusion. I am here to talk about business. Shouldn't we go to an office for the discussion? The decorations and the facilities inside the room made it look just like a sordid entertainment joint, giving her a bad feeling. Is Miss Carter here? Come in, said a domineering voice. The receptionist gestured for Cheyenne to enter. Mr. Douglas is waiting for you inside. Miss Carter, please. Cheyenne took a deep breath, bit the bullet, and entered the room. In a dignified gait, there was a middle-aged man of about 50 years old with a checkered shirt sitting on the couch. His hair was slightly sparse, and despite the smile on his face, he didn't seem very affable or approachable. He was Gordon Douglas, the chairman of Heaven Media and Brad Douglas' father. When he saw Cheyenne enter, a flash of amazement appeared in his eyes. Haha, Miss Carter, I've heard a lot about you. You are worthy of being the greatest beauty of Orange County. Gordon stood up and extended his hand toward Cheyenne. Cheyenne extended her arm politely and shook his hand. Hello, Mr. Douglas. She was about to let go, but she realized that Gordon was still holding her hand tightly. In fact, he even grazed his thumb against her hand. Indeed, you look even more beautiful up close in person. They all say that women look even more beautiful under the light. That's indeed true. Gordon chuckled with his eyes glued to Cheyenne's face. Cheyenne frowned, thinking that Gordon Douglas had already crossed the line. You are being too polite, Cheyenne said calmly while retracting her hand. If not for the cooperation, Cheyenne wouldn't even have bothered to talk to him. She would have long opened the door and left. Mr. Douglas, I am here today mainly for the cooperation. Between the Brilliance Corporation and your company, as you know, the Brilliance Corporation and Pay. Stardust Corporation reached a long-term strategic partnership a few days ago. Enterprises and companies of various sizes have extended their invitations to us to seek cooperation. I won't say much about the development prospects of the Brilliance Corporation. We hope to achieve win-win cooperation with the major companies. What do you think? Cheyenne said politely in a business-like manner during the banquet 2 days ago. The Brilliance Corporation became a famous company in Pay County with whom everyone vied to cooperate. In fact, the cooperation invitations of the various companies were already enough. There was no need for her to specially go to Heaven Media to discuss. After all, there were many companies wanting to cooperate with the Brilliance Corporation, and if Heaven Media rejected them, it would be their own loss. Haha, I know what you mean, Miss Carter. Hey, Brilliance Corporation is now very famous. Gordon sat down on the couch again, leaned back against it, and pointed to the seat beside him. Have a seat too, Miss Carter. Cheyenne frowned inwardly and sat down on the other couch beside the coffee table. Gordon Douglas acted as if he didn't see it at all. He picked up 2 glasses of champagne from a tray nonchalantly and gave one to Cheyenne. Miss Carter, you came here personally to discuss cooperating. Of course, I have to discuss it with you on your account. You want to cooperate? No problem, we can sign the contract in a bit. Let's toast to our happy cooperation, Gordon said straightforwardly. Cheyenne was a bit surprised. She initially thought that the cooperation would definitely fail, but she didn't expect him to agree so quickly. Seeing the wine glass being handed to her, Cheyenne grabbed it and clinked her glass with Gordon's. Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Here's to our happy cooperation. Gordon laughed and finished the champagne in one gulp. I've downed my glass. Miss Carter, help yourself. Since Cheyenne couldn't turn him down, she could only drink it. Fortunately, it was not high in alcohol content. Gordon grinned. I heard that you were married, Miss Carter, and your husband is alive in son-in-law. Cheyenne frowned slightly, not knowing why he suddenly brought up this matter. Nevertheless, she nodded to express assent. I didn't expect you to have heard about my personal life. Gordon propped himself up with his hands on the couch. Of course, your husband is very capable. Cheyenne was confused by his answer. Does he know Lucas? Cheyenne only just realized that Lucas was an extraordinary person during the banquet a few days ago based on what Gordon said. She wondered if he was friends with Lucas. Cheyenne asked, Mr. Douglas, are you friends with my husband? Hearing this, Gordon suddenly burst into laughter as if he had heard a funny joke. Ha ha ha, friend of course not. Miss Carter, do you still remember what happened at the Lux the day before yesterday? At the mention of the Lux, Cheyenne obviously remembered everything that happened that day. Charlotte was abducted by Bryce, brought to the club, and almost violated. Wait, the person who colluded with Bryce to abduct Charlotte was Brad Douglas. Hey, said Douglas too. Chapter 68. Showing up at the door. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Cheyenne was overwhelmed with shock for a long time before asking, Mr. Douglas, what is your relationship with Brad Douglas? Gordon smiled. He's my incompetent son. Cheyenne suddenly clenched her fist. This chairman of Heaven Media in front of her was actually the father of Brad Douglas. Since Gordon asked about Lucas, he definitely knew who Lucas was. Gordon continued, it's because of your capable husband Lucas that my unfilial son has become the laughingstock of all of Orange County. Miss Carter, what do you think I should do in return? Gordon's wry and insincere smile made Cheyenne feel a chill run down her spine. If Cheyenne still didn't understand by now that he wasn't intending to discuss cooperating with her, she would be a huge fool. No recalling the half cup of champagne she just drank, Cheyenne stood up. Abruptly, her expression drastically changed. However, as soon as she stood up, she felt dizzy and couldn't even stand straight. You, Cheyenne glowered at Gordon furiously, but before she could even finish saying anything, she blacked out and fell onto the couch. HMPH. Standing beside the couch, Gordon looked down at Cheyenne, who had already passed out because of the medicine, and a vicious and sinister expression appeared on his face. Lucas Gray, you've hurt my son and tarnished his reputation, so you'll have to pay the price. On the way, Lucas sped as fast as he could in his Jaguar, rapidly weaving through the traffic. It took him less than 20 minutes to reach the Heaven Media office building. It had been more than half an hour since Cheyenne had left. He couldn't reach Cheyenne on the phone, so he didn't know if she was safe. Currently, if anything really happened to Cheyenne, he would definitely make everyone in the Douglas family die with her. Lucas' gaze was cold and he had a murderous aura as he kicked the door of the Heaven Media office building with all his might. Hey, who are you? The pretty receptionist stood up in a flustered manner and retreated. However, Lucas was already standing right in front of her. Did a woman named Cheyenne come here earlier? Where is she now? Lucas' gaze was horrifying and he looked like he wanted to devour someone. The receptionist was so frightened that she started shuddering in shock. However, she dared not speak up. Mr. Douglas specially brought that woman named Cheyenne to the private room. They are definitely still doing pay deed now. I am just a receptionist. How can I let someone go and stop them? Lucas' patience was running thin and he kicked the marble table at the side. The solid marble table immediately shattered into bits like tofu before collapsing in the middle. Speak. The pretty receptionist's body was shaking violently and she was so frightened her legs turned weak. She fell onto the ground petrified with fear. He kicked the solid marble table and managed to make such a big hole in it. If he kicks me at this moment, she could no longer care about how terrified she was of Gordon Douglas. The man in front of her was too terrifying. Shaz. Upstairs in the private room, the receptionist said while shivering. Suddenly finding the cold horror even more terrifying, Lucas left the front desk, leaving the horrified receptionist behind and walked directly toward the stairs. Who dares to create trouble here in Heaven Media? A bunch of security officers rushed out to stop Lucas. HMPH. Tell Gordon Douglas to come out. Lucas didn't take those insignificant security officers seriously at all. How dare you call Pay Chairman by his full name? The captain of the security officers hollered as the security officers surrounded Lucas. The manager of Heaven Media hurriedly ran upstairs and reported from outside. Pay. Private room. Mr. Douglas, a young man has barged in and demands to see you and Miss Carter. He's very proficient in fighting and I am afraid our security officers won't be able to stop him. Oh, Gordon knew who had come as soon as he heard it and a playful smile appeared on his face. Tell him to come up. I've prepared a big gift for him here. The manager hesitated slightly, but as he thought about pay means that Gordon Douglas usually resorted to, he answered respectfully, yes, Mr. Douglas. The manager rushed downstairs and was ready to ask the security officers to stand down, only to realize to his horror that not a single security officer in the lobby could stand. The manager felt his blood turn cold. Facing Lucas' icy white cold gaze, the manager felt like he was about to collapse onto the ground. MMR. Douglas W. would like you to go up upstairs, the manager stammered, his teeth chattering due to his fear. At this moment Lucas' aura was too terrifying. A single glance was scary enough to make him shiver. After shooting him a hostile glance, Lucas headed upstairs. Jordan appeared at the door behind him. Holding a person's ankle like this man was a dead dog drenched in blood. He dragged him through the door and followed Lucas upstairs without saying a word. The manager pressed his body against the wall and only heaved a sigh of relief and sat down. After the two walked past him, his heart pounded rapidly as he looked at the trail of blood left behind on the floor after Lucas and Jordan went upstairs. Many small-time artists and rich clients who had been hiding and watching finally started whispering to each other, this is the business of the Douglases. Who dares to be so brazen as to create trouble here? Those two are just too young and have a death wish. Exactly, the Douglas family is powerful and has connections with all the gangs. Even we don't dare to mess with them. Those two youngsters probably won't even know how they died. As the discussion got heated downstairs, Lucas and Jordan had already arrived upstairs. The door of the private room opened. Gordon was sitting on the leather couch nonchalantly. Upon seeing the two of them, he narrowed his eyes and sized them up. Just two young punks. How dare they beat my son so badly? Gordon snapped his fingers and a muscular and burly man more than 2 meters tall waked over from the side and stood next to him. When the muscular man walked, the floor of the room trembled slightly. He was clearly trying to intimidate Lucas and Jordan. However, Lucas did not even bother glancing at the tall and muscular man in front of him. Instead, he stared at the couch beside Gordon. Cheyenne was lying on the couch. Fortunately, she was fully clothed and there were no other traces on her body. The tension in Lucas' heart finally eased up. You should be glad that you didn't touch her, otherwise you wouldn't be able to sit here and talk to me now. Lucas glared coldly at Gordon. Chapter 69 Smashed with a single punch. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Hearing this, Gordon smiled. Young man, you are very arrogant. However, I didn't touch her precisely because I was waiting for you to come. I want you to see that scene with your own eyes. Watching your woman being violated and destroyed while you were unable to do anything must be wonderful, wouldn't it? The murderous intent in Lucas' eyes intensified. Initially he wanted to be lenient with Gordon Douglas, but it now seemed unnecessary. Damn it, old dog, what are you saying? Jordan flew into a rage and immediately wanted to charge forward to kill Gordon, but he was stopped by Lucas. I am not as arrogant as you two. You abducted someone and drugged them. You guys seem to like this trick a lot. I wonder how your son felt when he got a taste of his own medicine. Do you want to have a try too? In any case, you've got a candidate here, so I might as well fulfill your wish. Lucas narrowed his eyes as he glanced at Gordon and the muscular man beside him. Kid, you are very gutsy. Gordon was stunned for a moment but soon started laughing again. Despite his anger, you are just a live-in son-in-law of a lowly family. You are a useless loser. Where did you get the courage to speak to me like that? The Douglas family is well respected in the county. You are not afraid of dying. The Douglas family is nothing. Lucas sneered disdainfully, not taking the Douglas family seriously at all. Also, you are wrong. You are the one who has a death wish. Who gave you the courage to touch my wife? You are on the brink of death and you are still so sharp. Tinged her. I'll see if your bones are as tough as your mouth. Gordon sneered sinisterly and was about to beckon the muscular man beside him to make a move when Jordan, what are you waiting for? Deliver the big gift we prepared for him. Lucas shouted. Yes. Lucas, hearing his order, Jordan immediately flung the man he had been dragging along and the bloodied body rolled toward Gordon. He was completely motionless and it was unclear if he was alive or not. Gordon glanced at the pathetic figure. His limbs had been broken and he was lying limply on the ground. His face was also battered with bruises and his flesh was badly mangled with blood all over the place, so much so that he was unrecognizable. Gordon sneered and looked at Lucas and Jordan. Where did you get this man from? Are you trying to scare me? I've been mingling among gangs for decades. I am not that easily intimidated. Jordan couldn't help but snicker and mock. Old dog, you'd better open your dog eyes and take a good look, otherwise it'll be the end of your family lineage. What do you mean? Gordon furrowed his brows. Don't you have eyes? Can't you see for yourself? There you go. Jordan pointed his chin at the hideous figure. Gordon lowered his head and pressed his foot against the bloodied figure on the ground. Then a familiar looking gold pendant tumbled out. Startled, Gordon hurriedly took a closer look. Indeed, there was the word Douglas engraved on the pendant. It was the gold pendant his son had been wearing ever since he was a child. Looking at the bloodied figure in front of him, he began to find him more and more familiar, looking so familiar that his heart palpitated. Gordon stood up abruptly and roared furiously. Brad. Jordan grinned and said to Lucas, Lucas, I've beaten him to the point that his old man can't even recognize him. Lucas smiled. Good job, I'll reward you later. Gordon grimaced in rage when he heard their words. He was so furious that he turned hysterical. Good, great, you two brats, I must kill you. I'll make sure you die without a complete corpse. Gordon hollered at the tall muscular man beside him. Go beat them until they die. I'll give you $1.5 million. I want you to crush their bones and make them wail and repent. Yes. The burly and muscular man clenched his fist and the sounds Of his bones cracking immediately filled the air. He took a few steps forward and the entire ground of the room quaked a few times. However, Lucas glanced at the muscular man calmly and said to Jordan, "I'll leave it to you." Without looking at him anymore, he walked toward Cheyenne after being ignored. The muscular man roared and raised his fist to punch Lucas hard on his head. If the punch really landed on his head, it would definitely be smashed into bits. Lucas remained calm as if he didn't notice the punch coming at him. HMPH, you've got a death wish. Wade is a king of underground boxing and he can blow your head into pieces with a single punch. Let's see how you can keep being arrogant. Gordon's lips twisted into a smirk as though he could already see Lucas' head getting smashed. At this moment a figure flashed out and a faster fist slammed against Wade's fist with a loud bang. Muscular Wade was forced to retreat several steps. At the same time, Wade shrieked in pain. His right hand was hanging in front of his body at an extremely unnatural angle and his right arm was quivering violently. His fingers and wrists were all broken. Gordon's eyes widened in disbelief. Wade was a combat expert he had hired at a high price. With his fists alone he had already crushed the heads of countless people. Gordon Douglas paid this high price all for the sake of killing Lucas and taking revenge for his son. However, not only did Wade fail to hit Lucas with his punch, he had the bones of his fingers and wrists broken by Jordan's punch. How could Gordon stand it? In fact, he was already prepared to get Wade to beat Lucas Gray and then make him watch Cheyenne Carter get violated to appease the hatred in his heart. Now all his plans were foiled. In contrast, Lucas ignored it. He simply walked to Cheyenne, picked her up in his arms and then turned around to leave. He didn't want Cheyenne to stay in such a dirty place any longer. Hold it. Seeing that Lucas was about to take Cheyenne away, Gordon obviously wasn't willing to take it. Lying down, if you guys dare to step out of here, I will kill you immediately. Do you believe it? Gordon grimaced. All he heard was Lucas' derisive sneer. HMPH. Chapter 70. I don't want to die. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. HMPH. What are you being arrogant about? You are just a live-in son-in-law, so what if you have an impressive brother? Do you dare to touch me? Moreover, if the Douglases want to kill you, it'll be a piece of cake. Gordon hollered. Jordan rushed forward and slapped Gordon on his lips. How dare you be so arrogant in front of Lucas? I am going to hit you. How dare he threaten Lucas? He must have a death wish. Gordon was dumbfounded by Jordan's sudden slap. In the decades of his life, he had never been hit on the face before, especially not by a good-for-nothing sidekick. Gordon was so furious that he wished he could kill the two of them immediately. Unfortunately, the expert he hired had his hand crippled. How dare you beat up a future successor of the Douglas family? There's no need for your family to exist anymore. He thought that Lucas would be scrupulous and fearful, but Lucas simply laughed nonchalantly after hearing his words. Do as you please, but you are just throwing your weight around because of your family's prestige. Do you think the Douglas family is a big deal? If your family is destroyed, do you think you'd still have the right to be so arrogant to me? Haha, you want to destroy the Douglas family? You can dream on. Even the richest man in the county would dare to say that he could destroy my family, let alone a loser like you. Gordon looked at Lucas like he was a fool. Lucas smiled, not wanting to speak anymore. The Douglas family was insignificant to him. It was a piece of cake for him to destroy the Douglas family. Carrying Cheyenne in his arms, Lucas was about to leave when Gordon suddenly pulled out a Bergman Bayard automatic pistol and pointed the muzzle at him. Like I said, if you dare to leave this place, I will kill you immediately. Put her down, or else don't blame me for pulling the trigger, Gordon shouted, appearing rather hysterical. His plan for today was to avenge his son by making Lucas watch Cheyenne get violated before reaching his goal. He would not let them leave. Besides, Jordan had just slapped him. How could he? Gordon Douglas stand such an insult? Now that he had his pistol in hand, he no longer feared anything. Even if Lucas and Jordan were impressive fighters, they would be faster than a bullet. Lucas was really annoyed at this moment since Cheyenne was safe and sound. He originally planned to let Gordon Douglas off with a light punishment, however he didn't expect him to be so ignorant. Since he has a death wish, I won't be merciful to him. Lucas glanced at the Bergman Bayard automatic pistol that Gordon was holding, but he wasn't fazed by it at all. Do you think you can shoot me with that tiny pistol? Lucas' disdainful attitude irritated Gordon even more. Gordon held up the pistol and said in annoyance, what are you pretending for? I don't believe you can dodge a bullet. If you put that woman down and kneel in front of me, I will consider giving you away out. Otherwise this pistol will shoot all three of you dead. I've been involved with gangs for a long time, so it's not like I haven't killed anyone before. It was clear that Gordon was threatening him. Lucas remained unfazed. If you have what it takes, you can try shooting me. If you can't kill me, all the members of the Douglas family will die with you. Lucas' tone was brimming with cold killing intent, and the temperature around him abruptly plummeted. Lucas could not tolerate the fact that Gordon repeatedly tried to violate Cheyenne in front of him. Great, I gave you a chance. You are the one who wants to die. Gordon gritted his teeth with a menacing expression. He raised the pistol and was about to pull the trigger to shoot Lucas. Wait, don't shoot. Wait, the muscular man at the side suddenly interrupted. He glanced at Lucas with scruples and tried to stop Gordon. What do you want to betray me? Don't forget I paid you to be here, even though you were totally useless. Gordon barked while glaring at Wade with reddened eyes. Now he just wanted to kill Lucas, and whoever stopped him would be his enemy. No, you can't kill him at all. Do you think a gun is invincible? You won't even hit him in. Once you shoot, he won't let you off. He won't let me off either. I don't want to die here, Wade exclaimed with a frown. HMPH, I don't believe it. You are a useless good for nothing, and he's just pretending to be powerful, yet you are so scared. You are such a coward. Get lost. I must kill him, Gordon roared furiously. Wade shook his head regretfully. Since you insist on ignoring my advice, don't blame me then. Before Wade finished speaking, he suddenly dashed at Gordon and strangled him from behind with his uninjured left hand. What are you doing? Gordon panicked. He never expected Wade to bite the hand That fed him. At the same time, both Lucas and Jordan were also a little surprised. Like I said, I just want to live. If you had shot, they definitely wouldn't have let me go. If you refuse to take my advice, I'll have to kill you first. Wade tightened his grip on Gordon's neck, causing the latter to choke and his eyes to roll backward. The fear of death instantly surged in Gordon's heart. At this moment, he no longer cared about taking revenge or restoring his pride. He just wanted to survive. Stop, I will listen to you. Gordon struggled to say a few words in a muffled voice. Wade felt a tingling sensation on his wrist and subconsciously let go of Gordon. He looked over in horror only to see Lucas staring at them with a straight face and Jordan fiddling with the Bergman pistol. Jordan had grabbed a pistol in Gordon's hand just now in an instant. Even Wade didn't see how he actually moved. Wade had no idea what struck his wrist either. In short, he didn't get a clear glimpse despite having sharp vision. This could only mean that Jordan's combat skills were far superior to his. If they really wanted to kill him, he'd never be able to escape. After Gordon escaped from a close shave with death, his legs and feet went limp and he collapsed onto the ground while covering his neck and panting heavily. The threat of death had overwhelmed him with fear. Chapter 71. Loyal follower. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. After finally catching his breath, Gordon raised his head and saw that the pistol originally in his hand had somehow ended up in the hand of Jordan, who was opposite him. At this moment, Jordan was pointing the muzzle at him and threatening to pull the trigger. Gordon was stunned to the point of turning pale and sweating profusely. His body stiffened and he dared not move at all, fearing that he might upset Jordan and cause him to pull the trigger and shoot him. Huh, weren't you very arrogant just now? Is that all the guts you have? Jordan sneered while looking at Gordon with disdain. Gordon's face turned red, but he no longer wanted to retort. Suddenly Wade did something that no one expected. He suddenly knelt on one knee facing Lucas and bowed. I, Wade Spartan, would like to pledge my allegiance to you. Please grant me permission to follow you. As soon as he said that, Gordon was dumbfounded and he looked at Wade in disbelief. As Wade's employer, he was naturally aware of his origins. Wade was a king of underground boxing and known to be ruthless and unforgiving. There had been many times where he severely injured the opponents who challenged him in the ring. Wade deserved his title as a king of underground boxing, and the price of hiring him once was hefty. Now such a strong man was actually kneeling in front of Lucas and asking to pledge allegiance to him. Gordon felt like he was dreaming. Lucas asked with slightly raised brows. Why? Wade said seriously, you are very strong, although you didn't make a move. I can feel that your aura is even more terrifying than the aura of the man beside you. I want to be the follower of a mighty figure. Lucas smiled. That's your reason, but why should I keep you by my side? I can do anything you command, be it murder or arson. As long as you want me to, I will do it, and ensure that it won't cause you any problems. Wade promised. This was what most people paid him to do anyway. However, this was of no appeal to Lucas. I am not interested. Lucas declined without hesitation. Not only was he not interested in murder and arson, but even if he were, he would employ Wade. I can be your bodyguard and protect you. Protect the people around you, Wade hurriedly said after some thought. This statement made Lucas tempted. He naturally did not need Wade to be his bodyguard, but Cheyenne and Charlotte had been getting into trouble lately and things would have been different if they had someone to protect them. As a king of underground boxing, Wade naturally had passable combat proficiency. Although his bones had been broken by Jordan, he could still withstand it. Besides, the quick actions and reflexes he exhibited when he threatened Gordon meant that he was a smart man. Lucas wasn't afraid that he would betray him like he betrayed Gordon either. After all, for someone as strong as Wade, he would never betray someone stronger than him. The only thing that he had to consider now was Wade's background. If someone was deliberately trying to plant Wade beside him as a snitch, he naturally couldn't keep him around. Lucas thought about it and nodded. I can consider it. I'll look for you in the future. Overjoyed, Wade exclaimed. Okay, thank you, Mr. Gray. Gordon, who had seen everything, was extremely frustrated. The thought of the expert he had hired at great cost deciding to betray him and defect to his enemy made him feel like vomiting blood. Wade, are you sure you want to betray me? Gordon turned to Wade and said angrily, but Wade smiled indifferently. Betray? You must be mistaken, Mr. Douglas. I am not your subordinate and I haven't received any money from you, so how can it be considered betrayal? Gordon was so furious that he started trembling. However, he really didn't know how to retort. Previously, he and Wade had agreed to settle the payment after completing the matter. It was true that Wade had not received a single cent from him yet. Gordon gritted his teeth. You regret your choice if you choose that good for nothing? You will be an enemy of the Douglases. Do you think you can stand up to us? We can always hire another group of experts. Lucas was tired of hearing these threats from Gordon. You keep mentioning your family. Do you really think your family is that impressive? Without your family, you'd be nothing. Gordon Douglas. Gordon flew into a rage and shouted, HMPH, you are just a boor who beats others all the time. How would you know how horrifying my family is? The Douglas family is a first-class family in Orange County, and we are incredibly wealthy and well-connected. We can crush you with just a finger. When the time comes and the Carters are annihilated, you will regret what you've done today. Hearing these words, Jordan deliberately pretended to be frightened and wrapped his arms around himself. What should we do, Lucas? I am so scared. Seeing this, Gordon stood up from the ground and held his head up high proudly. HMPH, you are scared, huh? It's not too late to regret it. Leave that woman behind. Kneel down in front of me and kowtow 3 times and I'll consider sparing you. Kowtow my ass. Dream on, you idiot. Jordan immediately stopped pretending and walked up to kick Gordon to make him wake up. Forget it. Lucas glanced at Gordon coldly like he was looking at a dead man. When the Douglas family falls, he won't be able to be arrogant anymore. After saying this, Lucas stopped caring about Gordon and left with Cheyenne in his arms. Jordan and Wade hurriedly followed behind him with a burly and muscular Man like wait behind them when they left the Heaven Media office. No one dared to step forth to stop them at all. Gordon was the only one who failed to get anything after painstakingly setting everything up. He even got angered and had to see his son dragged to him all battered with bruises. Gordon was enraged. He yelled at his men to call for an ambulance to take Brad to the hospital while smashing everything in the room to vent his anger. Meanwhile, Jordan followed behind Lucas and asked, Lucas, seems like that idiot won't give up. Why didn't you teach him a lesson so that he won't dare to get any funny ideas? Wade hurriedly chimed in, I can make him disappear from this world tonight if you'd like. Lucas shook his head with a smile on his lips. No, we don't have to do that if we want to get rid of them. Wouldn't it be more interesting to make them kill themselves? Wade suddenly shuddered, thinking to himself that he had made the wisest choice of his life by not choosing to be Lucas' enemy. Chapter 72 sees everything. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Lucas chose not to send Cheyenne back to her home because it'd be inappropriate since she was unconscious. In order not to make the Carters worry, he brought Cheyenne back to his residence in Orange County, Pearl Lakeside. Willer on the way, Lucas called someone and said briefly, make the Douglas family disappear from Orange County within 3 days. Yes, hearing Lucas' voice, the person on the other end dared not be negligent at all. At this moment, the Douglas family still had no idea that a calamity was about to strike them. Gordon Douglas' father, Hugo Douglas, was the patriarch of the Douglas family, although he had long ago handed over the major businesses owned by his family to his sons and no longer tended to them. He would occasionally ask about them. At this moment, Hugo was lying relaxedly on a comfortable couch and flipping through newspapers when he saw the piece of news titled, The Stardust Corporation has settled a cooperation for a key project in Orange County, in bold on the financial section of the newspaper. He took off his presbyopic glasses and sighed with some envy. The Douglases have been trying hard to clinch that project for such a long time, but we were never successful. Stardust Corporation managed to get it instead. The Stardust Corporation is really something. Next to him, a man in his late 40s grabbed the presbyopic glasses from Hugo, wiped them carefully and put them into a glasses case. He then said, it is indeed the Stardust Corporation may have just settled in the country a short while ago, but its development is rapid. Not only do the businesses of various sizes in Orange County want to cooperate with it, but it even managed to clinch all the key projects. It's really impressive. The middle-aged man was Hugo Douglas' eldest son and Gordon Douglas' elder brother Chris Douglas. Hugo watched Chris' movements and smiled. Put the glasses there, a servant will come to put it away later. Why do you bother doing that? It's not much trouble after I pack them. It's convenient for you to use them the next time. Chris smiled. He had always been filial and took care of all of Hugo's needs. He would do everything he could personally as far as possible and would not let others help. Since the Stardust Corporation has such great potential, why don't we try cooperating with it? Chris asked. Hugo Douglas sighed. Why? When the Stardust Corporation announced that it was looking for a partner in Orange County, we immediately sent someone over. Everything was going well previously, but 2 days ago the Stardust Corporation suddenly changed its mind and gave us the cold shoulder. What's going on? Have we offended the Stardust Corporation in any way, or is it so arrogant and lofty that it is looking down on us? Chris frowned. Hugo Douglas sighed. Who knows? Anyway, we haven't found out yet. Chris, when you have time, go and get in touch with Mr. Davis, the general manager of the Stardust Corporation. Try to ease our relationship with the Stardust Corporation and find out where the problem lies. Try to find some opportunity to cooperate with it too. Yes, Dad, I'll surely deal with Mr. Davis. Rest assured. Chris hurriedly agreed. Yes, you are definitely someone I can trust. Hugo Douglas patted the back of his eldest son's hand and nodded in satisfaction. By the way, how's the matter with Gordon and Brad going? Hearing his question, Chris smiled. It should be fine. Yesterday, Gordon asked me to introduce a competent hitman to him. It's a king of underground boxing who's rather ruthless. He can deal with that insignificant Lucas Gray easily. They should have already taken revenge by now. Hugo nodded. Okay, that's good. How can we get bullied by that brat and let him get away with beating Brad so badly? If we don't get revenge, won't anyone dare to take advantage of us? However, you have to be careful. Don't let Gordon go overboard. Don't create extra trouble. Okay, I know, Dad. Don't worry. Gordon is my brother. I'll certainly help him. Chris nodded with a smile. At this moment, someone from the Douglas family hurried over and exclaimed anxiously, bad news, Mr. Douglas Sr. Heaven Media, the Lux and several other entertainment joints and bathhouses have been seized. What? Hugo stood up in shock and his expression changed. What's going on? Why were they seized all of a sudden? The family members stammered. Someone reported us and they found some illegal items in the companies. Some of our artists have also exposed us and said that we forced them. Anyway, they found a lot of evidence against us. Chris suddenly stepped forward, grabbed him by the collar and hollered furiously. Didn't I tell you long ago to hide those things that should appear? Aren't those artists under strict control? Why did they suddenly sue us too? Don't know. The family member looked at Chris, whose face was twisted into an angry grimace, and he was so scared that he started shivering in fear and was on the verge of tears. Oh dear, oh no, Hugo muttered to himself as he thumped himself onto the couch. The Douglases' businesses were more or less related to the entertainment and sex industries. They were the mainstay of the family. Of course, they could not operate these businesses openly, so on the surface they were known as media companies and entertainment joints, but in private they had a lot of dirty dealings. Due to the Douglases' extensive network of connections, they managed to escape the strict regulations and purges. However, they were nabbed out of the blue and accused with plenty of evidence against them. Today this was simply unprecedented. Besides, once all their misdeeds were exposed, it would absolutely result in a huge uproar and the Douglases would definitely suffer huge losses even if they didn't collapse. Chris calmed down a little and said resentfully, Dad, there's Definitely something wrong. If it was just one company and something terrible was exposed, we can blame it on our carelessness, but it's absolutely not a coincidence that so many have been affected. Someone must be deliberately trying to harm us. Chapter 73 Douglas Family Conference Translator Atlas Studios Editor Atlas Studios Hugo nodded. Chris was right, there had to be more than meets the eye if they didn't resolve it properly. They Douglases would suffer heavy losses. The situation is urgent. Call everyone over immediately for a meeting to discuss countermeasures, Hugo shouted. Soon all the direct descendants of the Douglas family and the top executives of the companies were all gathered in the Douglas family mansion. Almost all of the companies under the Douglases' name had been seized. These people had naturally heard of it since it had blown up to such a huge extent. Hugo Douglas even called for a meeting late at night. It was definitely because of that matter. Hugo sat in the middle of the couch and looked around at the dozens of people standing in the living room. His eyes narrowed. All of you, tell me the truth. Did you do anything to offend a big shot recently? As soon as Hugo spoke, he asked about this matter, and everyone started guessing that the Douglases must have offended a formidable figure of status, which led to the crisis. However, most of their businesses were illegal, so who knew if they had unintentionally offended someone? For example, 2 years ago a Douglas saw a beautiful girl dressed in simple and normal clothes, so he resorted to some means to get her to one of their companies, only to find out later that she came from an extraordinary family. In the end, they Douglases suffered enormous losses, had to apologize, and ended up owing many people favors in order to get the woman's family to let them off. Moreover, that was only because the woman didn't get hurt too badly, otherwise the Douglases wouldn't have been able to settle it so easily. Of course, they didn't get involved in such things often, and since the last incident, Hugo had also taught them a hard lesson. However, slip-ups would happen every now and then. Who knew when they might have offended someone? All of them shook their heads in unison. I don't know, I've been behaving lately and haven't done anything to offend anyone. I haven't either, mate. Too, I didn't offend anyone. Hugo narrowed his eyes as he looked at them threateningly. I want to hear the truth. If I find out someone is lying to me, you'll be kicked out of the family immediately. Hearing this, everyone panicked, but after racking their brains for a long time, they still couldn't think of an instance where they had offended someone. At this moment, Hugo suddenly noticed that someone was missing. Gordon Douglas, where's Gordon? Wasn't he informed of the meeting? Hugo questioned while looking at Chris with displeasure. Chris hurriedly said, I was about to report to you, but since everyone is gathered here for the meeting, I can't say it out loud. Hugo's face turned gloomy. Speak, we're all family, so there's nothing you have to hide. Chris glanced around at the crowd, listening attentively. Inside, Gordon is in the hospital now. He has a broken toe and has suffered some injuries. Brad is also severely injured and is being resuscitated in the hospital. What? Hugo was astonished. His son and grandson had landed in the hospital, and Brad had even reached the point where he had to be resuscitated. Who did it? Hugo asked with an angry expression. Chris shook his head. I don't know. Gordon was really angry and didn't say anything. At this moment, Douglas suddenly said, Gordon and Brad suddenly got injured tonight and all our businesses were seized. Could there be any connection between the two? These words made everyone frown and sink into deep thought. Indeed, if Gordon Douglas and Brad Douglas offended some big shot outside, got severely injured, and even caused all of the Douglases' businesses to be seized, that would make sense. Everyone turned to look at Hugo, who was exasperated. Drag that sinful son back here at once. In Pearl Lakeside Villa, Orange County. Flynn Davis called Lucas. Mr. Gray, according to your instructions, all of the Douglases' companies and joints have been seized. All the evidence has been collected, and there is no way they can deny it this time. The Douglas family definitely won't survive. Lucas expressed approval and said, good, I want them to perish for good. Davis hurriedly said, don't worry about this. I've had people prepare a lot of evidence and photos as well as videos of the victims' complaints, all of which have been uploaded on the internet. It caused a massive uproar online and also attracted the attention of many departments this time. Even if the Douglases have wide connections in Orange County, it will definitely not help. Hearing this, Lucas was pleased. Many of the nasty things that the Douglases did were challenging the law and going against ethics and morals. Once their dirty deeds were exposed, it would definitely result in outrage and public discussion. Even if the Douglases tried to suppress it, it would be to no avail. Has the matter over at the Brilliance Corporation been investigated? Lucas suddenly asked. Yes, I was just about to report it to you. The person who sent Miss Carter to discuss the cooperation with Heaven Media was Janae Harper, Miss Carter's former assistant and the current deputy head of the business department. As far as I know, she tried to make things difficult for Miss Carter several times today. Should we get rid of her? With an ice-cold gaze, Lucas said, no, don't fire her yet. I still need her for something. Sacking her right away would be giving her an easy way out. Yes, Mr. Gray. Lucas put away the phone and glanced at the large bed at the side. Cheyenne was lying on the bed, sound asleep. She would frown at times and seemed to be unable to sleep peacefully. Gordon Douglas had given her a strong sleeping pill. As long as she slept well, she should be awake by tomorrow morning. Lucas walked to the side of the bed, bent over and gently stroked Cheyenne's forehead. I won't let those who tried to harm you, including the Douglas family and Janae Harper, off. Sleep in peace. Lucas whispered gently into Cheyenne's ear as if she heard Lucas' voice. The frowning Cheyenne in her sleep gradually stopped frowning and relaxed. In the Douglas family mansion, Gordon still had gauze wrapped around his toes and was helped into the hall. Everyone waiting in the hall turned to look at him. Gordon immediately saw Hugo in the middle. He quickly strode forward with a look of grief in his eyes, as though he had suffered great mistreatment. Dad, you have to help me. That rascal almost killed Brad and he kept threatening me. The fighter one hired even turned against me and defected to him. If I weren't lucky enough, I would even be able to see you now, Gordon exclaimed while pointing to the bruises on his neck. Smack. However, Gordon didn't hear the words of comfort he was expecting and instead received a loud slap on his face by Hugo. Chapter 74 Punished using the family laws. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Gordon was dumbfounded by the sudden slap and it took him a long time to react, covering his face with his hand. He exclaimed, "Dad, why did you hit me?" Hugo said coldly. "Hit you? I really wish I could kick you too. Death, you son of a bitch. Tell me, what have you done out there?" Gordon was naturally displeased. "What could I have done? I've been staying in the office when I was bullied. You didn't even ask the doctor about my condition. You just blamed me." Hugo barked angrily. "HMPH, you are still trying to defend yourself, huh? If you hadn't fooled around outside and offended someone you can't afford to offend, would we be facing this crisis today? Things have already gotten to this point, but you still won't tell me the truth, huh?" Chris tried to knock some sense into him. "Gordon, who have you offended? Just tell us. Don't provoke Dad any further. If you tell us, we can also come up with a solution for you." Chris' words made Gordon lose his temper and he vented all his anger on him. "Sure, I was wondering why I am getting blamed and accused by everyone. As soon as I came home, you must have been fanning pay flames and deliberately trying to frame me. Chris, you are just afraid that I'll compete with you for the position of successor, so you deliberately set me up in front of Dad and the rest of the family, didn't you?" Hearing his words, Hugo became even more exasperated and his blood pressure rose. Sinful son, if you still don't repent, don't blame me. This is the death of me. Someone punish him with the family laws. I must kill this unfilial son." "What family laws?" Gordon immediately widened his eyes in disbelief. Only when a few family members moved a bench over and a burly man walked toward Gordon with a wooden mace did he believe Hugo, his father, was actually using the family laws against him. Families like the Douglas family with a rich heritage would often have some family laws for constraining the behavior of the members. However, people nowadays rarely used their family laws to punish their members. The Douglas family's most used punishment tool was the terrifying mace that would form holes in your body. It was horrifying seeing that two more family members were coming to take him and tie him to a bench under the order of Hugo. Gordon was terrified out of his wits and no longer cared about anything else. He immediately knelt in front of Hugo and begged for forgiveness. "Father, I was wrong. I won't dare to disobey you anymore, and I won't quarrel with Chris either. Please don't punish me using the family laws. If you are upset, you can scold me a few more times or slap me a few more times." Hugo looked at Gordon with a straight face and reprimanded, "Then tell me honestly what you've done and which big shot you've offended to cause our family to suffer such a great calamity." Gordon really wanted to cry. "Father, I really didn't offend any big shot. I've been in pay business for decades, so what kind of person could I have offended? Why would I be so ignorant as to offend a big shot? What's wrong with the family? What calamity? I just came back. No one told me about it." Hugo waved his hand and Chris stepped forward. "Just half an hour ago, all of our company's clubs, bathhouses and more were all seized, and there's a lot of evidence against us. If we can't find out which bigwig we've offended, our family will be destroyed." Gordon was shocked on the spot. He asked in disbelief, "How is that possible? Our family has deep roots in Orange County and we've established a wide network of connections long ago. Who would disregard our status and directly seize all of our companies?" Looking at his son, Hugo roared coldly, "You think it's impossible? Would we deliberately scare you with this kind of thing? The most important thing now is to think carefully about who you offended." Gordon immediately panicked, but a word that Chris said just now appeared in his mind. "Destroyed, right? Why does this word sound so familiar? Do you think the Douglas family is a big deal? If your family is destroyed, do you think you'd still have the right to be so arrogant to me?" Lucas had said these words to him with a sneer. Gordon was immediately reminded of it, but he was in disbelief. "No, impossible. How can he have the ability to destroy my family? That's impossible." Gordon's eyes glazed over as he muttered to himself continuously. After hearing his words, Hugo immediately grasped his main point. He narrowed his eyes and stared at Gordon. "Who are you talking about?" Gordon blinked and looked at Hugo as though he was having a nightmare. "IIT's Lucas Gray, the son-in-law of Pay Carter's. He beat Brad, so I nabbed his wife and wanted to get back at him, but he has an underling who's a good fighter. He even threatened me by saying that he would destroy the Douglas family. But how is that possible? The Carters are a powerless third-rate family, and he's a wastrel. Besides, he was the one who beat Brad badly and almost made the fighter one hired kill me instead." Gordon was rather muddled, but his words allowed everyone to get a clear idea of what happened. Hugo kicked Gordon hard. "Indeed, the trouble was caused by you." After getting kicked, Gordon fell to the ground and shrieked in pain when his fractured toe hit the hard floor. However, facing Hugo's rage, he could only explain, "But Dad, Lucas Gray is really a good for nothing. This must be a coincidence. Good for nothing coincidence. You are just a fool." Hugo hollered angrily while looking at Gordon with a resolute gaze. "Serve him pay family punishment. Break his legs." "No, don't, Dad, please spare me." Gordon panicked and begged loudly for mercy. A few family members got the hint from Chris' gaze. They went forward, pulled Gordon on top of the bench and tied him with his face facing down. Then they hit him hard on his thighs with the mace. "Ah!" The loud shriek of misery resounded in the Douglas family residence. Hugo closed his eyes, unable to bring himself to watch this scene. However, the incessant cries made his face twitch. "Dad, look, why don't we spare Gordon? He didn't do it on purpose," Chris persuaded. Hugo opened his eyes abruptly and his gaze became firm again. "No, we must make Gordon go through the punishment. Take him with you tomorrow to see Lucas Gray to apologize. You must obtain his forgiveness." "Yes, Dad," Chris agreed with a faint but peculiar glint in his eyes. Chapter 75 Because I Like It. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. The next morning, Cheyenne's eyelashes moved slightly and she, who had slept through the entire night, slowly opened her eyes. However, she didn't wake up to the warm bedroom she was familiar with, but a luxuriously decorated room completely new to her. Cheyenne's heart dropped. The last image she saw before losing Her consciousness was the scene of her discussing the cooperation with Gordon Douglas of Heaven. Media last night, after which she downed a glass of champagne and then have I know Cheyenne's expression changed drastically and she screamed with her head in her hands. The door of the room was suddenly pushed open and a figure hurriedly rushed in. Cheyenne, what's wrong? Hearing Lucas' familiar voice, tears welled up in Cheyenne's eyes and she immediately jumped into his arms. She hugged him tightly and burst into tears. Lucas hurriedly embraced Cheyenne in his arms and patted her back to comfort her. It's all right, nothing happened to you. You accidentally took some strong sleeping pills, which is why you slept until now. Nothing else happened. Don't be afraid. After hearing this, Cheyenne finally returned to her senses from her extreme horror. She carefully sensed her body and it seemed to be all right. But I remember Gordon Douglas and that glass of champagne. Cheyenne suddenly shivered at the thought of that scene. It's okay, I rushed over yesterday and brought you home in one piece. That bastard Gordon Douglas will also be punished. You don't need to be afraid anymore. Lucas comforted Cheyenne warmly. It was extremely normal for women to be flustered and terrified after encountering something like that. After being comforted by Lucas, Cheyenne slowly regained her composure. Only after a while did she realize that she was hugging Lucas tightly. Cheyenne hurriedly let go of him and turned away to wipe the tears off her face. She suddenly felt extremely embarrassed and shy. I actually took the initiative to jump into his arms and cry. How embarrassing. Looking at Cheyenne's back, Lucas could see that her tiny ears were already red even though he couldn't see her expression clearly. Lucas burst into laughter and coughed. I brought you back here last night and it wasn't convenient for me to help you change out of your clothes. There's a bathroom in the room and some women's clothes in the closet. Go and take a shower and then come have breakfast. After saying this, Lucas went out and considerately closed the door after him. Only after Lucas left did Cheyenne lift her hand and pat her warm cheeks while subconsciously smiling. Cheyenne looked around the spacious and luxurious room and saw a huge floor-to-ceiling window with a balcony facing the south. To the east there was a large closet the size of the wall. Cheyenne leaped off the bed and opened the closet. To her surprise, the closet was mostly filled with women's clothes and half of it was filled with clothes for little girls. There were very few men's clothes. The women's clothes were all in her size while the children's clothes were in Amelia's size, all of which were exquisitely crafted and fashionable. Most of them were custom-made designer clothing by major luxury brands. There was also a plethora of accessories such as handbags, shoes, hats, etc. It was simply a luxurious and impeccable closet that most women dreamed of owning. Cheyenne suddenly figured out that all of this was prepared by Lucas for her and Amelia. It turned out that Lucas had secretly prepared a lot of things by himself while she was clueless. Previously he wasn't making empty promises when he swore that he would treat Cheyenne and Amelia well. For some reason Cheyenne suddenly felt her nose getting a little sore. In a strong urge to cry after showering, she changed into a light yellow dress and walked out of the room only to be stunned speechless by the exquisite decor in a luxurious villa. The stairs were made of pure crystal and there was a spacious and lofty dome, chandelier inlaid with colorful gemstones and elegant and exquisite antique artifacts. The entire villa was as lavish and opulent as a beautiful palace. Looking at everything in astonishment, Cheyenne was suddenly at a loss for words. Does all of this belong to Lucas? All of this belongs to us and Amelia. This is our home, Lucas said softly with a smile as he walked toward Cheyenne. Cheyenne's face once again reddened and she glared at Lucas. I am not your family. However, her flair wasn't deterring or hostile. Instead it was rather cute. Lucas knew that Cheyenne would get shy easily, so he didn't say anything else and brought her to the dining room. The furnishings in the bright and open dining room were gorgeous and opulent. There was also a large floor-to-ceiling window facing outside which allowed her to see the clear lake outside. The gentle breeze was blowing in slowly and caressing her face, making her feel relaxed and at ease. Cheyenne saw that the table was covered in a snowy white tablecloth and a large spread of dishes on it. There was fragrant porridge, sweet corn, fried eggs, crab sandwiches and 2 glasses of milk. Lucas pointed at the crab sandwich. Sorry, I am not good at making sandwiches, so these are store-bought and reheated. Don't mind it. Cheyenne was even more shocked when she heard this. Pointing at the sumptuous breakfast spread, she asked, you made all of this? Lucas nodded. I don't cook often, so my culinary skills are mediocre. Try them and see if they are to your liking. If not, I'll cook something else. Cheyenne was really speechless now after seeing Lucas' wealth. She originally thought that some servants or cooks had prepared breakfast, but to her surprise, Lucas cooked everything himself. A man who didn't cook much actually whipped up a sumptuous feast for her. He was even worried that she might not like it and wanted to prepare a new set. She was definitely touched at this moment. Cheyenne was overwhelmed with complicated emotions. She was feeling bittersweet. Why are you doing all of this for me? Cheyenne asked, sobbing. Lucas smiled. Because I like you, so I want to treat you well. Cheyenne had no idea that Lucas had been carrying a torch for her for more than 6 years. During his time in the army, Lucas managed to overcome those hardships and dangers time and time again because he kept himself going by thinking of Cheyenne. Until he reached where he was today. After 6 years, his feelings for her had turned into love. The god of war Lucas Gray was willing to do so much for Cheyenne, all because of his love for her. Chapter 76 Carter Corporation. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. When Cheyenne heard what Lucas said, her face was full of shock. She didn't expect him to confess that he liked her. All of a sudden Cheyenne was flustered. She only raised her head to say to Lucas apologetically after a long while, I don't feel that way about you yet. I am so sorry. Lucas shook his head and said softly, it's okay, it's my business that I like you. You don't need to feel pressured. Just treat me as an ordinary suitor. If you think I am not too bad and you take a liking to me someday in the future, I'd feel fortunate. However, if you still don't think I make the cut in the end, I won't force it. Hearing Lucas' kind and understanding words, Cheyenne was even more at a loss for words. She gripped the tablecloth With her fingers overwhelmed with a complicated mood, seeing this, Lucas smiled and changed. Hey. Subject, don't think too much, have breakfast before it gets cold. As he spoke, Lucas pushed the bowl of porridge toward Cheyenne. Okay. Cheyenne picked up the spoon. Soon breakfast ended with a calm and peaceful ambience. After breakfast, Lucas intended to drive Cheyenne to work at the Brilliance Corporation, but she asked hesitantly, can I drop by the Carter Corporation first? Of course. Lucas nodded without saying much or asking the reason. Soon the two of them arrived outside the entrance of the Carter Corporation. Cheyenne looked at the familiar signboard from inside the car and a complicated look appeared in her eyes, but in the end she opened the door and got out of the car. Hey, isn't that the woman who got chased out by the Carters? How does she still have the cheek to come to our office? As soon as Cheyenne got out of the car and regained her balance, a sarcastic voice sounded. It belonged to Bryce Carter. Cheyenne glanced at Bryce with an icy gaze, not wanting to speak a single word to him at all. Ever since Bryce colluded with Brad Douglas to abduct Charlotte and bring her to the Lux for him to defile her, Cheyenne's hatred for Bryce grew to the extreme, but he was still standing fine in front of her and asking her how she had the cheek to show up here. A person who was truly thick-skinned and disgusting was Bryce. At this moment, Lucas got out of a driver's seat and stared at Bryce indifferently. The glance instantly made Bryce's body turn cold. He immediately recalled the scene of him being frightened by Lucas to the point of peeing in his pants. He even thought about the disgusting incident that happened between him and Brad Douglas after Lucas drugged him. The mere thought of it made him feel unbearable pain. You're not dead yet. Bryce took 2 steps backward in horror, but when he remembered that this was at the entrance of a Carter Corporation, he immediately felt more courageous and began glaring at Lucas while gritting his teeth. After Lucas did that to him and Brad on that day, Brad clearly said that he would never let Lucas go, that he would make Lucas die a miserable death. For this reason, Bryce bore with pain in his body and waited excitedly for 2 days. But why is Lucas Gray still alive and kicking? Has Brad Douglas not started executing his plan for revenge yet? Cheyenne said to Lucas, I'd feel disgusted if I talk to him again. Let's go look for Grandpa. Hearing this, Bryce immediately blocked the two of them. HMPH, you want to go inside the Carter Corporation office? Forget about it. You have already been kicked out and disowned by the family. You have no right to enter our family's company again. Hearing this, Cheyenne sneered, if you don't want the Carters to make a comeback, go ahead and stop me. For all I care, when Grandpa finds out, you'll just have to bear the consequences. What do you mean by that? Bryce immediately asked. Cheyenne took out a document from her bag. This is the letter of intent for the Brilliance Corporation's plan to cooperate with the Carter Corporation. If you don't need it, I'll leave immediately. A letter of intent to cooperate with the Brilliance Corporation. Bryce's eyes suddenly widened as he stared at the document in Cheyenne's hand. How did you get this? Where did you get it? Bryce said eagerly as his eyes burned with zeal, wishing he could snatch this document from Cheyenne immediately. A few days ago, Flynn Davis had invited several families to attend the opulent and grand banquet, during which he even announced that the Stardust Corporation would soon reach a long-term strategic partnership with the Brilliance Corporation. Many were envious of the Brilliance Corporation instantly rising high and gaining the favor of countless companies of all sizes. The current Brilliance Corporation was on a completely different level from what it used to be when it was under the management of the Carters. Now a single letter of intent of cooperation from the Brilliance Corporation would be enough to make many small and medium-sized families vie with each other for it, let alone a small family like the Carters who had just overcome a crisis. Cheyenne raised the document in her hand. I am now working at the Brilliance Corporation and I am also responsible for the cooperation with the Carters. If you decline on behalf of the Carters, then forget it. Bryce naturally didn't dare to say that he didn't want it, even though he didn't want to see Cheyenne at his family's office ever again. However, if he really refused, his grandfather would never let him off. After finding out, while feeling frustrated, Bryce stared at Lucas, who was beside Cheyenne, and suddenly laughed. Haha, Lucas, do you think that Cheyenne will willingly marry you just because you are following her around? Lucas retorted with a raised brow. That's between me and her. It's none of your business. Ha 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 ha. Bryce suddenly guffawed loudly with a hostile and evil gaze. HMPH. This woman has long slept with many men. Back then she went to hook up with Flynn Davis in order to clinch the cooperation with the Stardust Corporation. She must have slept with a random man again to get the Brilliance Corporation back. You are just an idiot who thinks that Cheyenne will accept you because you are so devoted. Cheyenne turned red in fury and snapped. Bryce Carter, what nonsense are you saying? Don't think everyone is as dirty and obscene as you are. Her, am I wrong? The Brilliance Corporation was taken away by the Stardust Corporation and all the Carters who worked there have been sacked except for you. Isn't that proof? Don't be so shameless. Bryce gibed sarcastically as he stared at Cheyenne. Smack. She slapped Bryce hard on his face. Chapter 77. Aston Brook. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Bryce really deserved to be slapped for smearing her. After being slapped, Bryce looked at Cheyenne in disbelief. Throughout the years he had gotten used to bullying Cheyenne, but he never thought that she would dare to slap him. Damn it, bitch, you actually have the audacity to smack. Before Bryce could finish, another loud slap landed on his face. Unlike Cheyenne's slap, the second slap was extremely hard and it sent Bryce flying. Immediately he even spat out a few teeth stained with blood in merely a few seconds. Half of Bryce's face was swollen like a pig's head and he was in so much pain that he couldn't speak at all. The gaze in his eyes when he faced Lucas was full of horror and regret. He had clearly seen how terrifying Lucas was in the Lux, yet he still provoked him. Lucas walked up to Bryce and looked at him coldly. Don't let me hear you insulting her again, or else I'll be giving you more than just a slap. Bryce inhaled sharply and glared at Lucas furiously. Lucas managed to knock out a few of his teeth with a single slap. It was obviously more than just a gentle slap. Of course, people like Bryce would not understand he would die if Lucas had really hit him mercilessly. Both of them ignored Bryce, who was lying on the ground, and immediately entered the Carter Corporation office at this moment. Dominic was entertaining a distinguished guest on the top floor of the Carter Corporation. The guest was in his 30s and his hair was neatly combed and tidied. He had a warm smile on his face and looked rather refined and easygoing. All smiles. Dominic was holding a contract that he had just signed, and even the wrinkles on his face were stretched out. Mr. Brooke, you are young and promising. It's a great honor for us to cooperate with the Solar Corporation. Dominic praised the young man incessantly with a smile on his face. The young man said, now we are at ease cooperating with an established family like yours. It will be a pleasure working with you. Ha ha ha. Yes, it will be a pleasure from now on. I will be counting on you, Mr. Brooke. Dominic Carter chuckled. You may call me just Aston. You are an elder, so you don't have to be too formal with me, the young man Aston Brooke said. His respectful and humble behavior was to Dominic's liking. Aston Brooke was from the Brilliance Corporation. Although he was not from Orange County, his family's status in Orange County was not to be belittled. I shall call you by your name then. Dominic Carter chuckled and then pointed at a beautiful girl with exquisite makeup. Scarlett, hurry and pour some tea for Aston. Scarlett stood up and picked up the cup of tea in front of Aston shyly. Aston, I'll go replace the cup of tea for you. Aston quickly declined. I shouldn't trouble this pretty lady. By the way, she is actually. He had already seen the beautiful woman sitting next to Dominic as soon as he entered the conference room and already knew his intentions. However, he had been feigning ignorance and thus waited until now to ask this question. Dominic smiled. SH is my incompetent granddaughter. Her name is Scarlett, right? SH is very young and only 20 years old. After hearing that I'll be discussing cooperation with you, she insisted on coming. Grandpa, I am not young. Scarlett, right? Protested as she subconsciously glanced at Aston with affection in her eyes. Aston found it hilarious, but he didn't show it at all. The Carters were a small third-rate family. Aston obviously wouldn't choose to marry her and form a union with them. However, Scarlett looked rather pretty with makeup and Dominic was obviously using her to get close to him. It would be a waste to turn her down anyway. There would be no harm in toying with her. Miss Wright is so innocent, pure, adorable and pretty. It's no wonder that SH is your granddaughter. I bet an excellent girl like her must have many suitors, right? Aston said with a smile. Hearing pay compliment, Scarlett lowered her head shyly. No, I've always been single. Aston laughed, pretending not to understand the meaning of her words. The men here don't seem to have good taste. How could they not pursue such a beautiful girl like you? They are so useless. Dominic laughed. Scarlett is young and doesn't know much about such things. Aston, it happens that you'll be staying here for a few days, so why don't you let Scarlett take you on a tour around the city? Aston inwardly laughed at Dominic's eagerness, but he didn't decline and instead looked at Scarlett with a warm smile. I'll have to trouble you then. Scarlett, hearing the change in Aston's tone and the fact that he started addressing her by her first name instead, Scarlett couldn't help but be overjoyed at this moment. An assistant knocked on the door and entered to report to Dominic, Mr. Chairman, Cheyenne Carter is here and says she wants to talk to you about something. Dominic furrowed his eyebrows and said impatiently, can't you see that I am entertaining an important guest here? Tell her to go away. I don't want to see her and there's nothing I have to say to her. Aston was immediately interested when he heard Cheyenne's name in the past. Cheyenne was known as the greatest beauty of the county, and even Aston, who was from a different county, had heard of her, especially after her scandal. It was the talk of the town in several cities. Aston was rather curious about the former greatest beauty of Orange County and wanted to see her. Thus Aston interjected to stop Dominic. It's okay, since we've already settled on our cooperation. I won't get in the way of you meeting someone else. You don't have to mind my presence. Go ahead with the meeting. Hearing his words, Dominic immediately instructed the assistant to let Cheyenne come in. The moment Cheyenne walked into the conference room, a flash of amazement appeared in Aston's eyes. Although Cheyenne was no longer the most delicate and beautiful girl in her early 20s, she was still as gorgeous as ever. Aston couldn't take his eyes off her. SH is really worthy of being the greatest beauty of the county. Aston Brooke was amazed. Lucas entered after her and immediately frowned when he saw Aston staring straight at Cheyenne. Without blinking, he quickly stood in front of Cheyenne and blocked her. Chapter 78, Rejecting the Opportunity. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. As soon as Dominic saw Cheyenne and Lucas enter, he immediately turned gloomy. If you have anything to say, hurry up and say it. Leave immediately after you finish, Dominic said coldly, without hiding the disdain he had for them. Although Cheyenne had already prepared herself for this, she still felt rather uncomfortable. She had always respected Dominic, but now he was cold and indifferent toward her, as though they were strangers. No, they were even more distant than strangers. Bearing with a unhappiness, she handed the letter of intent to Dominic. Grandpa, I am here to deliver a letter of intent on behalf of the Brilliance Corporation today. You may take a look first. Dominic was shocked to hear her words. Looking at the letter of intent in her hand with great enthusiasm, he was about to reach out and take it, but he suddenly suspected something. Your family has been disowned by the Carters, so why would you be so kind as to send a letter of intent to us? Could there be some conspiracy in this? The gaze in his eyes was full of suspicion when he looked at Cheyenne. Cheyenne had good intentions when she decided to personally deliver the letter of intent of cooperation to the Carters, because she still had some affection for the family she grew up with. This was also the reason she told Lucas to let them off. However, Dominic's apprehensive attitude was like a dagger piercing through her heart. At this moment, Scarlett, who was at the side, suddenly spoke up. Cheyenne, stop pretending. Previously you returned with a signed contract with the Stardust Corporation, but that resulted in greater issues and caused Grandpa to have to give up the Brilliance Corporation to someone else in order to overcome the crisis. Now that you've brought another contract here, who knows What trap there might be filled with jealousy? Scarlett stared at Cheyenne's pretty face, which all women were jealous of, and continued sarcastically, also you've got really incredible means. I heard that the Brilliance Corporation sacked all the Carters, but you are the only one who still has a stable position there. TSK, you are truly impressive. Which senior executive do you have close ties with? Scarlett's sarcastic tone and ambiguous words left a lot to the imagination. Cheyenne was exasperated. She rarely saw Scarlett and had never offended her before, yet Scarlett was full of animosity toward her. Cheyenne naturally did not know that it was because Aston Brooke was obviously attracted to her and had gawked at her fondly when she entered just now, causing Scarlett to be hostile and jealous. Lucas sneered, indeed you people like projecting your filthy thoughts onto others. How amusing. You, what do you mean? Scarlett was so infuriated by Lucas' hostile remark that her face became flushed. At this moment Bryce walked into the conference room while covered his swollen cheek. As soon as he saw Dominic, Bryce immediately leaped over. Disregarding his image, he roared, Grandpa, you have to do something for me. Look at my face, it's so swollen and I've lost a few of my teeth too. It's all because of these bastards. Lucas Gray and Cheyenne Carter. He had the audacity to bully me at the entrance of our office. Grandpa, you can't let him off this time. Bryce's complaints were somewhat slurred and vague because he had lost a few teeth. When Dominic saw his grandson's face that was as swollen as a pig, he was immediately furious. He could teach his grandson a lesson, but others had no right to hit his grandson, in particular Cheyenne and Lucas, who had been kicked out of the family, were even more unfit to hit his grandson. Looking at Dominic's enraged face, Cheyenne hurriedly explained, it was Bryce who shut up. Dominic hollered, you people are in no place to discipline my grandson. Hurry up and get out. When Lucas saw Dominic reprimanding Cheyenne unreasonably and mercilessly, his face turned angry too. In that case, I hope you won't regret your decision. After saying these words indifferently, Lucas turned to face Cheyenne. Since they don't appreciate it, forget it, let's go. Cheyenne was furious and aggrieved, but when she saw Dominic's aged face, she couldn't bring herself to be ruthless and do it. I'll ask you one last time, do you want to see this contract with the Brilliance Corporation? Cheyenne gritted her teeth. No, take it away. It must be something to fool Grandpa, who believes you. Scarlett looked extremely annoyed. HMPH, are you being hypocritical to make us thank you? Dream on. Even if you kneel down and beg us, we won't look at it. Bryce exclaimed with disdain, you shameless couple, hurry and get lost. Lucas' eyes glinted with a murderous light and he kicked immediately. Bryce's body went flying like a potato sack and he passed out soundlessly after slamming against the wall. Dominic was shocked and rushed over to check Bryce's condition. Only after seeing that Bryce was still breathing and had merely fainted did he feel less worried. Dominic turned his head and glared at Lucas viciously. Lucas Gray, you are being overboard. He then stared at Cheyenne coldly. Great Cheyenne Carter, you brought your good for nothing husband here to show off, didn't you? Letter of intent from the Brilliance Corporation. Haha, do you think he'll be grateful to you for that and even let your family reunite with the Carters? You must be dreaming. If it weren't for your Brilliance Corporation would still belong to us, there wouldn't have been a need for you to come here and talk to us about this damned cooperation. If it weren't for the fact that you were still useful to the family, I would have kicked you out long ago. I am telling you, I won't let you come back to the Carters, so just give up. From now on you aren't allowed to step foot into any of the Carters' properties again. Get lost now, get lost. Dominic pointed at the door in fury while looking at Cheyenne menacingly as though he was going to devour her. Dominic's words and the look in his eyes made Cheyenne feel as if a million daggers were piercing through her heart and she immediately burst into tears. Scarlett mocked, stop crying, you hypocrite. Others might think that we've bullied you. You are so shameless. Lucas stayed silent and simply watched them coldly. If Cheyenne hadn't been pleading for them time and time again, the Carters would have long been eradicated from the county, much less have the chance to say those harsh things to Cheyenne. These people aren't worthy of what Cheyenne has done for them. Chapter 79, The Douglas Family's Apology. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Forget it, Cheyenne, you've already done enough for them. They just don't know any better from now on. Regardless of their outcome, it's all because of their own choices. Lucas said, who are you talking about? HMPH. Cheyenne Carter, don't think I don't know that your father is not even Grandpa's biological son. You don't belong to the Carter family. You are just a bunch of bastards. Hurry up and get lost. Scarlett barked at Cheyenne with her hands on her hips. However, she forgot that she was not a Carter either. Cheyenne looked at Dominic bitterly. Grandpa, do you think so too? Have you never treated me like your granddaughter? Dominic snorted. Scarlett is right. Your family is not related to the Carters at all. I've raised you for decades and it's more than enough. What are you waiting for? Get lost. Large drops of tears rolled down Cheyenne's cheeks and she smiled crestfallenly while taking a deep look at Dominic. She then took a step back and said, I understand. After saying this, she turned around and left without any further hesitation. Lucas looked at Scarlett, who seemed to be smug about chasing away her enemy, and Dominic's old and gloomy face, and sneered, how pathetic. You people will never know what you've missed. He left the conference room as well. Lucas' words were puzzling for Scarlett and Dominic, but the way he looked at them as if he were looking at fools made them feel extremely furious and frustrated. At this moment, a Carter hurriedly ran over and announced loudly, bad news, some people from the Douglas family are here. When Dominic heard this, his heart palpitated violently. Which family is that? Are they here to create trouble for us? It's the Douglas family in Orange County that owns an entertainment company and clubhouses. The chairman, Chris Douglas, is here personally with a person who's bleeding profusely. It looks really intimidating. They must be here to create trouble. What should we do? That Carter asked anxiously. The Carters are really unlucky to be encountering trouble one after another. They had just survived a crisis that almost caused them to go bankrupt and start liquidation 2 days ago, and now the Douglas family was here at their doorstep. What's going on at this moment. Dominic was astounded and confused. The Carters had never cooperated with Chris Douglas before, and yet he was here to look for them while bringing an injured person with him. What exactly could it be about? Dominic was anxious, but as the head of the Carter family and the person with the final say, he had to go out and meet them regardless of whether their intentions were hostile or not. Go, hurry up and follow me to see what's going on. Dominic hurriedly excused himself from Aston and headed downstairs with the support of that Carter. Aston smiled with interest and said to Scarlett, who had been sticking to him, let's go down and take a look too. Sure, Aston. Scarlett unsurprisingly quickly agreed. When they hurriedly took the elevator to the lobby downstairs, they happened to see a scene that took them aback. Chris Douglas was bending over and bowing deeply to someone while saying in a clear voice, Mr. Gray, I am very sorry, my younger brother Gordon has done something wrong and offended you. We've already broken both his legs and were now here to apologize to you and ask for your forgiveness. The person opposite Chris was clearly Lucas, who had just gone downstairs. Chris' subservient actions and speech were undoubtedly astonishing for the Carters, and they thought that they were hallucinating. The Douglas family was a first-class family in Orange County. They were wealthy and powerful and owned countless entertainment joints in the county, and Chris Douglas, the eldest son of Hugo Douglas, was almost confirmed as the next successor of the family. Such a big shot was actually bending over and apologizing to the loser Lucas. They even broke Gordon Douglas' legs in order to show their sincerity to him. Oh my God, is this world too magical? Oh, am I still dreaming? The Carters dared not believe it at all. Scarlett opened her mouth wide and looked at Lucas in disbelief beside them. Aston looked at Lucas with some interest in his gaze. What kind of a person is Lucas Gray? Is he really that legendary son-in-law loser? At this moment Lucas looked at Chris, who was bending forward and bowing to him, and then at Gordon, who was lying on a stretcher and covered in blood. His flesh was badly mangled and he was in so much pain that he turned pale while his forehead was covered in cold sweat. However, Lucas didn't feel anything. He felt that the Douglases had brought it upon themselves, putting aside the fact that Gordon had attacked Charlotte, Cheyenne and him several times. The Douglases owned several sordid businesses and often engaged in dirty deeds. This alone had already decided that their misdeeds would be exposed one day, and that the family would collapse. Although Lucas did order Davis to destroy the Douglas family, the various pieces of evidence that led to the crisis that they were facing were all real, and there was no fabrication involved. Seeing that Lucas wasn't responding, Scarlett suddenly thought of something. Mr. Douglas, did you get the wrong person? You should be apologizing to Mr. Brooke, not Lucas Gray. Scarlett pointed to Aston beside her. However, what she thought was a kind reminder didn't sit too well with Chris, and he shot her an icy cold gaze. Shut up, who are you to insult Mr. Gray? Smack. Before Scarlett could recover from the shock, one of Chris' followers came over and slapped her hard in her face. Scarlett was incredibly embarrassed and she quickly clutched her face and stood still with tears in her eyes, not daring to make another sound. When Dominic saw this scene, his face trembled a little, but he did not dare get justice for his granddaughter in front of Chris Douglas, so he could only pretend not to see. On the other hand, Aston caressed Scarlett's back and comforted her quietly. She immediately whimpered and leaned close to him. If not for the fact that there were so many people there, she would have buried her head in his chest and cried her heart out. However, Lucas didn't feel that Chris was sincere in apologizing and merely thought that he was putting on a show. He was about to leave, but beside him Cheyenne suddenly said softly, Lucas, just let them off. Chapter 80. It's Mr. Brooke. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Since Cheyenne had spoken up, Lucas would naturally give in on her account. Besides, he didn't necessarily need the Douglas family to disappear completely from Orange County. Lucas said coldly, if not for my wife's kind-hearted nature, I definitely would have spared your family. However, you must remember that if you provoke my family and me or commit those heinous acts again, your family can just wait to perish. Chris bowed repeatedly and thanked him. Thank you for your magnanimity. We will remember your kindness. Lucas looked at Chris. Aren't you going to leave? Yes, we will leave immediately. Chris Douglas instructed his men to take Gordon, who was on the stretcher, and left in a hurry. After glancing at Dominic and the others, Lucas left with Cheyenne. The Carters were left dumbfounded. Dominic couldn't believe that Lucas, whom he thought was a good-for-nothing and had kicked out of the family, could actually speak to Chris Douglas so impolitely and even make him be so afraid and subservient toward him. At this moment, Scarlett stared at the backs of Cheyenne and Lucas, who had gone far, and suddenly said in disdain, HMPH, how dare that loser continue to pretend and deceive the Douglas family? Once they find out the truth, they won't let him off. Dominic frowned. What do you mean? Scarlett humphed coldly. Lucas is a loser who doesn't even have a job. How could he possibly make the Douglases stoop so low and apologize to him? He must have used someone else's identity. Dominic nodded. He would rather accept this reason than believe that the loser Lucas was actually that capable. I was just saying that they must have made a mistake just now. The person they want to apologize to should be Aston, right? Scarlett turned to look at Aston and blinked. Aston smiled calmly. Some time ago we did have a conflict with them, but I don't know if they've made a mistake or were really planning to apologize to Mr. Gray today. Aston didn't confirm anything or admit that Chris was here to apologize to him. In fact, the Brookes did not have any business dealings with the Douglases at all, and they had never offended him either. However, he decided to play along since this silly woman had already said so. I knew it, Scarlett exclaimed happily when she heard Aston's words, which vaguely seemed to be admittance. HMPH, Chris Douglas actually didn't appreciate it and made his subordinate slap me when he realizes his mistake later and comes to apologize to you. You mustn't forgive them easily despite finding it amusing. Aston stayed composed and said indignantly, okay, when they come I will make them apologize to you. Scarlett burst with joy. This means that Aston thinks I am someone important. Dominic was Extremely satisfied too. Although the Brooks were from another county, there was no reason to limit business to just one county. For example, Aston Brooke was now in Orange County to cooperate with the Carters, and he could even obtain the apology of a top family in the county. Clearly the Brooks had great potential for development. If the Carters could form ties with the Brooks, their future development would become much better. Aston Brooke is a nice young man if Scarlett marries him well. B. In-laws and our ties will be even stronger. As Dominic thought of this, his impression of Aston got even better. He said to Scarlett, "Scarlett, don't bother with anything else for the next few days and just focus on accompanying Aston. Lead him around the county." Scarlett naturally agreed happily. Turtle B. Troublesome. Aston thanked him politely, but he was well aware of what thoughts they harbored her. "Since they took the initiative to come to me, I won't stand on ceremony." Meanwhile, Lucas was driving Cheyenne back to the Brilliance Corporation. However, Cheyenne was silent along the way and she looked extremely upset, making Lucas' heart ache. But that was a thorn in Cheyenne's heart, and Lucas couldn't counsel her or anything. He could only let her get over it on her own and understand that it wasn't worth having any negative emotions because of the Carters at all, much less sadness or misery. Lucas parked his car outside the entrance of the Brilliance Corporation after seeing Cheyenne enter the office. He picked up his phone and called Flynn Davis to say a few words to him. The fact that Aston Brooke had been staring at Cheyenne just now and seemed to be interested made Lucas feel rather worried. Of course, what he was worried about was Cheyenne's safety and security. If he were to be just like Sate Miller, Cheyenne would be embroiled in even more trouble soon. Davis returned. "Hey, call Mr. Gray, we've checked it. That person is Aston Brooke, who is from a top family in another county. They own several businesses, the largest of which is the solar corporation. Estelle Brooke, whom we met in Lion Restaurant, is Aston Brooke's sister." When Davis said this, Lucas immediately remembered that wild couple Estelle Brooke and her husband Declan Adams. "I don't want to see any of the Brooks businesses in Orange County. Do as you deem fit," Lucas said calmly into the phone. "Yes, Mr. Gray." Davis immediately agreed. With the power of the Stardust Corporation in Orange County today, he didn't have to take a family from another county seriously. As long as they released some news, the Brooks would naturally be unable to find any decent business partners in Orange County. Lucas was about to hang up when he suddenly remembered one more thing. "By the way, one more thing, spare the Douglases, but do what you should for the offenses they committed." "Okay, I know, Mr. Gray, I'll carry out your instructions." Accordingly, Davis said respectfully. Chris Douglas took Gordon Douglas, who had broken legs and was lying on the stretcher, to the hospital. "Instead of heading straight home, after all your legs are severely injured, you need to recuperate well in the hospital for a while after completing the administrative procedures in the hospital." Chris said these words to Gordon with a nonchalant expression. "HMPH, you must be very smug now. I made a mistake and got beaten, yet you acted all capable and competent in front of Dad. Do you think you can undermine me just by doing that?" Gordon glared at Chris with a gloomy gaze. "Haha, you are reading too much into things." Chris chuckled coldly and turned around to leave. "Hey, Chris!" Douglas stopped right there behind him. Gordon yelled loudly, but Chris didn't even turn around as his eyes gleamed peculiarly. "This good for nothing Gordon Douglas will soon hold no value. There's no point in holding it against someone who's about to die." Chapter 81. Brad Douglas Death. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. In the hall of the Douglas family's main residence, the phone beside Hugo Douglas, who had been anxiously waiting for news, suddenly rang. "How is it?" Hugo asked impatiently as soon as the call connected. "Good news. Apart from the Lux Heaven Media and 3 entertainment joints and bathhouses ordered to cease operations permanently, the other companies are allowed to resume operations. However, we have to pay a large fine," said a Douglas on the other end of the line. "That's good. The fine doesn't matter. Hey, Douglases can still afford to pay it," Hugo said in a much more relaxed tone. The tension of his face also eased up. Although he had lost several lucrative companies which were pillar businesses of the corporation, it was much better than having the entire Douglas family be wiped out. As long as they were given some time to operate their businesses, they would slowly recoup their losses. Sooner or later, at most, they would just change the names of their companies. Hugo hung up the phone in high spirits. The family members gathered around him immediately looked at him expectantly. "Has the matter been resolved?" "There's hope for our family, right? Has Chris settled everything? Is that person no longer going to pursue the matter?" Facing their anxious and expectant gazes, Hugo nodded slowly and said with a smile, "Yes, we've safely overcome our crisis this time." In an instant, the 10 odd Douglases immediately looked relieved and they praised Chris incessantly. "Chris is really reliable and capable. He's only been out for an hour or so and the matter has already been settled. He's really worthy of being the next successor. He's really not bad. Of course, that goes without saying. After all, he has Hugo's genes, like father, like son." Hugo smiled while listening to them praising Chris, but his heart was gloomy. In particular, he wanted to sneer when he heard them saying things like Chris was definitely competent because he was his son. It was because the eldest son, Chris Douglas, whom they were singing praises about, was not actually Hugo Douglas' biological son but the bastard child from an illicit affair between his wife and another man. If it weren't for the fact that Hugo was vying for the position of the patriarch of the family back then and needed a successor to increase his chances, he would never have allowed this bastard child Chris Douglas to survive. Previously, Hugo showered Chris with praises on several occasions in public and even said that he was going to be the successor of the Douglas family, all because he wanted Chris to think that he valued him so as to ensure that he would be devoted to working for the family. He thought that Chris would finally have a taste of how it felt to pave the way to success for others when he finally handed the family over to his biological son Gordon Douglas. Hugo felt that all of that was what Chris and his shameless mother owed him. At this moment, Chris happened to have just arrived home. As soon as he Entered the mansion, he was surrounded by many enthusiastic Douglases who kept praising him endlessly. Chris, the fact that we can overcome the crisis this time is all thanks to you. Yes, if it weren't for you, how could our family's crisis be resolved so quickly? Chris was stunned, but he soon smiled and said humbly, not at all, it's only right for me to do this for the family. Besides, I also took advantage of our family's name and prestige to get the matter resolved by fluke. Actually, Dad and all of you are the ones who deserve the credit. Hugo patted Chris' shoulder warm-hearted. Ly, it's no wonder you are my son. Well done. Chris hurriedly lowered his head. It's all because you taught me well, Dad. It's all thanks to your glory. The two of them looked at each other and smiled, looking like an affectionate pair of father and son. Hey, where's Gordon? Didn't he come back with you? Hugo asked when he suddenly noticed that Gordon wasn't around. With a glint in his eyes, Chris answered warmly, I saw that Gordon's legs were severely injured and I was scared that his condition might worsen, so I sent him to the hospital. Although his injuries didn't really hurt his muscles and bones, since we were just putting on a show for Lucas Gray, he's still quite badly injured, so I thought that it'd be better to let Gordon recuperate well in the hospital for a while. Okay, good to hear. Hugo nodded and left. However, he had no idea that Chris was staring at him with an icy cold gaze from behind. HMPH, old fogey. Are you thinking of making use of me to bring success to your son? I'll see how you are going to play mind games with me when your only biological son and grandson are dead. After walking to a corner where no one was around, Chris dialed a certain number and made a call. Okay, those two wastrels can be killed now, but remember to make sure they die in the hospital and don't leave any evidence behind. Gordon and Brad Douglas were both hospitalized because they were seriously injured. The Douglases had just gone through a crisis, so their power had been greatly reduced. They were also all overwrought with overwhelming matters to handle, and they trusted him even more than before as well. It was the perfect opportunity. Besides, he could blame the deaths of Brad and Gordon on Lucas. Not anyone could tolerate having to stoop low and bow to someone else like Chris had done at the Carter Corporation today. The following day, the news of the sudden deaths of both Gordon Douglas and Brad Douglas in the hospital spread like wildfire throughout the county. The Douglas family was considered a prestigious family in Orange County, and the deaths of the two direct descendants of the family naturally sparked numerous discussions and speculations in the county. Cheyenne also heard the news, and her expression changed immediately when she saw Lucas again. She asked him hesitantly, Brad Douglas and Gordon Douglas both died in the hospital yesterday. Have you heard about it? What, both of them died? Lucas was rather surprised. He went out with Jordan early in the morning and indeed did not know about it. Cheyenne looked at Lucas for a long time, unsure of what to say. Lucas suddenly laughed. Why are you looking at me like that? Do you suspect that I killed them? Cheyenne shook her head, well aware that Lucas shouldn't have done such a thing, even though she knew that he was capable of it. Looking at Lucas worriedly, she said, in that case you have to be more careful. Brad Douglas' death is reportedly due to complications caused by an infected wound, and Jordan was the one who inflicted it. I am worried that the Douglases might blame it on you. Chapter 82, Death by Infection. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Hearing her words, Lucas smiled and looked at her tenderly. Don't worry, the injuries we inflicted on Brad Douglas weren't severe enough to be fatal. Even if they try to investigate, they won't be able to associate it with me, so I won't be in trouble. Cheyenne finally felt much less worried, but she nevertheless reminded Lucas, anyway, you should be more careful. Yes, I will, Lucas answered with a smile. After Cheyenne left, a cold expression appeared on his face. There was definitely more to the double deaths of Brad Douglas and Gordon Douglas. If no one provoked him, he wouldn't care to interfere with the family matters of the Douglases. However, if someone was foolish enough to try to blame the matter on him, he wouldn't be merciful and would simply chop off his hand. He was no saint after all. At this moment, the Douglas residence was all black, and the two large black lacquered wooden coffins were placed in the middle of the hall, surrounded by countless white wreaths. The Douglas family was a top family in Orange County. Since such a huge incident happened all of a sudden, there were naturally many guests. Regardless of whether they were close or not, they would all have to attend and offer parting words to the deceased. They would also have to show their respect and then comfort the Douglases. Hugo sat beside the hall and stared at the two coffins in front of him with a deadpan expression. He wasn't moving at all and was acting as if he couldn't hear or see anything happening around him. His face, which was still rosy and healthy, previously seemed to have aged more than 10 years overnight. The two coffins in front of him were those of his only son Gordon Douglas and his only grandson Brad Douglas. However, they would never open their eyes again at the thought of this. Tears rolled down Hugo's face. This scene made the countless guests who came to offer their condolences sigh with emotion. Anyone would be upset and grief-stricken to lose their son and grandson at an old age. Fortunately, he had his eldest son Chris Douglas, who could carry on the family bloodline. At this moment, Chris also looked like he was grief-stricken and had tears in his eyes as he received the comfort and condolences from the guests on behalf of the Douglases. Sometimes when something struck a sour note in him, he would weep and feel overwhelmed by the misery of the deaths of his younger brother and nephew. All of a sudden, all the people who came to offer condolences felt emotional, as they could tell that the Douglas brothers shared a close relationship with each other. However, after everyone left in the dead of the night, Chris looked at the two large coffins in the hall, and his mournful expression was now replaced by the derisive smile of a victor. On the second day after the burial of Brad and Gordon, Hugo finally came out of his bedroom and regained some of his vitality. However, Hugo had grey hair and a hunched back. His eyes were also emanating a sharp glint, making everyone's heart jump. All the Douglases waited in the hall, not even daring to breathe. Hugo sat down on a chair in the hall, looked at everyone and said slowly, a few days ago my son Gordon and my grandson Brad both passed away in the hospital due to a severe infection of their wounds. Hugo's Voice was hoarse as soon as he said these words. A middle-aged woman dashed out, fell onto the ground, and started crying miserably. Hugo, you must avenge Gordon and Brad. They died a wrongful death, but the scoundrel who killed them is still alive and well. You can't let him off easily. You must make him pay for it. The middle-aged woman was none other than Brad's mother and Gordon's wife, having lost her husband and son in one night. She was about to lose her mind. In particular, she had also heard that they had been badly beaten because they had offended Lucas Gray. Even after they had been hospitalized, he still wasn't willing to let them off and ended up killing them, or so she thought. Brad's injuries were serious but not fatal, and the same went for Gordon's, so it was impossible for them to die in the hospital overnight. While the woman wept miserably, the Douglases started discussing endlessly. Almost all of them agreed that there was something fishy about the deaths of Brad and Gordon, although they didn't feel much for the overbearing and haughty Gordon and the loafer Brad, who was often up to nothing good and only knew to cause trouble. They were still the core members of the family, yet they were both killed by such brutal means, so they felt fearful and insulted. Everyone looked at Hugo, hoping that he would issue orders to find the scoundrel who bullied them and then kill him without anyone knowing, to avenge the deaths of the two Douglases. However, to everyone's surprise, not only did Hugo not promise to find the culprit to avenge Brad and Gordon, but he even looked at them sullenly and said austerely, from now on no one is allowed to talk about the deaths of Brad and Gordon, otherwise don't blame me for being merciless and punishing you with the family laws. Hugo's words left all of them astonished. He's actually threatening us with the family laws in order to suppress this matter. Why could it be that the culprit behind this is so powerful that even Hugo doesn't dare to mess with him? No, you can't do that. You clearly know that they were both murdered. How can you not avenge them? The middle-aged woman yelled, unable to accept this result. Shut up, Hugo barked and glared at the middle-aged woman. Are you turning a deaf ear to my words? Now that my son is gone, I can let you leave the family if you want. The middle-aged woman was so frightened by Hugo that she started convulsing with fear, not daring to air her grievances. She had now lost her husband and her son and could only live the rest of her life depending on Hugo. If she provoked him and ended up getting kicked out by him, her life would be miserable. Hugo stood up and looked around at the crowd in the middle of the hall. Did all of you hear what I said? If I find out that anyone talks about this again, don't blame me for not warning you beforehand. Chapter 83. Swallowing his pride. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Under the compelling gaze of Hugo, all the Douglases did not dare to look at him as they hurriedly hung their heads low and chorused in unison, yes, old sir. One more thing. Hugo looked at the white mourning fabric that hadn't been cleared away yet with a grief-stricken expression. Gordon and Brad have just been buried, so don't change the arrangements in the house too soon. Also, everyone in the family is forbidden from entertaining and socializing for the next 1 week, or else you will be disowned, Hugo said austerely, making their hearts drop. Having just lost his closest kin, it was only normal that Hugo would want to see them laughing and having a whale of a time. However, if they had to cease all entertainment activities, their entertainment joints would also have to close for a week, which would result in a huge loss. Besides, the Douglases had just suffered an enormous loss, so this loss would be even more severe. Everyone wanted to give their opinion, but looking at Hugo's expression, they could only stay silent. After the family members left, Hugo called Chris to his study. Standing in front of Hugo with his hands by his side and looking down, he looked just like a filial son. Hugo stared at Chris and seemed to be trying to detect something from his face. No matter how thick-skinned Chris might be, he couldn't stay calm because he had a guilty conscience. Dad, why did you ask to see me? Chris asked. While looking at the oppressive gaze in Hugo's eyes, Hugo looked away and expressed assent as if he had been interrupted from his trance. Do you know why I said that in the hall just now? He was referring to his orders for everyone not to discuss the deaths of Brad and Gordon Douglas. In fact, Chris was confused about it too. His men had killed Gordon and Brad, and he even planned to make an issue out of their deaths and then put the blame on Lucas Gray so that he could avoid suspicion. No one would suspect that he had killed his younger brother and nephew. In fact, even the middle-aged woman, Gordon's wife, had heard about the deaths of her husband and son from someone Chris sent. He reckoned that Hugo would definitely agree to the request since he was grief-stricken over the demise of his son and grandson. However, he never expected that Hugo would choose not to confront Lucas and instead order all the family members not to bring it up again. Chris lowered his head and hid the emotions in his eyes as he said respectfully, I don't know, but Dad, you've always been wise, so I reckon there must be a reason for your decision. Hugo sighed. Gordon and Brad are my biological son and grandson, so of course I want to avenge them. However, we can't openly go around saying that Lucas Gray killed them. First, we don't have any concrete proof, and secondly, we might alarm him and cause him to flee. By then it would be difficult to seek revenge. Chris nodded in a moment of epiphany and exclaimed, Dad, you are so wise. It indeed isn't time for us to announce this yet. We should get rid of Lucas Gray when his guard is down. Yes, the murderer is Lucas Gray, and we can roughly confirm that even if he wasn't the one, he was still the one who beat up Gordon and Brad. We have every right to look for him. Hugo gritted his teeth. Immediately afterward, Hugo reached out and patted Chris on his shoulder. Chris, you are my only son now. I'll hand over the task of killing Lucas Gray and avenging Brad and Gordon to you. After you complete it, I will convene a meeting and hand over the position of the successor of the Douglas family to you. In public, Hugo's eyes were full of an inscrutable menace. Lucas Gray was not to be trifled with, and since his biological son was dead, there was no need for the bastard child Chris Douglas to continue living either. Besides, the murderer might really be Lucas, but it could also be the ingrate Chris. If the two of them were to be at odds with each other, they could just kill each other regardless of which one of them died. It would be good only then could he avenge Gordon and Brad. When Hugo thought of that scene, his hands began trembling suddenly. He heard a loud sound. Chris burst into laughter. Chris was just like an obedient dog in front of him, yet he suddenly laughed after hearing that Hugo was going to hand over the position of successor to him. Hugo was shocked and soon he was furious. He had clearly just said that no one was to laugh or chatter for the sake of mourning Brad and Gordon, yet Chris was laughing. What are you laughing about? Hugo flew into a rage and glared at Chris. Haha, Dad, you mean that if I don't seek revenge on Lucas Gray, you won't give me the position of successor, right? Chris asked with a smile. Hugo found his action peculiar and frowned. Of course not, you are my only son, who else would I hand it to but you? Haha, who knows, I am not your biological son. How could you hand the family over to me? I am afraid you must be thinking about how to kill me, right? Chris was still smiling, but in Hugo's opinion, he was like a terrifying demon. What nonsense are you babbling about? Hugo roared with shock and fear within him. When did this bastard find out, or has he always been pretending all this while? Has he been pretending so well that I thought he was an obedient dog and he's only showing his true colors? Now all of a sudden Hugo's heart was full of horror and anxiety. You should know whether or not I am babbling nonsense. Since he had already revealed his true colors, Chris saw no need to pretend and walked toward the couch to sit down calmly. You just want me to deal with Lucas Gray and end up getting injured too? It's best if we both die, right? Chapter 84. Another funeral. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Chris' words made Hugo take a few steps back in astonishment, almost falling onto the ground. Hugo stared in shock and horror while pointing at Chris Douglas, his fingers trembling violently, barely able to utter a complete sentence. You my plans and thoughts have been seen through by this scumbag. You get lost. Get out of my house immediately. I will never hand over the family assets to a bastard like you, Hugo hollered while pointing at the door. It's too late. Chris didn't move at all. Instead he smiled even more joyously. I didn't want to take action so soon at first, but you forced me into this. Hearing his words, Hugo acutely sensed danger. What do you mean? Chris smiled and clapped his hands. A stranger with neatly combed hair, donning a grey suit and gold-rimmed glasses, pushed open the door to the study and walked in. Who are you? Who let you in? Get out. Hugo barked furiously. The matter had already escalated beyond Hugo's control, and in fact he even felt a strong sense of crisis. The stranger didn't pay attention to Hugo and instead walked straight to Chris, bent low and bowed. He then took out a document from his briefcase and laid it on the coffee table in front of him. Respectfully, Mr. Douglas Senior, this is the will that I have prepared according to your instructions. I have already verified that everything has been signed by you. Now you only need to have to sign the last page with your thumbprint, the stranger said to Hugo. Hugo widened his eyes in disbelief. Immediately afterward he flew into a rage. Bastard, since when did I ever make a will? When did I ever verify it with my signature? This is all just tricks you are playing. This will doesn't belong to me. It has no legal effect at all. I am going to go look for someone. This document is fabricated. It doesn't count. I am going to kick you out of the family, you bastard. Hugo began to panic. His unfilial son had already brought out a fabricated will. Who knows what he might do next? Hugo was bent on immediately leaving to look for security and the other family members to kick him out. At this moment there was a loud thump on the back of Hugo's head. Hugo slowly turned around and saw that Chris had smashed his head with an ashtray. His lips were trembling, but he couldn't even utter a single word. Afterward Hugo slowly began crumbling forward. Chris walked to Hugo's side, squatted down and said softly, you can now go and reunite with your precious son and grandson. Don't worry, I'll politely accept the entire Douglas family. Hugo's throat moved a few times, but he still couldn't say a single word. In the end his pupils dilated as blood flowed out from the back of his head, forming a huge pool of blood on the ground. Oh no, someone come here. Dad accidentally slipped and fell. Hurry and call an ambulance. Chris began yelling anxiously. In the study the Douglases were in chaos again. Soon the Douglases, which had just held 2 funerals, held their third one within a short span of a few days. 3 significant figures of the family died one after another. The news took all of Orange County by storm. Countless people were privately discussing the Douglas family's successive deaths over the past few days, and countless speculations spread throughout the county. However, at this juncture Chris had already successfully become the new head of the Douglas family after the funeral ceremony as the only living son of Hugo Douglas and holding the will left by him before his demise, coupled with the public statements he made about making Chris Douglas the successor. Chris Douglas was able to take over the position as the head of the family smoothly and successfully. No one raised any doubts. The changes in the Douglas family naturally caused a tremendous uproar in the county. Some people who had been harmed by the Douglases, such as Charlotte, was stunned upon hearing the news. Charlotte sneered, her, this is karma. The Douglases committed too many disgusting misdeeds and now heaven won't spare them either. All 3 of them have dropped dead in the Carter main residence. After Dominic heard the news and felt astonished, he gave it some careful thought. He then grinned merrily and quickly called his granddaughter Scarlett right over. Scarlett, have you heard about what happened to the Douglases? Hugo Douglas asked. Scarlett nodded. Yes, they are just out of luck, but that has nothing to do with us, right? Haha, silly child. Dominic rubbed his hands happily. Think about it, the Douglases specially came to apologize to Mr. Brooke, but they mistakenly apologized to that scoundrel Lucas Gray instead. Next their family members died one after another. Haven't you figured out the key point? Feeling puzzled, Scarlett thought about it for a while before coming to a sudden realization. Grandpa, I understand. It must be because they offended Mr. Brooke. Shush, keep your voice down. Just keep it to yourself and make sure you don't tell anyone about it, lest you bring trouble to Mr. Brooke. Understood? Dominic instructed sternly. With glistening eyes, Scarlett covered her mouth and nodded repeatedly. Yes. Don't worry, Grandpa, I will definitely keep my lips sealed and not cause trouble for Aston. Speaking of which, how are you and him progressing? Are you confident? Dominic asked at the mention of this. Scarlett began to look uneasy. She had been accompanying Aston for the past few days. Aston was physically attractive and a good sweet talker as well. They had long advanced to home run hearing her grandfather's question. At this moment Scarlett blushed and said smugly, "Don't worry Grandpa, we are progressing well. He promised to discuss our marriage with his elders when he returns to La after some time. Ha 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 ha, not bad not bad. You are indeed worthy of being my granddaughter." Impressive. Dominic was overjoyed as he clapped his hands. "Scarlett, you must hold on tight to Aston. Once you are married, you'll be the most prestigious lady of a wealthy family and the Carters will rise to the peak again. Thanks to them we will become your most reliable maiden home." Meanwhile Cheyenne was still feeling uneasy and full of mixed emotions after hearing about the deaths of the Douglases. Chapter 85. Cheyenne gets hit. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Within a few days all 3 members of the Douglas family's direct line of succession died to the world at large. Brad and Gordon Douglas had passed away because of health complications caused by their infected injuries, while Hugo Douglas fell down at home because he was too grief-stricken and knocked the back of his head, thereby unfortunately passing away. However, many didn't believe this. Cheyenne didn't believe it either, especially since a conflict had just broken out between Lucas and the Douglases because of Charlotte and her just a few days ago, yet they died a few days later. This made it hard for Cheyenne to believe that this really had nothing to do with Lucas, thus she was feeling extremely complicated. On the one hand, she didn't want to believe that Lucas would be ruthless enough to kill them for the sake of revenge, but on the other hand the facts left her with no choice but to doubt him. So when Lucas came to pick her up from work at the entrance of the Brilliance Corporation office, Cheyenne decided to voice her doubts as she couldn't endure the torment in her heart. "Did you cause the deaths of the Douglases?" When Lucas heard this, his hand stiffened, then he drove to the roadside to pull over and stepped on the brakes. "Cheyenne, are you suspecting that I killed those people?" Lucas asked bitterly. Cheyenne bit her lips. "I don't want to suspect you either, but you did have a conflict with the Douglases because of what happened to me in Charlotte. Moreover, I haven't heard of them offending anyone lately apart from you. I know you definitely are capable of doing this, but I don't want you to go too far and commit such illegal acts." He smiled bitterly. "Am I an immoral devil who kills others without feeling anything in your eyes?" Pinching her palm, Cheyenne looked at Lucas. "Does that mean that their deaths really have nothing to do with you?" He looked into her eyes solemnly and nodded. "I do have the ability to kill them, but I wasn't the one who did this. If I did, I'd admit to my own doings, but since I didn't, I won't. The Douglases aren't worthy of my intervention." Cheyenne realized that she had indeed misunderstood him, since Lucas had the ability to destroy the Douglas family at any time. There was indeed no need for him to take their lives. "I am sorry too, was just worried that you did something impulsive." She apologized. After all, anyone would be displeased to be suspected of being a murderer. "It's okay, I understand, don't worry." Lucas nodded, well aware of what she was worried about. She was just afraid that he might step on the wrong path of no return and didn't want Amelia to have such a terrifying father. However, her concerns were completely unnecessary because he was extremely clear what his bottom line was. Besides, he would dirty his hands easily. After hearing what Lucas said, Cheyenne finally felt relieved. The following morning Cheyenne went to work. As soon as she entered her office, Jane Harper walked over and threw a pile of documents onto her desk. Before she could even turn on her computer, Jane ended up knocking over Cheyenne's cup, but fortunately there was no water in it. "Convert the data in these documents into tables and statistical reports. Make 2 sets of slides. I need them for the meeting at 9:30 later," Jane ordered. While frowning in annoyance, Cheyenne sorted out the documents scattered all over the desk. There were about 50 documents, which cumulatively were half the thickness of a dictionary. She flipped through them only to see that there were all sorts of data tables and some scribbling on them. Cheyenne subconsciously frowned. It was nearly 8:30, only an hour before the meeting. The thick stack of documents would require a long time to process, and she even had to consolidate them into a single data table and then turn them into presentation slides. Putting the data into tables alone would require at least 2 days. Getting all of it done in an hour was an absolutely impossible task. "Ms. Harper, the time is too tight. I am afraid I won't be able to get it ready in time. Do you have original digital spreadsheets of this information? If you do." Before Cheyenne could finish, Jane snapped hostilely, "Are you a good for nothing? I can't even get you to do a simple task. Can't get it ready in time. Do you come to the office every day just to muddle through? You should have been fired long ago." Cheyenne took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the anger welling up in her chest. Jane Harper was clearly making things difficult for her on purpose. It wasn't the first time either. From the day Cheyenne rejoined the Brilliance Corporation and started working from the bottom, Jane had already requested to transfer Cheyenne over to her department. Initially, Cheyenne thought that she was just being grateful and trying to take care of her when Cheyenne was still in the Brilliance Corporation as the chairman of the board of directors. Jane was just an ordinary fresh graduate due to her humble family background and the fact that Cheyenne saw her getting bullied on several occasions in the office. Cheyenne took pity on her and made an exception to promote her to her personal assistant. Although she took on the role of an ordinary assistant, being the assistant of the company's chairman meant that she was treated completely differently from ordinary assistants. Thus, with Cheyenne's help, Jane propelled to a high position and her status and salary skyrocketed, to making many envious. However, after the Carters took away the Brilliance Corporation from Cheyenne later, Jane did not talk to her much when she saw her around and even avoided her. Cheyenne thought that Jane was just worried that she might be implicated and offend the Carters if they saw her talking to her. However, Cheyenne never thought that Jane would ask to have her transferred to her department just so she could torture her every day by giving her arduous tasks that were impossible to finish. She reprimanded Cheyenne all the time and was actually the one who forced her To go to heaven media by threatening to have fired by giving Cheyenne such a thick stack of documents and a Herculean task that was impossible to finish. Johnny was also deliberately trying to humiliate her and make things difficult. At the thought of this, Cheyenne no longer wanted to try to complete the task. She looked at Johnny and said, "Ms. Harper, I don't think I've ever treated you poorly in the past. Why do you have to torture me intentionally like this?" Cheyenne thought she was communicating calmly, but to her surprise, as soon as she finished speaking, Johnny suddenly raised her hand and slapped her across the face with all her might. Smack. Chapter 86. Johnny Harper's death. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. Jane's merciless slap landed hard on Cheyenne's face, making her cock her head toward the side, and soon Cheyenne's entire cheek became swollen. This loud slap stunned everyone in the office, and they all stopped what they were doing and looked over. HMPH, I was clearly just briefing you on the tasks you have to do as per normal, but you said I am intentionally torturing you. I'll let you feel what it's like to be tortured. Do you understand now? Johnny Harper stared at Cheyenne arrogantly with a smug expression on her made up face. Tell me yourself, since you came to work under me, how many tasks have you completed? You hand them to me late every single time. How much of my time did you waste when I sent you to negotiate with the Douglases previously? It was already a show bet, yet you messed things up. You are so useless. Today I asked you to make data tables and slides. Is this very difficult? Anyone can do such a simple task, and yet you are being so adamant about complaining that you can't finish it. Are you much more noble than others? HMPH. Cheyenne Carter, do you think you are still the same high and mighty chairman of the board? Wake up, you are just a lowly staff. If you can't even do such a simple thing, you can get lost. The Brilliance Corporation won't feed someone useless like you. Jane's voice was very loud as she reprimanded Cheyenne incessantly, causing the other staff from other departments to look over. If they only heard her accusations, those who didn't know what really happened would definitely think that Cheyenne's incompetence was why she failed to complete such a simple task, and think that she was deliberately trying to stall for time. However, none of them knew how arduous these so-called simple tasks that Johnny handed to Cheyenne every day really were. During this period of time, Cheyenne had been spending her nights doing work at home until midnight just so she could complete these tasks and hand them to her the following morning. However, even then Johnny still accused her of deliberately procrastinating and handing them to her late. Johnny was obviously making things difficult for Cheyenne, and she even slapped her, yet she twisted facts and spoke with so much gusto that the people in other departments felt that she had every right to reprimand Cheyenne. They thought no one would want a lousy employee like Cheyenne, who was incompetent yet sly, lazy, and often slacked off. As for some employees in this department, they were naturally clearer about the details. However, Cheyenne Carter was merely a junior employee while Johnny Harper was a deputy manager of a business department. Naturally, no one would want to stand up for Cheyenne and end up offending Johnny. Cheyenne covered her flushed face while her heart was full of anger and grievances. She clenched her fists tightly. Are you still not convinced? HMPH. Forget it. Since you can't even do a simple task like drawing up a table, go and pour me a cup of hot water and bring it to my office. Don't tell me that you can't even pour a cup of water. What are you waiting for? Get to it now, Johnny hollered sternly. Her face red and swollen, Cheyenne clenched her teeth. Then she went to the office pantry and brought a cup of hot water. Over the water Cheyenne poured was not pure boiling hot water but lukewarm water that was just right for drinking. When Cheyenne returned with this cup of water, she heard some people in the office gathered around Johnny, sucking up to her. Ms. Harper, you are so impressive. You are so young and you managed to become a deputy manager. You are so young and pretty, and you are really capable too. I am so envious. That's right, Ms. Harper is so much better than that bitch Cheyenne Carter. If not for the fact that she had the support of the Carters previously, she would be fit to carry Ms. Harper's shoes. Ms. Harper, your skin is so good. How do you take care of your skin? You look so much better than other girls in their 20s. My sister went abroad on a business trip and brought me a set of skincare products, but I don't use them at all. Why don't you try it out for me? Haha, how can I accept it? Johnny said. However, she grabbed the gift bag of skincare products when she saw the large stack of money in it. Her smile became even more radiant. The Grange Corporation's project is not too bad. I will let you be in charge of it, Johnny said to the young woman who gave her the gift. The young woman was instantly overjoyed and thanked her repeatedly. The project with the Grange Corporation had a huge profit margin, and she pondered for a long time but couldn't figure out why it didn't get accepted. Under the guidance of others, she finally understood the trick. Indeed, after she sent a gift package worth more than $10,000, she managed to clinch the project. Although she felt the pinch of giving such a hefty gift, she would be able to recoup her losses soon if she managed the project well. The young woman was on cloud nine. The others looked at this scene with envy and jealousy while thinking about the profitable projects that they could work hard on. Cheyenne was outside and could not see what was inside the gift bag, but she felt that Jane's behavior was very inappropriate. However, she couldn't say anything as long as the young female colleague insisted that it was a normal gift between women. No one could find an issue with it. Ms. Harper, here's the water you wanted. Cheyenne handed the glass of water to Johnny. Okay. Johnny Harper glared at Cheyenne indifferently. Then she grabbed the glass of water and took a sip. Before the water touched her lips, Johnny Harper's face turned furious and she splashed the water at Cheyenne's face. How can I drink such hot water? Are you trying to scald me? Cheyenne took a step back and the water missed her face but splashed onto her clothes. Water dripped down and she looked extremely distressed. Fortunately, Cheyenne had added some cold water. Had the hot water scalded her, she would have definitely suffered severe burns. Even if Cheyenne had a good temper, she couldn't tolerate it. Now, Johnny Harper, I've had enough of your nitpicking. If the water were really hot, weren't you worried that it would have scalded me? HMPH did You get scolded. Johnny Harper raised her head disdainfully. Cheyenne, you are used to being a pampered heiress, aren't you? You couldn't even get a glass of water properly. You are a good for nothing. How dare you call me by my full name? Are you sick of your job? Go to the HR department and submit your letter of resignation. I won't stop you. Cheyenne looked at Johnny coldly. Do you think you can order me around and bully me however you want just because you are my manager? Chapter 87 Super Promotion. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Cheyenne's face turned sullen and her aura became austere, instantly reminding Johnny of the time when she was just a fresh graduate and was full of awe toward Cheyenne. She had even developed a sense of inferiority then. However, Johnny soon got rid of this feeling. She was now a deputy manager at the Brilliance Corporation while Cheyenne was just a junior employee subordinate to her. Cheyenne was at her beck and call. Johnny looked at Cheyenne with contempt. Yes, do you still think that you are the lofty chairman you used to be and that I am still your assistant? Now I am your manager and you have to do whatever I tell you. You have to bear with all the scoldings and beatings that I give. I know you still harbor thoughts of going back to the management level and climbing to the top of the Brilliance Corporation, but those are merely your delusions. I am telling you, as long as I am here you will never get a chance to be promoted. You will stay at the bottom as an ordinary employee for the rest of your life and you will never be able to climb up again. Johnny hollered at Cheyenne with a menacing expression. She was furious and envious of her. How could Cheyenne Carter be so lucky as to be born into a wealthy family and have such a beautiful face? She even became the chairman of the company at such a young age and possessed everything that everyone is envious of. Why did I have to be so lowly and inferior in front of her while she did me favors and bestowed kindness? Now Cheyenne Carter has finally fallen from her pedestal and become far worse than me. I, Johnny Harper, will step all over her and never give her the chance to climb up again. Cheyenne found it really ironic. Johnny was now a deputy manager, but she managed to get to that position because of Cheyenne's help, yet Johnny was now throwing her weight around and putting on airs in front of her. She even swore to condemn Cheyenne and undermine her. In that case, all her previous thoughts were just overly naive and righteous. Thinking of this, Cheyenne took a deep breath and glanced at Johnny coldly. Is that so? Keep your eyes wide open. I hope you will never regret it. After saying this, Cheyenne stopped looking at Johnny and the others in the office who had peculiar expressions. She headed straight to the washroom to change out of her wet clothes. Soon everything that happened in the business department office was reported in detail. Flynn Davis didn't dare to be negligent when it came to Cheyenne's affairs. He not only sent someone to pay attention to Cheyenne's actions in the company but also reported these matters to Lucas as soon as possible. When Lucas heard that Johnny had openly humiliated Cheyenne, slapped her and even splashed hot water on her in front of everyone at the office, an icy white cold gaze appeared in his eyes and he was on the verge of killing someone. SH is merely a deputy manager of the business department and yet she has the audacity to insult Cheyenne. Previously Johnny was the one who forced her to go to Heaven Media to discuss the cooperation with it, but he hadn't had the time to deal with her yet. Now she was getting worse. On the other end of the line, Davis seemed to be able to sense a coldness coming from Lucas. He was so nervous that he didn't dare to breathe deeply at all. Conduct a thorough investigation on Johnny Harper. Since she has received bribes openly in the office, she definitely can't be clean. Find out all the dirty deeds that she has done over the years, sort out pay evidence and report her to the police. Lucas said coldly. Yes, Mr. Gray, I'll send someone to check it out right away and I'll make sure to do a careful job. Davis hurriedly answered. At this moment a text message was sent to Lucas' phone. It was from Cheyenne. Lucas hurriedly opened it and smirked after reading the content. Clearly this silly girl has finally figured it out. Before ending the call with Davis, Lucas ordered, I want to make Cheyenne the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation. Go draft the official documents now and announce it before noon. I want everyone in the Brilliance Corporation to hear it. Davis was astonished, but he immediately answered, yes, Mr. Gray, I'll get to it. Immediately he was shocked, naturally, because he knew that Cheyenne had previously rejected Lucas' proposal to directly make her the chairman of the Brilliance Corporation, as she wanted to start from scratch. However, he was also clear about what Johnny had just said. Now Cheyenne's choice was the most appropriate approach. Get someone to spread the word and say that the company is likely to promote Johnny Harper to the position of the director of the business department. Davis was a little confused why Lucas wanted to promote someone like Johnny Harper, but he quickly figured it out and wanted to curse himself for being so silly. Since Johnny had the audacity to bully Cheyenne, how could Lucas still promote her by releasing the news? He just wanted her to become conceited. Pay higher she stood, the harder she would fall. Okay, I understand, Mr. Gray, Davis acknowledged, then proceeded to get to it. Lucas sat on the couch and looked at the message Cheyenne sent on the screen. Can I be the general manager? He felt heartache, but he was heartened too. This silly girl has finally decided to depend on me. Soon an assistant of the HR department rushed to the office of the business department and said to Johnny smilingly, I specially came back to congratulate you, Ms. Harper, you'll be promoted soon. Hearing this, Johnny was overjoyed and she frantically asked, really, am I really going to be promoted? I am going to be appointed manager. She had been in the position of deputy manager for some time and her former boss Carter had already been given the sack some time ago. Johnny thought that the position would naturally be given to her. To her surprise, she finally received the news. After such a long time, Johnny smiled and the employees around her were also about to congratulate her on her promotion, but the HR assistant shook her head. No, you are not going to be promoted to a manager. Johnny Harper froze and everyone around her was at a loss for words. Since it was a promotion, how could it not be to a manager? Congratulations, Ms. Harper, you'll soon become the director of the business department, the HR assistant exclaimed, panting heavily. Johnny Harper was overwhelmed with joy. As if she had won the lottery. Being promoted from a deputy manager to a department director was a Super promotion. Chapter 88 New General Manager Translator Atlas Studios Editor Atlas Studios Jani was incredibly excited about soon becoming a director, so much so that she was at a loss for what to say. Wow. Congratulations Ms. Harper. Congratulations Ms. Harper, you are going to be promoted to director in our company. You are the only one who could become a director at such a young age. Ms. Harper, please take care of us in the future. Let's treat Ms. Harper to dinner tonight to celebrate her promotion. The staff of the business department all gathered around Jani and praised her incessantly. Jani Harper was brimming with joy and she couldn't hide her smugness. Tonight I'll treat you all to dinner. Let's book 2 private rooms at Lion Restaurant. I'd like to thank you all for the trust you've had in me and for taking care of me all this while. In the future we will also continue to work together to make our business department expand and become stronger. Although the official promotion appointment letter hadn't been released yet, Jani was already full of vigor and had the demeanor of a leader. When they heard that Jani intended to treat them to dinner at Lion Restaurant, all the colleagues began cheering gleefully. Ms. Harper, you are so generous. We definitely won't lose out by working under Ms. Harper. At this moment Cheyenne, who had just changed into a clean set of clothes, entered. Jani pointed at Cheyenne. Let's all go to the Lion tonight, but this person is not welcome. As soon as they heard her words, everyone looked at Cheyenne gloatingly. Jani was now about to be promoted to the director of the business department, while Cheyenne was still just a junior employee. If they ended up offending Jani Harper, there would definitely be severe consequences. Cheyenne Carter is going to have a hard time from now on, well, unless she leaves the company after realizing that she can't stand it anymore. They were all pragmatic people, seeing how much Jani detested Cheyenne, so much so that she would even let Cheyenne take a few days off. No one wanted to take the risk of offending her. Thus they simply undermined Cheyenne. HMPH. Even I feel disgusted by Cheyenne Carter's pretentiousness. Let alone Ms. Harper. Exactly. Whenever Ms. Harper orders her to do something, she procrastinates and gives all sorts of excuses for her failure to complete it. Ms. Harper is too kind. If it were me, I would have already fired her. She acts like an heiress just because she used to be family with the Carters. The Brilliance Corporation has long been taken away from her, and SH is not even part of the Carter family anymore since they've already chased her out. SH is all alone now. I wonder what dirty tricks SH is using. HMPH. Ms. Harper is right. Tonight is a celebratory dinner for your promotion to director. How could we let someone come and ruin the atmosphere? Cheyenne's face turned gloomy. Jani Harper is actually going to be promoted to the director of the business department. This was something she was unaware of. However, Cheyenne was not worried at all because she knew that the owner of the Brilliance Corporation was Lucas, and she reckoned that he should be aware of the things that Jani had been doing. He was probably just giving her a false sense of joy. Cheyenne wasn't interested in the celebratory party either. Even if Jani invited her, she would go. She was just disappointed that the business department that she had single-handedly developed had already changed drastically. After 6 years of poor management by the Carters, the majority of the people still here were all bootlickers. Facing this group of people lashing out at her with harsh and malicious remarks because of Jani, Cheyenne looked at them coldly and humphed, I hope you will have an enjoyable celebration banquet tonight. Huh? Are you being sour because Ms. Harper didn't invite you? Ha ha ha. We're going to an expensive restaurant for a meal tonight thanks to Ms. Harper, while Cheyenne can only go home and cook for her loser husband. Ha 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 ha. I forgot Cheyenne Carter had a loser husband, but now that she has been kicked out by the Carters, she might also be chased out by the company by then. I wonder if her loser husband will still want her. Ha ha ha. Yes, exactly. After all, he just sponges off her once Cheyenne stops providing for him. I wonder what's going to happen to them. They started insulting her one after another. In the past, Cheyenne might still feel embarrassed, but now she just felt that they were a bunch of clowns. Without saying anything, she turned around and left to prepare for her future plans. After becoming the general manager, initially Cheyenne had turned down Lucas' offer to hand over the Brilliance Corporation directly to her and wanted to climb up the ladder with her own efforts so that others would be convinced that she truly had what it takes. However, everything that happened made Cheyenne understand that even if she was outstanding and hardworking, she would never be able to advance because of Jani Harper. Cheyenne had also figured something out. Her ultimate goal was to take back the Brilliance Corporation and purge all the bad practices and unscrupulous employees. She wanted the Brilliance Corporation to become healthy and full of vigor. Restoring it to what it used to be, trying to gain the recognition of others, was not the right thing to do as long as Lucas approved of her and she had the ability to improve the Brilliance Corporation. That would be enough. Soon before noon, a shocking piece of news spread to the ears of every employee of the Brilliance Corporation. A new general manager had already been appointed and would be arriving at the office in the afternoon. At that time, all the employees of the Brilliance Corporation, except those who were out of town on business trips, would have to go to the first floor of the office to meet the new general manager. Once the news came out, countless people began to talk about it since the Brilliance Corporation was taken away by the Stardust Corporation more than 10 days ago. The former general manager Bryce Carter was kicked out and the remaining Carters were also sacked. Thus there were many vacant positions. However, except for the temporary assignment of the deputy general manager to take care of the company affairs, no other vacant positions had been filled. In particular, the top position of general manager had been vacant for a long time. Many people had also been guessing if someone would be transferred over to fill the position or if a staff of the Brilliance Corporation would be promoted. To be honest, they would prefer an internal selection within the Brilliance Corporation so that everyone would have a fair chance. Besides, they were all old acquaintances and there would be more room for discussion. Have you heard who is the general manager this time? Is it someone from elsewhere or someone from our company? Someone asked. Chapter 89 Johnny Harper's Dreams. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Who knows? I asked the HR department and they all said they received an order from the higher UPS not to spread the word. They only said that well no in the afternoon, so it's pretty confidential. Her Johnny was also part of the gossiping team. She had just received the news today that she would be promoted to a director. And that the newly appointed general manager would be coming soon, thus she had to do her best to leave a good impression on the new general manager to get into his good books. It'll be best if the new general manager is a young and handsome bachelor. Johnny believed that with her competence and beauty she might be able to marry the general manager in the future if she could win his favor. That would be much more powerful than the authority she would have as the director of the business department. Johnny imagined how much power she would enjoy after she married the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation and how everyone would have to bow down to her if she were good at convincing him the Brilliance Corporation would be in her control. By then Cheyenne Carter would be nothing. Johnny was overjoyed, and when she turned around to look at Cheyenne, who was typing on her computer in the corner, she suddenly felt a strong sense of superiority. So what if the Brilliance Corporation used to belong to you? Soon it will become mine. As she thought of this, an arrogant expression appeared on her face and she strutted smugly toward Cheyenne's desk. In her heels she raised her hand and unplugged the cable connected to Cheyenne's computer. Cheyenne had just completed some project proposals and personnel transfer files and uploaded them to her cloud drive. However, she hadn't finished some spreadsheets yet, but the computer screen suddenly went black. She looked up to see Johnny standing in front of her with an arrogant and condescending expression, holding the power plug in her hand. A few ill-intentioned staff out to watch a good show surrounded them. What are you doing? Cheyenne frowned and looked at Johnny, who had obviously unplugged the power cord on purpose. Watch your tone with Ms. Harper. Before Johnny could say anything, a person with heavy makeup intervened and was eager to teach Cheyenne a lesson. Cheyenne didn't even bother paying attention to such a person and simply stared at Johnny to see what tricks she was playing. TSK, I don't even know what you are pretending to be busy for. The new general manager will be here soon. Did you know? Johnny Harper said leisurely after dropping the power cord, and Cheyenne asked, leaning back against her chair. Seeing how unconcerned and nonchalant Cheyenne was, Johnny was furious. Why does this woman always act as if she is so high and mighty? Johnny decided that she didn't want to fire Cheyenne so soon. She wanted to keep her around so that she could make her watch her become the wife of the general manager and take away the Brilliance Corporation. What are you pretending for? Who doesn't know that you were the chairman of the Brilliance Corporation in the past, but the Carters took it away from you later? You were then given a powerless junior position, and you even competed with Bryce Carter for the position of general manager, but unfortunately that old man would rather choose that wastrel Bryce than make you the general manager. You must be disappointed. Huh? There's going to be someone else taking the position of general manager. Does that make you sad? Johnny Harper said with a smile, deliberately out to upset Cheyenne. Ah, poor you. You used to be the high and mighty chairman of the board, but now you can only huddle in a corner of this office. You must be terrified, aren't you? Ha ha ha. Certain people just get better and better the higher they climbed, while the lives of some just get worse with time. This is life. I really advise certain people to recognize their own abilities sooner and know where they stand, lest they keep on dreaming. Exactly. She got driven out by her family and even married a loser husband. SHS stuck with her burdensome daughter too, so she will never make a comeback. Cheyenne looked at the hideous faces around her coldly without many emotions. Soon these scumbags who just liked to suck up to powerful people would be driven out of the Brilliance Corporation. At about 3 in the afternoon, a grey Mercedes-Benz commercial car pulled over at the Brilliance Corporation office entrance, and a refined middle-aged man got down from the backseat. He was James Denning, Flynn Davis' secretary, who often followed him around. The deputy general manager of the Brilliance Corporation, Lawrence Kamen, had long been standing at the door. He immediately walked toward the car. Mr. Denning, you are here. Hello, Mr. Kamen. Denning stretched his hand out to shake Kamen's hand. After an exchange of pleasantries, Denning asked, have they been notified? Yes, they were all notified in the morning. We're just waiting for you to announce it. He had naturally been notified of the arrangements in the morning since he was the interim deputy general manager. However, he didn't dare to tell outsiders, who could have guessed that the person who would become the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation would be that someone. As Denning arrived, all the staff in the Brilliance Corporation immediately put down what they were doing and hurried to the large conference room on the 3rd floor, which could accommodate more than 1,000 people. Ever since they received the notice this morning, the administration department had already set up the large conference room. All the management staff had been arranged seats according to their position and status in the front row of the conference room, and the other employees sat at the back according to their departments. Johnny hesitated for a moment but soon sat on a seat in the first row. Her official appointment letter had yet to be issued, so she was technically still a deputy manager for now and wasn't qualified to sit in the first row. However, she thought that since her promotion was already a sure bet, a moment sooner or later would make no difference. Besides, Johnny thought that she would only be able to leave a good impression on the new general manager and impress him with her good looks by sitting in the first row. Seeing Johnny Harper sitting in the first row of seats reserved for those in upper management positions, several other directors next to her frowned in puzzlement, but they didn't end up saying anything. Now there were already 2 people on the podium. In front, one was Lawrence Kamen, the Brilliance Corporation's interim deputy general manager, and the other was James Denning, the secretary, who was transferred over from the Stardust Corporation. The seat with the general manager nameplate was still vacant. Who could the mysterious general manager be? Everyone was eager to find out. Chapter 90 Cheyenne gets promoted. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Soon the meeting Officially began the Deputy General Manager Lawrence Kamen first made a simple statement before saying, I am sure all of you here have already heard of the news of the new General Manager of Pay Brilliance Corporation. Now let's have Mr. James Denning of Headquarters announce the appointment of the new General Manager. Everyone let's give him a round of applause. Clap clap. After the warm applause, Denning picked up the appointment letter and read it aloud solemnly. Miss Carter is hereby appointed as the General Manager of the Brilliance Corporation. She will be responsible for handling all the daily affairs of the Brilliance Corporation for a term of 10 years. The terms in this letter have been approved by the head office, the Stardust Corporation, after the relevant procedures. It shall take effect immediately from the date of its reading. May I invite the new General Manager, Miss Cheyenne Carter, to the stage to deliver a speech for everyone. As soon as Denning said this, everyone subconsciously began applauding. However, everyone below the stage had bewilderment and shock written all over their faces. The new General Manager is Cheyenne Carter. The Cheyenne Carter we know, but isn't Cheyenne Carter already down and out? Why did she suddenly become the General Manager of the Brilliance Corporation? If it isn't her, could it be someone else with the same name? But this name isn't common compared to other people's bewilderment and shock. Jani, who was sitting in the first row, was simply dumbfounded and astounded. She couldn't believe that Cheyenne Carter would actually become the General Manager of the Brilliance Corporation. All of a sudden something must have gone wrong. Impossible. It must be someone else with the same name. It must be someone else. Jani muttered softly while clenching her fists tightly. She then looked at the podium anxiously. The crisp and clear sounds of high heels knocking against the ground sounded from behind the podium. Subsequently, under the gaze of countless people, Cheyenne, dressed in an elite business suit, slowly made her way to the podium in an elegant and dignified gait. She then walked to the empty seat in the middle and sat down. The gold General Manager nameplate in front of Cheyenne was glistening under the light. At this point, Jani could no longer deceive herself. The new General Manager that she had been eagerly waiting to see was actually Cheyenne Carter. Layers of cold sweat surged out of her body. She was shivering all over and her body was quivering incessantly. She even sat in the first row of seats for those with upper management positions. Every time she looked up, she could see Cheyenne's solemn gaze, and it was as though Cheyenne was glaring daggers at her and exposing her to the public. At this moment, Jani felt humiliated and endless remorse. However, Cheyenne did not even look at Jani once. She sat in the General Manager seat on the podium and spoke with a calm expression and tone. She made some brief statements about the current situation and the future development direction of the company. After all, Cheyenne had single-handedly developed the Brilliance Corporation, and now that she became the General Manager again, she feared nothing at all. Her speech was clear and she was eloquent, professional, elegant, composed and sophisticated. The people below all recalled the way she used to be when she was the CEO. As for Jani, she had been sweating profusely below the stage, causing all her makeup to be smudged. She was too flustered to notice what Cheyenne was saying. Okay, this is the end of today's meeting. I hope we will all strive to make the Brilliance Corporation better under Miss Carter's lead. With Kamen's closing speech, everyone applauded loudly, and Jani finally returned to her senses, seeing Cheyenne stand up and walk toward the conference room exit accompanied by Kamen and Denning. Jani hurriedly wiped a handful of cold sweat from her face and ran after her. Miss Carter, please wait. Countless people below the stage were watching with their eyes wide open, waiting to see what Jani would say to Cheyenne. After all, Jani despised Cheyenne, and almost everyone in the company knew this, especially since many had witnessed a scolding in the morning. With an icy cold gaze, Cheyenne looked at Jani scurrying toward her with her eyeliner and makeup all smudged. There was no derision in her eyes or the thrill of having taken revenge. There was nothing but extreme indifference. What's the matter, Miss Carter? We were planning to hold a promotion celebration for me at Lion Restaurant this afternoon. Weren't we? I'd like to invite you to come to tonight's dinner to congratulate you on becoming the General Manager of our Brilliance Corporation. Jani Harper smiled brightly, as if all those things that happened between her and Cheyenne didn't exist. Cheyenne had to admit that she had a high EQ, or rather she was extremely thick-skinned. Jani also extended her invitation to Kamen and Denning. It's rare for all the leaders to be here. I wonder if you will allow me the honor to have dinner with you. Jani deliberately made a playful action that she thought was charming, but she had no idea that she looked extremely revolting with her smudged makeup. Cheyenne sneered, how can I qualify to attend your promotion celebration party? I still have to go home to accompany my loser husband lest he abandons me. These were the sarcastic remarks that Jani mocked Cheyenne with earlier, and now that Cheyenne was using them against her, Jane's face stiffened and she grew speechless. Denning frowned and stayed silent. He didn't know the woman in front of him, but he reckoned that she should have offended Cheyenne Carter, so he wasn't kind to her at all. Kamen also frowned as he grasped the main point in Jane's words. What promotion? As the interim Deputy General Manager of the Brilliance Corporation, he was naturally very familiar with the recent personnel transfers, and he knew that Jani Harper was a deputy manager in the business department. Jani ruffled her hair and hurriedly laughed. Well, the company is going to promote me to the director of the business department. I really have to thank Mr. Kamen and Miss Carter for your trust in me. Kamen frowned. You are just a deputy manager. How could you be promoted straight to director? Also, who told you about the promotion? How come I don't know? Jani was dumbstruck. Kamen's words made her heart drop, and she had an ominous hunch. Kate from the HR department. She came to tell me this morning. Jani stammered. Kamen sneered. Are you new to corporate? There wasn't an appointment letter, but you believed it just because someone said so. You are so brainless. After saying this, Kamen stopped paying attention to Jani and instead hurriedly turned around and quickly caught up with Cheyenne. Jani was immediately embarrassed. Kamen obviously meant that she wasn't going to be promoted to director and that there was never a promotion for her. In an instant, all eyes were on Her. Chapter 91 Arrested Translator Atlas Studios Editor Atlas Studios after being shamed and scolded by the company's deputy general manager and causing such a huge misunderstanding, Jani felt incredibly embarrassed and she couldn't help but turn red and hot, but at this moment a clueless colleague hurried over from behind and she said to Jani deferentially, Ms. Harper, I've just reserved a private room at the Lion for the celebration party tonight. Should we invite Cheyenne or Miss Carter too? This colleague's words were like a sharp knife piercing Jane's heart once again. Her, what's there to celebrate? Ms. Harper isn't getting promoted at all. This is a misunderstanding. Before there was even an official appointment letter of promotion, Ms. Harper happily said that she wanted to treat us to a meal. We thought it was real, but it turns out there's no such thing at all. I bet it'll be hard for Ms. Harper to be promoted again now that Miss Carter has become the general manager. Her promotion, I bet she won't be able to stay in the company for long. Those who were still sucking up to Jani in pay morning had now completely changed their attitudes after seeing that she had no hope of promotion. Meanwhile, Cheyenne Carter, whom she had just severely humiliated in the morning, had become pay general manager. They felt that Jane's good days had come to an end, so they started mocking her. Instead, only by condemning Jani could they make Cheyenne forgive them for their offensive behavior. Prior to her promotion, the colleague who gave Jani a set of expensive skincare products in an envelope of money was overwhelmed with regret, and she immediately made Jani return it. Ms. Harper, sorry, but I suddenly remembered that I was just showing you that set of skincare products this morning. I wasn't meant to be a gift, so you'd better return it to me. Facing the drastic change in pay attitudes of her colleagues, Jane's face turned pale. The feeling of being surrounded by her colleagues and hearing their snide remarks was something that Cheyenne used to experience all the time, but now it was Jane's turn. Cheyenne was pleased. Don't be too arrogant. Even if I am not being promoted, I am still a deputy manager and your immediate superior. Are you people sick of your jobs? Cheyenne is now our general manager, but I used to be her assistant and were on good terms with each other. We can always bury the hatchet and it'll be valued highly by her. Are you people so certain that I won't be promoted if I make a comeback one day? I won't let a single one of you off. Jani was extremely assertive as she glared at them coldly with narrowed eyes. When she said that, many people's hearts began to palpitate while their eyes began to get shifty, while some of them were regretting their decision to make a stand too soon. A police siren resounded and a police car pulled over at the Brilliance Corporation office entrance. A few police officers walked out and headed toward Jani. After showing Jani the warrant and their identification documents, a police officer said sternly, Are you Ms. Jani Harper? We received a call from your company. You are being charged for abuse of authority for personal gains, embezzlement of company assets, selling confidential intellectual property belonging to the company, and bribery. Please cooperate with our investigation and come with us to the police station. The words of the police officer were like a thunderbolt that stunned all the employees speechless, making them stare wide-eyed at the scene. Jani turned pale and began to lose control of herself. No, you are making false accusations. I didn't do. Jani Harper denied incoherently. Suddenly she dashed outside and tried to flee. However, two police officers soon pressed her to the ground, then handcuffed her and took her away. After Jani was taken away while crying in the sounds of the police siren vanished, the people around snapped back to their senses and began cursing loudly. Oh my God, I didn't expect Jani Harper to be such a person. SH has done so much evil and is now being taken away by the police. She really deserves it. HMPH, I've known for a long time that she isn't a good person. She tries to coerce us into bribing her all day and she treats me hostilely, like I owe her whenever I don't bribe her. SH is really brazen too. SH is so ugly and she tries to take everything she can. SH is the scum of our company. Her, she even said she would treat us to a meal to celebrate her promotion. TSK, this is retribution. She only has herself to blame for being so complacent and bullying Cheyenne so badly. She thought she was such a big shot. Yes, exactly. If Jani was still here now, she probably would have died from being infuriated by these insults and mockery. The matter of Jani Harper being taken away by the police for further investigation caused an uproar in the Brilliance Corporation and gave many something to talk about. Cheyenne's promotion to pay general manager of the Brilliance Corporation soon spread throughout the city. Previously, pay Brilliance Corporation became the company that many wanted to cooperate with because of its close ties with the Stardust Corporation. Thus, the new general manager of the Brilliance Corporation would naturally attract a ton of attention. Moreover, Cheyenne was the founder and used to be CEO of Pay Brilliance Corporation, and now she had once again risen to the position of general manager. She immediately attracted countless discussions and speculations, causing her to become the talk of Pay Town as the former owner of the Brilliance Corporation and the people who kicked Cheyenne and her family out. The Carters naturally received this news very quickly. In addition to their extreme shock and surprise, the Carters were visibly upset. I never thought that bitch would become Pay general manager of the Brilliance Corporation. SH is too lucky. Her HMPH, she must have used some dirty tricks to climb up to that position. Her, didn't she collude with Flynn Davis previously to set us up and snatch the Brilliance Corporation back? Now I remember, this must be a scheme they hatched long ago. They planned to first take the Brilliance Corporation away from us before promoting that bitch. So heinous, damn it, that bitch. 2 days ago she pretentiously came to the Carter Corporation to assert her dominance. The Carters gathered in the hall were viciously cursing at Cheyenne, making malicious remarks about her. Out of resentment and jealousy, Bryce clenched his jaw and grimaced in extreme rage. He used to be the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation, but Cheyenne Carter had now snatched it away from him. Bryce looked at his right hand that was in a cast due to her loser husband breaking his wrist. I, Bryce Carter, swear that I will never let Cheyenne Carter and her husband off. Chapter 92 The Carters Discussion. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. At this moment, Dominic Carter's figure appeared in the middle of the hall with his granddaughter Scarlett Wright. Beside him, the righteous indignation of the people subsided a little as they stood up respectfully. To greet Dominic, Dominic waved his hand. After sitting down in the middle seat, he looked at Pei. Proud, seems like you already know. Yes, everyone nodded immediately. Afterward, some impatient family members stood out and exclaimed, Grandpa, this is so infuriating. What right does that bitch? Shut up. Dominic coldly interrupted and said in a low voice, I didn't call you here to listen to this useless nonsense. The truth now is that Cheyenne Carter has already become the general manager of Pei Brilliance Corporation. Do you guys have anything to say about this? I want to hear something constructive. Dominic's last sentence made many people who wanted to stand up and express their opinions retreat silently. Constructive things? What kind of constructive thing can we say? Surely he's not expecting us to go snatch the Brilliance Corporation back from Cheyenne Carter and hand it over to him, right? Bryce, tell us what you think, Dominic suddenly said to Bryce, being the first to be named. Bryce raised his head angrily with a resentful look on his face that hadn't faded yet. Grandpa, I think there's definitely something wrong with Cheyenne Carter. Dominic Carter frowned. Tell us what issues there are. Bryce stood up. Previously, Cheyenne Carter and Flynn Davis colluded to snatch Pei Brilliance Corporation away from us under the pretext of us breaching the contract. I doubt anyone would believe that they weren't in cahoots. In any case, let's put this matter aside. Let's talk about the latter matter. All the Carters have been chased out of the Brilliance Corporation while Cheyenne is the only one left. That's enough to show that SH is still involved with the C-suites of Pei Brilliance Corporation, or even the Stardust Corporation, according to the information I found out. Cheyenne Carter was slapped hard on her face by Johnny Harper, her former assistant and a deputy manager of the business department. She even had hot water splashed onto her, so it's safe to say she was in a miserable state. This was something that Dominic hadn't heard before. With glistening eyes, Dominic asked what happened later. The Brilliance Corporation allegedly spread the news that there would be a new general manager soon. In the afternoon, Cheyenne was suddenly appointed as Pei general manager of the Brilliance Corporation, while Johnny Harper, who had bullied her, was handcuffed and brought away by the police in front of everyone. Bryce's words were indeed insider news that many of the Carters hadn't heard before. All of a sudden, they were all ears at this moment. Scarlett, who was standing beside Dominic, suddenly spoke up. I know this must be because Cheyenne Carter and one of the senior executives of the Stardust Corporation have long been in an illicit relationship, but something happened later. Maybe she disobeyed, so he forced her to comply by bullying her. So today, she couldn't tolerate it any longer and made another deal with that person to regain her position as the general manager. That former assistant who offended her was naturally accused and then arrested. Although Scarlett's imagination was dark and vulgar, it was still somewhat logical, and her words immediately made all the Carters present believe that it was the truth. Dominic nodded in approval. It seems the truth is just as Bryce and Scarlett have said. However, no matter what means Cheyenne used to rise to the top, she is now the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation, and we can't let go of this opportunity for nothing. As long as she is still carrying our last name, she must make some contribution to the Carters. Everyone seemed to approve, and they immediately found it a pity that Dominic had kicked Cheyenne and her family out previously. Otherwise, they would have been able to directly ask Cheyenne to return the Brilliance Corporation to the Carters. Even if the Stardust Group didn't allow it, they would still be able to get the Brilliance Corporation from her and let Cheyenne be the general manager in name. Unfortunately, Cheyenne was no longer a member of the Carter family, so she definitely wouldn't be that obedient and compliant the Carters sighed in their hearts. Dominic looked at Bryce. Bryce, when Cheyenne came over a few days ago, didn't she say she wanted to cooperate with the Carters on behalf of the Brilliance Corporation? Now that she has become Pei general manager herself, she must hold greater authority. Go look for her and talk to her about our cooperation with the Brooks. Me. Bryce was stunned, but he immediately raised his arm in the cast and rejected. No, Grandpa, Cheyenne hates me to the core. If I go to her, she'll definitely treat me harshly. Dominic's face turned dark. Does your pride matter more than the family's future? Speaking of which, if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have disowned Cheyenne and her family since you offended her prior to this. You have to beg for her forgiveness now. Only when she forgives you will it be possible to bring benefits to the Carters again. Do you understand? Bryce immediately had a bitter expression. It was obvious what Dominic meant. In fact, he even blamed the disowning of Cheyenne and her family on Bryce. He wants Cheyenne Carter to come back while undermining me. Bryce was full of displeasure, but he didn't know what to say to retort against him. He could only exclaim, I won't go, you are rebelling. Angered by his words, Dominic pointed at Bryce and berated, throwing a tantrum. Do you think you are a child? Bryce Carter, I am telling you, you have to make this trip even if you don't want to. Otherwise, don't think of coming back again. After saying that, Dominic waved his sleeve and left. Everyone in Pei Hall looked at Bryce with a hypocritical smile. Bryce, just bear with it for the sake of the family. Yes, we will all remember your contribution to the family. Even if that woman comes back, you are still the only successor in our hearts. Yes, Bryce. Press on. Bryce could tell the insincerity in their hypocritical and meaningless words. They all wanted that bitch Cheyenne to come back. Get lost, all of you. Get lost. Bryce hollered at them in rage. Chapter 93. Begging her at her place. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Seeing Bryce's sudden rage, the Carters remained silent and left awkwardly. However, when Bryce was no longer nearby, they naturally started criticizing him for his incompetence, poor character and lack of manners. They all said that the family should be handed over to one of the distant relatives in the empty hall of the Carter home. Only Bryce and his mother Sarah Hadley remained holding onto Bryce's shoulder. Sarah said heartbrokenly, my son, it's been hard on you since your grandfather told you to go look for Cheyenne Carter. Do it. Bryce broke free from her and yelled, Mom, you are my mother. Are you going to Force me to go look for that bitch and bow down to her to ask her to come back too. What about my feelings? Do you care about my feelings at all? Bryce's eyes were red, making him apologize to Cheyenne was akin to stepping on his dignity. It was a massive insult. Feeling heartbroken, Sarah looked at Bryce. Silly child, you are my son. How could I as a mother harm you? However, you are the only direct heir of the Carters, and the person who will inherit the family's legacy is you as the head of Pay family. You have to learn to be patient. Look at your grandfather. Do you think he really wants to go back on his word and get that bitch to come back again, even though he already kicked her out? But given the current situation, your grandfather has no choice but to bear with it. Do you think your grandfather is impressed by that bitch? No, he just wants to make use of her to create value for Pay Carters. Once she loses her value, your grandfather will immediately toss her aside. Everything that belongs to the Carters will only belong to you in the end, so what's the big deal about bearing with this grievance for a while? After Bryce listened to her words, his eyes suddenly lit up as he came to a sudden realization. At the same time, he was full of vigor. Yes, Mom, I know. Okay, I'll go look for Cheyenne now. Even if she hits me and scolds me, I'll definitely bear with it. It was currently already evening. Lucas had driven Cheyenne and Amelia back to Cheyenne's home and stayed behind as well. Although Karen would still mock him from time to time, Lucas simply ignored her and didn't take it to heart. In fact, he would even give her some expensive gifts sometimes, which made her stop making malicious remarks. William wasn't at home as usual. Lucas didn't know what he was doing these days, as he would come home late every day. Thus Karen, Cheyenne, Charlotte, Amelia and Lucas were the only ones at the dinner table. They had just begun eating when they heard knocking on the door outside. Hey, courtyard, who's there? Karen muttered with a frown, displeased at being interrupted while eating. Lucas put down his cutlery. I'll go take a look. As soon as he opened the courtyard door, he saw Bryce carrying a gift box and with an extremely unnatural smile that he was obviously forcing himself to put on. Uncle. As soon as Bryce spoke, he realized that something was wrong. The person standing at the door was Lucas Gray. Bryce's wrist in the cast began to ache even more. What are you doing here? Lucas raised his eyebrows and retorted, my wife and child live here. Why can't I be here? Bryce walked back into the yard. Move aside, I need to see Cheyenne Carter for something. However, Lucas insisted on standing at the door and blocking Bryce from entering. Cheyenne is now the general manager of Pay Brilliance Corporation. Not everyone is qualified to see her. Lucas slammed the door shut. The door almost hit Bryce's nose and he was so infuriated that he almost wanted to curse out loud, but at Pay thought of his agenda and his mother's admonishments, he took a deep breath and curbed his anger. Damn it, he's just a live-in son-in-law. What's he being so smug for? When Cheyenne dumps him one day, I'll see what he has to say about qualification. Seeing Lucas return alone, Cheyenne asked, who's outside? Bryce Carter. Lucas answered without hiding anything. Cheyenne and Karen looked at Lucas in shock. Why is he here? Lucas said indifferently, I guess he's looking for you for something. Previously you were kind enough to bring the Carters a cooperation agreement, but they made fools of themselves and chose to decline. Now that you are the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation, they naturally want to come to you again to talk about cooperation or something else that's beneficial to the Carters. He had long seen through the Carters' condescending, snobbish and mercenary characters. What, Cheyenne? You've become the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation. When did that happen? Why didn't you tell me? Kare looked at Cheyenne in disbelief. Charlotte looked at Cheyenne gleefully. Cheyenne, you are amazing. You actually became the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation again so soon. Cheyenne glanced at Lucas and coughed awkwardly. I was appointed just before the end of the day at work. I haven't had time to tell you about it. Karen was so excited that she grabbed Cheyenne's hand tightly. You should have told us this great news as soon as you got home. I'll cook some more dishes. Let's celebrate. Ha 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 ha. General manager, you've finally become the general manager again. Karen was smiling sweetly while Charlotte held on to Cheyenne's other hand and said smilingly, Cheyenne, treat us to a meal tomorrow. They were both grabbing Cheyenne's hands tightly and she was immediately caught between laughter and tears. Sure, let's go out for a feast tomorrow. After saying this, Cheyenne looked at Lucas somewhat apologetic. In fact, Lucas had given the position of general manager to her. It was just a pity that Lucas' status was special and she wasn't able to reveal it to make her family change their minds about Lucas. Bang bang bang. At this moment the loud knocking came from the door, again accompanied by Bryce shouting, Uncle, Aunt, Cheyenne, it's me. I really need to see you. Please open the door. Bryce's yelling was exceptionally loud and Cheyenne immediately frowned. Why hasn't he left yet? Karen and Charlotte also hated Bryce and didn't want to see him at all. Lucas frowned. If they ignored Bryce, he would definitely keep knocking on the door and yelling, kicking up a ruckus. After thinking about it, Cheyenne looked at Lucas. I think we'd better let him in and talk things out. All right. Lucas nodded and walked out of the living room. Soon Bryce followed Lucas in. Chapter 94. Bryce Niels, translator, Atlas Studios, editor, Atlas Studios. Seeing Bryce walk in, everyone looked at him with indifference and disgust and no one said anything. Bryce chuckled. He walked toward Karen and handed over the gift box he was carrying. Aunt Karen, this is a diamond bracelet that I specially bought. It happens to suit you, so I am here to deliver it to you. I hope you'll like it. Upon hearing that he had brought a diamond bracelet, Karen, who was initially sulking, hurriedly took the gift box. Her eyes bright while unwrapping the gift box, she bragged to Bryce, you are here to see Cheyenne, right? Cheyenne is now the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation. Feeling as though his chest had been stabbed, he gritted his teeth and quickly said, yes, I also happened to hear good news, so I am here to congratulate Cheyenne. Cheyenne humphed coldly, not believing that Bryce was genuinely happy for her. As expected, Bryce added, I am also here to relay Grandpa's goodwill. He said that he made his previous decision too hastily, so he would like to have you guys return to Pay Carter's. The large family villa is ready for you. Karen was immediately overjoyed. Really, is Dominic willing to let us return to the Carters? He even prepared a villa for us too. Of course, Grandpa even Cheyenne couldn't stand listening to it anymore and interrupted him. Since the Carters have driven us out, there's no need for us to go back. You don't need to try cajoling us with those words either. Just tell me directly, what is the purpose of your visit? Bryce smiled ingratiatingly. Cheyenne, we're family. Is there a need for this? Let's let bygones be bygones and start afresh. All right, Cheyenne sneered. Let bygones be bygones and start afresh. You are making it sound casual. If you came here just to say this nonsense, then you can leave. I have nothing to say to you. She stood up. Bryce hurriedly stepped in front of Cheyenne. Also, didn't you say previously that the Brilliance Corporation wants to cooperate with the Carter Corporation? Now that you are the general manager, shouldn't you put the cooperation on the agenda sooner? Cheyenne figured it out. Bryce's purpose in visiting was indeed as Lucas guessed. Bryce was here to talk about cooperation, and perhaps he would even ask for more benefits for the Carter. Since Cheyenne was now the general manager, Cheyenne looked at Bryce with derision. Yeah, I did go to the Carter Corporation with the Brilliance Corporation's letter of intent to cooperate with you previously, but what did you do? Trust you to have the cheek to come and ask me this now. Bryce once again felt like he had been slapped. Bearing with the humiliation, he lowered his head and apologized in a manner that he thought was extremely sincere. It was my fault. I misunderstood you that time, Cheyenne. I hereby solemnly apologize to you. I came here today with such sincerity because I wish to gain your understanding, and I hope you will forgive me for being a bad cousin. You can hit me and scold me all you want. I just hope you can give the Carters another chance. Lucas watched Bryce pretend and stayed silent. Cheyenne clenched her jaw, feeling extremely uneasy about Bryce's apology because she wasn't used to seeing him lower his pride. She had already given up on the Carters, but Bryce's behavior made her hesitant. It was not that his words had touched her, but the Carters were the ones who raised her after all, and there was something that she couldn't bear to let go of. Seeing the hesitant look in Cheyenne's eyes, Bryce gritted his teeth and knelt directly in front of her. Everyone was shocked after hearing the loud thump. Charlotte, who had been standing at the side, quietly almost spat out her drink. Karen was wearing the diamond bracelet that Bryce had given her, and when she saw this, she was so dumbfounded that she was at a loss for words. Lucas sneered, folded his arms, and continued to watch the show. After being shocked, Cheyenne immediately said, "What are you doing? Hurry and get up." No. Bryce continued kneeling on the ground, hanging his head low to hide the humiliation and indignation in his eyes. However, his voice was full of misery. "Cheyenne, believe me, I really want to apologize to you and beg for your forgiveness now. The Carters' situation is getting worse day by day. Reaching a cooperation agreement with the Brilliance Corporation is really very important to us. Please give us a way out on account that we used to be a family. If you don't agree, I'd rather die here." Bryce forced himself to cry, and his eyes turned red. Cheyenne was startled. "What are you doing? If you don't get up, I will never agree to cooperate with the Carters." Hearing her words, Bryce hurriedly stood up. Fine, I'll listen to you." Cheyenne, does this mean that you've agreed to cooperate with the Carters?" Cheyenne looked at Bryce with a complicated expression. "This is the last time I am going to help the Carters. You guys better behave yourselves. Don't do anything overboard again, and just manage your company properly. I won't go back to the family, and we don't need to have any extra dealings from now on." Hearing this, Bryce became even happier. He just wanted Cheyenne to agree to cooperate and finish the task he was given. It was even better for him that Cheyenne didn't want to go back to the family, because that meant that no one would compete with him for the position of successor. "Okay, I understand, Cheyenne. I thank you sincerely on behalf of Grandpa and the Carters. I won't force you, but the doors of the Carters will always be open for you. If you ever come back one day, you will always be welcome." Even Bryce was touched by his own mushy words, but after he left, he started to look jealous and disdainful. "HMPH, as long as I am around, that bitch can forget about coming back to the family." Lucas stared at Bryce until the latter disappeared into the night. Only then did he look away. Cheyenne had chosen to give the Carters another chance, and Lucas didn't have any objections. However, if Bryce and the Carters hurt her again, they should blame him for being nasty. Chapter 95. Cheyenne's father gets drunk. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Only after Bryce left did they continue with dinner, which he interrupted just now. After washing and cleaning up, Charlotte returned to her own room while Curry sat downstairs in the living room watching some television while fiddling with the diamond bracelet she just received. Lucas took Amelia upstairs to Cheyenne's room, where he played with her merrily. During this time, Cheyenne raised her wrist several times to look at her watch. She would also look downstairs from time to time, looking rather worried. "What's the matter?" Lucas asked softly as he placed a drawing book in front of Amelia. "Oh, it's nothing. I am just a little worried about Dad. It's so late and he hasn't returned yet. He won't pick up my calls either. I don't know where he went," Cheyenne said softly. Lucas thought about it and said, "Do you want me to send someone to look for him?" Cheyenne naturally knew that he was capable of doing so, and he'd definitely deploy a lot of people to search. "That's not necessary for now. Maybe Dad is at his friend's place. He might be back soon." As she spoke, loud knocking on the door came from downstairs, and William's drunken yelling resounded. "Open up, hurry up and open the door." After that, Karen started shrieking loudly in a sharp voice, "You jerk, where did you get drunk at before coming home? Why don't you just drink yourself to death outside? Your body stinks and reeks of alcohol. I won't help you." Next, there were loud sounds of someone falling and things getting smashed. "Oh dear." When Cheyenne and Lucas heard this sound, they both hurriedly got up and rushed downstairs. Charlotte also opened her door and sprinted downstairs. "You damned jerk, you are already so wasted, but you are still holding a bottle of wine. Are you really out to kill yourself and make me a widow? Bastard, get up. I am so unlucky to have married a man like you." Karen was standing by the door downstairs and howling loudly. William had fallen onto the ground and the bottle of wine in his hand had been broken. There were shards of glass strewn all over the floor. Cheyenne and Lucas rushed to help him up. Cheyenne tried to get the remaining half bottle of wine from William, but he suddenly waved the bottle in his hand and clamored, I am not drunk, one more bottle. The sharp bottle almost cut Cheyenne's hand. Watch out, Lucas called out as he reached out to clamp down on William's wrist, immediately making him let go of the bottle of wine that he was gripping tightly. In a drunken stupor, William was still murmuring incessantly, and from time to time he would flail his arms about to stop Lucas from holding him down. Fortunately, Lucas was strong enough to hold William down and move him toward his and Karen's room. You were making such a din and creating a mess in the house. As soon as you came back, you might as well not come back and just die outside. Karen cursed. Charlotte couldn't stand it any longer. Mom, cut it out. Dad is already so drunk he can't hear you even if you scold him. Let's deal with this mess. Cheyenne and Lucas will take Dad to your room. Mom, go bathe Dad and help him change out of his clothes and I'll clean up the glass shards on the floor. Well, split up the work. Amid Karen's incessant cursing, they finally took care of the drunken William and laid him down on his bed. When Lucas and Cheyenne returned upstairs again, Amelia jumped into Lucas' arms immediately. Mommy, Daddy, Grandpa is so scary. Amelia had seen William yelling loudly and flailing his arms about when she was upstairs and was frightened by his behavior. Lucas rubbed Amelia's little head and comforted her gently. It's all right, Grandpa had too much alcohol. He'll be fine tomorrow. I am here, don't be afraid. Amelia finally nodded. She then raised her head and looked at Lucas worriedly. Daddy, you won't be like Grandpa and drink so much later, right? Lucas suddenly burst into laughter and said softly, no, I won't act like that. Amelia finally relaxed and laid in Lucas' arms. Suddenly someone screamed from downstairs. William Carter, you bastard, how dare you hit me? I'll fight you. Frightened Amelia immediately shuddered and clutched the corner of Lucas' shirt tightly. Daddy, I am scared. Lucas hurriedly held Amelia in his arms and comforted her. Cheyenne immediately headed downstairs after hearing a scream. Who are you yelling at her? You are nothing to me. Curry Turner, you are nothing to me. Stop shouting at me and calling me a loser. Huh? What are you then? You were so clingy and submissive toward me when you knew that the Carters were rich back then. Now you think I am a good for nothing. William's eyes were red as he hollered and pointed at Karen's nose. You jerk bastard, I must have been blind to marry you. Yeah, I decided to be with you then because of your money and because I thought you were Dominic Carter's son, so what? I have the guts to admit to it. What about you? You are just an illegitimate son who's not blood related to the Carters and got kicked out like a dog. Have I ever lived in luxury throughout my marriage to you? Karen yelled in a sharp voice, seeing both of them cursing at each other. Cheyenne hurriedly rushed toward them and grabbed Karen's arm for fear that they would start fighting again. Dad, you've had too much to drink. You'd better get some rest. Mom, Dad is just saying those words in a drunken stupor. Don't stoop to his level. To Cheyenne's surprise, when William saw her in a daze, he immediately flared up and cursed. You were such a jinx. Forget it if the company was snatched away, but you married such a loser and made yourself a laughing stock. If not for you, we would have been chased away by the Carters. I am left with nothing now. It's all your fault. After being lashed out at by her father, Cheyenne felt aggrieved and miserable, and she immediately teared up. Dad, how could you say that to me? It wasn't my fault. Stop arguing. William raised his hand to slap Cheyenne. Stop it. Lucas immediately appeared beside Cheyenne. He grabbed William's wrist and glared at him. No one is allowed to hit her, including you. Chapter 96. Incessant arguing. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Lucas shouting and pain in his wrist instantly made William sober up as he shrieked. When Cheyenne recovered from her shock and saw the look of agony on her father's face, she couldn't help but exclaim, Lucas, hates my father. Let go of him. Lucas just wanted to stop William from hitting Cheyenne, and now that William was much more sober, he naturally wouldn't do anything to him. He was about to let go when Karen suddenly said, no, Lucas, hurry up and throw him outside. I don't want him here. She pointed to the door. Cheyenne had another headache. Mom, forget it. It's already so late. Where can you dump Dad? What if something happens to him? I don't care. Even if he dies out there, I don't want to see him in this house again. Karen screamed in exasperation. Lucas was speechless. He naturally wouldn't throw William outside. Instead, he just let go of the latter's wrist. Damn it, you punk. Remember this? William hollered hostilely after breaking free and sobering up. However, he was extremely displeased by Lucas' act of clamping down his wrist. After saying this, he stumbled back into his room and laid down. Meanwhile, Karen was also infuriated because Lucas didn't throw William out like she had ordered. Fine, you are disobeying me to her. If you won't throw him out, get lost yourself. Get lost. You are not allowed to stay in this house anymore. Scram. She pointed at the door. Lucas was extremely speechless. Being caught between the two of them made him feel extremely vexed, but he had to bear with it since they were Cheyenne's parents. Mom, what are you trying to do now? Why do you have to vent your anger on Lucas after fighting with Dad? Cheyenne questioned, trying to stay patient. Her Cheyenne, don't be so biased to this man. Men are all jerks. Lucas Gray is a good for nothing just like your father. He has no job, no income, and he lives like a loser every day. He still has the audacity to drink every day and take it out on me when he's drunk. I've really had enough of this. Karen cried out loud. I am doing it for your own good. Quickly find a rich man and marry him. Stop being with this good for nothing. Life is torture if you continue living like this. While sniffling, Karen wept and complained. She suddenly pointed at Lucas and continued, look at you. What did you get after you married this good for nothing? Did he do anything for you? Has he given you anything? You were alone throughout your pregnancy and you painstakingly delivered. Amelia took care of her and raised her. Where has he been all these years? He doesn't deserve you at all, and he doesn't deserve to be a father at all. Lucas laughed bitterly in his head. He indeed owed Cheyenne for failing to fulfill his duty as a husband and father. He couldn't rebut her. Cheyenne wanted to tell Karen that Lucas had done a lot for her and gave her a lot of help lately. He even made her the general manager. He wasn't a good for nothing. However, she couldn't say anything after Karen cried and threw a huge tantrum. She soon got tired and Returned to her room. Lucas obviously wouldn't get lost like she told him to after going upstairs and once again holding his worried daughter in his arms to comfort her, he suddenly developed the idea of taking Amelia away from this home. The atmosphere here was indeed rather terrible. William liked throwing drunken fits while Karen would curse and hurl vulgarities all day. They tended to get into heated fights too. Tonight Amelia got frightened several times. If she continued living in such an environment where she was frightened every single day, it would be bad for her upbringing. However, this was just Lucas thought. Cheyenne cherished Amelia like she was her life and she wouldn't let him take her away easily. Besides, if Cheyenne left with him as well, she would definitely worry about her parents and there was no way he could bring them to. It was the weekend the following day. William was still lying on his bed and sleeping after a drunken night. As soon as Karen saw Lucas, she recalled that he had disobeyed her last night and pulled a long face, again treating him with hostility. Karen stopped sulking only when Cheyenne said that she would take all of them out for a feast in the afternoon, while Charlotte said some nice things in between. Soon it was noon. Cheyenne had long booked a private room at the Hero Hotel. They were all dressed to the nines and ready to go. But they suddenly discovered that William had left the house again and they didn't know where he went. Oh, he'll give Dad a call, Cheyenne said. Karen barked furiously. What for, since he likes going out and wandering about? Leave him be, don't ask him to come along. Cheyenne hesitated for a moment and agreed. Lucas drove them to the entrance of the Hero Hotel. It was the lunchtime peak hour and thus difficult to find a parking space. Cheyenne told the impatient Karen to go in with Charlotte and Amelia while she and Lucas would look for a parking spot. Okay, then we'll go in first and order some food. Charlotte agreed and went into the hotel with Karen and Amelia. By the time Lucas and Cheyenne found a suitable parking spot and parked their car, almost 7 or 8 minutes had passed. Just as they were entering the hotel, they heard a familiar voice coming from behind. Hey, isn't that Cheyenne? Lucas and Cheyenne turned around and looked over only to see Aston Brooke and Scarlett Wright walking over. Lucas frowned slightly while Cheyenne nodded with barely any expression. Previously at the Carter Corporation, Scarlett had said a lot of harsh things to Cheyenne, so Cheyenne disliked her. Even though she was her cousin. Scarlett, are they your friends? Aston's eyes lit up as soon as he saw Cheyenne, but he deliberately pretended not to know who they were. Seeing that Aston seemed to have forgotten about meeting Cheyenne, Scarlett was obviously pleased. She laughed. SH is my cousin Cheyenne Carter. She has just been appointed the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation. The one next to her is her live-in husband. Aston's eyes glistened. SH has become the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation. That's even better. Chapter 97 Uninvited Guests. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. With a gentlemanly smile, Aston walked up to Cheyenne and held his hand out politely. It's a pleasure to meet you, Miss Carter. I'm Aston Brooke from LA and my father is the general manager of the Solar Corporation, Sean Brooke. Have you ever heard of us? Aston's smile was reserved and conceited. After all, the Brooke family was a top family with great fame and reputation. However, Cheyenne said indifferently, I am ignorant. I've never heard of you and your father. With that, she ignored Aston's attempt to shake her hand and turned around to enter the hotel. Aston's hand was left hanging in midair and he looked extremely embarrassed. Lucas looked at him coldly and entered with Cheyenne. After meeting twice, Lucas noticed there was strong desire and ambitiousness in Aston Brooke's gaze when he looked at Cheyenne. He had previously instructed Flynn Davis not to let any of the Brooks businesses appear in Orange County. But now it seemed that they were still moving about in Orange County, happily seeing the way Cheyenne and Lucas were ignoring Aston. Scarlett was overwhelmed with fury. Aston, they were bored. How dare they ignore you? I must teach her a lesson. Just as she was about to rush toward Cheyenne, Aston grabbed her wrist to stop her. Wait, don't provoke her. Scarlett suddenly pouted and said angrily, Aston, you are defending that bitch Cheyenne Carter. You don't have a crush on her, do you? I've told you. This woman got to her current position through dirty means. He took her hand and laughed. Why would I have a crush on her? I just thought that you should still be polite to her since SH is now the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation and your cousin too. You are the only one I adore. Aren't you clear about how I've been treating you the past few days? As he spoke, Aston pinched Scarlett's waist flirtatiously. Ah, you are so annoying. We're outside. Scarlett looked at Aston coquettishly as she snuggled up into his arms. These days the two of them had been spending a lot of time with each other and had gone all the way. They were in the honeymoon period of their relationship. Aston smiled nonchalantly, knowing that coaxing Scarlett was easy since he could tell that she was only after his money. Once he said a few words to cajole her and promised to marry her in-law, she would be submissive to him again. Aston was an expert at romance and he had long mastered this skill. Soon he entered the hotel with Scarlett in his arms. At this moment, Lucas and Cheyenne had already met up with Karen, Charlotte and Amelia in the private room. Apart from William, everyone was here. As soon as they entered, Amelia pounced on them and happily held their hands as she led them to their seats. Pretending to be jealous, Charlotte teased with pouted lips, Amelia, you are so naughty, you forgot all about me as soon as you saw your daddy and mommy. Amelia smiled shyly and scurried over to kiss Charlotte's cheek. Karen was dressed ostentatiously today and she had deliberately styled her hair at a salon nearby. She was wearing a dark green dress and a top-quality diamond bracelet. This diamond bracelet was naturally not the one that Bryce gave her yesterday, but one of the pieces that Lucas had bought at the auction. At the time, Lucas wanted to give all that valuable jewelry to Cheyenne, but unfortunately she refused. Afterward, Lucas picked out this bracelet and gave it to Karen to shut her foul mouth up. Actually, Karen was quite pretty when she was silent. After all, she had to have good genes in order to give birth to such beautiful daughters, Cheyenne and Charlotte. But unfortunately, whenever Karen spoke, she would be cursing or arguing with someone, most of the time ruining her image. Just when they were having fun and playing, someone knocked on the door of the Private room. Thinking that it was the service staff, Charlotte said, "Come in," to their surprise. The person who pushed open the door of the private room was not a waiter but Scarlett Wright and Aston Brooke, whom Lucas and Cheyenne had met at the entrance. Charlotte questioned hostilely, "What are you two doing here?" She had always disliked Scarlett, her cousin, who often humiliated and insulted her. Since they were children, Scarlett liked calling Charlotte an outsider and a shameless bastard. Charlotte used to burst into tears after being mocked and scolded by her. Scarlett didn't bother being polite and pulled Aston to the table. "What a coincidence. Aston and I happened to be here for lunch today too. When we ran into Cheyenne at the entrance, we thought that we should come over and join you guys for lunch." "Well, the more the merrier." She looked at Aston sweetly and smiled coquettishly. "Oh, right, I almost forgot to introduce you. This is my boyfriend, Aston Brooke, the heir of the famous Brooke family from LA. We're getting engaged soon. Today's meal will be on us." Charlotte watched coldly as Scarlett showed her boyfriend off and pursed her lips in disdain. "No thanks, we can still afford to pay for a meal. We don't need you to be worried about it. Besides, this is our family lunch. Why are you interfering? I don't want to eat with you. I lose my appetite whenever I see your face." You. Scarlett was furious as Charlotte's words made her feel a little embarrassed in front of Aston. Scarlett couldn't help but tug Aston's clothes to have him stand up for her. She hated them too, and if Aston hadn't said that he wanted to come and form a good relationship with them, she wouldn't have come. Unfortunately, what Scarlett wished for did not happen. Aston's eyes were glued onto the beautiful Carter sisters. How could he have the time to bother about Scarlett? Lucas stared at Aston coldly while Cheyenne and Charlotte were similarly displeased about the uninvited guests. Karen was the only one who kept staring at Aston with a gaze of satisfaction ever since she heard his family background. "Aston Brooke is handsome and looks decent, although I am not too clear about his family. He's definitely a scion of a rich family, and that makes him a good candidate for a son-in-law. It'll be a good choice to let either Cheyenne or Charlotte marry him." Karen had long ignored Aston's girlfriend, Scarlett Wright. Chapter 98. Poor person. Translator, Atlas Studios. Editor, Atlas Studios. "You are Mr. Brooke, right?" Karen looked at Aston with an intense gaze. Aston hurriedly bowed. "Hello, Aunt Karen. You can just call me Aston." Aston's action made Karen's heart flutter with joy. "Look, what a good choice for a son-in-law. He's so polite, modest, and addresses me so dearly. He must have asked around about us, and he's probably already taken a liking to my daughter." However, if Karen knew that Aston knew her only because Scarlett always referred to her as Karen the Shrew whenever she cursed at their family in front of him, she would probably look a lot less gratified. The more Karen looked at Aston, the more pleased she was with him. She pointed at a chair in front of her. "Okay, I won't stand on ceremony then, Aston. Come have a seat. It'll be imposing on everyone then," Aston said politely as he pulled Scarlett to sit down on the chair beside him. Seeing this scene, Charlotte was furious. "Mom, this is a family meal to celebrate Cheyenne's promotion to general manager. Why are you letting them stay?" Karen poked Charlotte's forehead and chided. "You stupid girl." Looking at Charlotte's displeased face, Karen couldn't say anything more and simply said with a smile, "We're all relatives. There's nothing wrong with having a meal together. Besides, since it's a celebration, the more the merrier." Charlotte was already extremely upset, but since they already sat down, she couldn't chase them away and could only stay in her seat furiously. Karen could no longer bother to appease her daughter. She simply stared at Aston and kept bombarding him with questions about his age, marital status, family, etc. Beside him, Scarlett immediately sulked. Even a fool could tell what Karen's intentions were. She had already introduced Aston as her boyfriend just now, yet Karen was still doing this. "Does she think I am non-existent?" Scarlett was furious. She was about to lose her temper and throw a fit, but Aston squeezed her fingers under the table to hint her not to do anything. Scarlett endured her anger. Charlotte wasn't a fool either, and she had already figured out what her mother was trying to do. To be honest, Charlotte didn't have a good impression of Aston Brooke at all. Although he looked polite, he had been gawking at Cheyenne ever since he entered, which was to Cheyenne's repulsion. She could tell at a glance that he was a flirtatious person. Even if he weren't Scarlett's boyfriend, Charlotte wouldn't want to date him, as she wasn't attracted to him at all. "Enough, Mom. What are you asking so many questions for? What does it matter to us what someone's boyfriend's family is like?" Charlotte interjected in displeasure. "Leave me be. Why can't I even ask?" Karen rolled her eyes at Charlotte. She muttered softly, "It is still uncertain whose son-in-law he will be in the future." Scarlett had a sharp sense of hearing and immediately lost it when she heard these words. She stood up abruptly and said to Karen hostilely, "Don't think I don't know what thoughts you are harboring, Aunt Karen. He is my boyfriend. Will you please respect yourself?" "Hey, I am your aunt. Is that the tone you should have when you are talking to me? You are so rude. How did your mother teach you? You don't know how to respect your elders at all. After you get married in the future, how will you respect your elders? If I were Aston, I would have dumped you a long time ago." Karen had never lost an argument before. Besides, her daughter was now the general manager of the Brilliance Corporation, so she definitely wouldn't take a little girl like Scarlett seriously. Scarlett was so furious that her face flushed red and she wished she could scratch Karen's detestable face with her hands. However, Karen's family was here and she wouldn't have it easy if she hit or scolded her. She could only grab Aston's arm and exclaim aggrievedly, "Aston, I can't stand it anymore. They are being bullies. Let's go." However, Aston shook off her hand and said with a frown, "It's true that you were wrong just now. Hurry up and apologize to Aunt Karen." "But you want me to apologize?" Scarlett gaped in disbelief. "Why should I apologize? She knows you are my boyfriend." But she kept asking those questions. "Such as the shameless one who's trying to sow discord between me and my boyfriend. What did I do wrong?" Smack. He slapped her hard on the face. Scarlett cocked her head to the side and covered her face while looking at Aston in astonishment. "You actually hit me?" Aston looked at Scarlett coldly. "You were rude to your elder, but you are still unrepentant. You really disappoint me." Too much. The wife I want to marry will never be someone like you who doesn't know how to behave properly. Let's break up and never have anything to do with each other from now on. Scarlett trembled and immediately burst into tears as she stared at Aston in disbelief. You actually want to break up with me these days? Aston had been very nice to her, and in fact when they were at the door just now, they had even talked about marriage. However, she never would have thought that he would actually hit her and even break up with her just because of a small argument. Yes, Aunt Karen is right. SH is your aunt, but you were so disrespectful to her. You won't respect my family's elders if you marry me in pay future. I really don't dare to marry you since you have such a terrible character, Aston said righteously. When Scarlett saw Aston's cold expression, her heart quivered as she finally realized that Aston wasn't joking and really meant it when he said he wanted to break up with her. Scarlett panicked. She had given herself to Aston long ago and was so close to marrying him. Her grandpa Dominic and her family were pleased about it too. If Aston broke up with her now, she'd be really embarrassed to face others. I am sorry, Aston. I was wrong. I just care about you too much and I was so furious that I spoke to my aunt rudely. I didn't mean to disrespect my elder. I'll apologize to her right away. Please just forgive me this time. Scarlett hugged Aston and bawled pitifully. However, Aston did not compromise and simply pushed her away. Get lost. Scarlett was wearing high heels and after being pushed she lost her balance and fell onto the ground, but Aston did not even look at her and instead said to Karen apologetically, sorry Aunt Karen, I am sorry for being a killjoy today. Cheyenne, Charlotte, I am sorry too. I will definitely visit you and make up for it one day. After saying this, he looked at Cheyenne and Charlotte, then turned around and left, seeing Aston leaving Scarlett, who was wailing on the ground, could no longer worry about anything else and got up to chase after him. Aston, wait for me. Chapter 99 Conditions for Reconciliation. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. Only after Scarlett chased after Aston and disappeared entirely did they recover from the shock and momentary speechlessness in the end. Karen sighed. I didn't expect Aston to be so respectful toward his elders. This sets him apart from those rebellious scions. He's a fine young man. Cheyenne and Charlotte were astonished to hear this. Mom, is there something wrong with you? You think such a person is good? He slapped Scarlett and pushed her over a trivial matter. He obviously has violent tendencies. Charlotte was dumbfounded. Scarlett actually still panicked and chased after a domestic abuser. Her brains must be fried. What do you know? Aston may have hit Scarlett, but that's because she made a mistake. If she didn't have a foul mouth, would he have hit her? Besides, he just slapped her and gave her a little push. How is that considered violent? Karen disagreed. You can't judge a man based on that alone. Look, Aston is so good looking and he's decked out in designer clothing. He's clearly the scion of a wealthy family. It's normal for him to be a little hot-tempered. Besides, he's so respectful toward his elders and I can tell he obviously has a good character. If you can marry him, you won't have to worry for the rest of your life. Charlotte flew into a rage and snapped. Who would want to marry someone like him? He's just rich and you are singing such high praises of him. If that's not considered violent, what is? I don't want to marry a domestic abuser. I am afraid you'd still be praising him endlessly even after he beats me to death. Hey girl, what are you saying? If you are obedient, why would he hit you? Besides, what's wrong with him being rich? Do you want to marry a penniless loser like Lucas too? Karen retorted, thinking that her daughter was worrying for nothing and making up nonsense. She insulted Lucas out of nowhere too. Charlotte humphed in disdain. Forget it, that guy clearly had a girlfriend, but he kept gawking at me and Cheyenne lecherously. As soon as he entered, he's obviously a jerk. Lucas is so much better than him. Seeing Charlotte repeatedly retort, Karen was immediately furious. Charlotte Carter, are you out to anger me? How can this loser hold a candle to Aston? Karen pointed her bright red lacquered fingernail at Lucas. Lucas touched his nose speechlessly. I've merely been sitting here quietly. How did I provoke her? His family is rich, that's all. How can that scoundrel compare to Lucas? Charlotte retorted indignantly. In terms of looks and height, Lucas trumps him. In terms of meticulousness, Lucas is way better because he helps Cheyenne to the food and pours her water. That man simply sat there and waited for Scarlett to serve him. In terms of character, Lucas is obviously far better than him. Lucas never ogles other girls. Mom, will you stop being so superficial? You've only seen that man once. How much do you know about him? Karen was suddenly at a loss for words. Then she hollered furiously, forget it, I am not going to talk to you anymore. Wretched girl, you are really going to be the death of me. I'll teach you a lesson after I come back from the washroom. With that, she glowered at Lucas and Cheyenne before leaving the private room. Cheyenne poked Charlotte's forehead. It's not like you don't know what Mom's temper is like. The more you refute, the angrier she gets. I did that just to make her change her opinion of my brother-in-law. Lucas. Charlotte pouted, feeling wronged. Hearing Charlotte call Lucas her brother-in-law made Cheyenne feel extremely embarrassed. She looked at Lucas quietly as her ears turned red. I know you have good intentions, but by doing this you are only going to make Mom pick on Lucas even more. Seriously, what should we do? Then Charlotte was immediately nervous. Forget it, when Mom comes back later, don't say much to her. If she says anything that irks you, just pretend you didn't hear it, Cheyenne said, feeling helpless. Meanwhile, Scarlett kept running after Aston all the way to the parking lot. She only caught up to him when he reached his car. Aston, don't break up with me, okay? I'll make up for my mistakes immediately. I really will. Please give me another chance. I don't want to break up with you. Scarlett was weeping so badly that her makeup smudged with a trace of disgust. Aston suddenly thought of something and smiled. You don't want to break up, sure, but from now on you have to do whatever I want you to. Otherwise you can get lost. Now hearing that there was still a chance, Scarlett nodded profusely. Okay. I promise I'll obey you from now on and do whatever you tell me to do. Really don't just pay lip service and forget your promise today when I tell you what to do in the future. He looked at her skeptically. No, I can swear I am willing to do whatever you say, she hurriedly promised, fearing That he would believe her. You don't have to swear, no one will believe such things. I'll let you do one thing now, if you can do it I will believe that you are sincere. A peculiar smile appeared on his face. Scarlett frantically nodded in agreement. Okay Aston, I'll definitely try my best to do whatever you tell me to. Okay, in this case I want you to get either Charlotte Carter or Cheyenne Carter into my bed, Aston said slowly. What? Scarlett was stunned, not expecting him to make this request. How could she get another woman into her boyfriend's bed? She couldn't even tolerate it when Karen tried to sow discord between her and him just now. How could she be willing to get another woman to get intimate with him? Moreover, his request broke her heart. Scarlett was suddenly overwhelmed with complicated emotions. But you can't even do that. You were lying when you made that promise to me just now. Then in that case we have nothing more to say to each other, Aston sneered and reached out to open the car door. No wait, Scarlett grabbed his wrist with a look of panic. If she agreed she would still be Aston Brooks' girlfriend and she might get to marry him in the future. If she disagreed he would immediately dump her and she would no longer have a choice. Scarlett clenched her jaw and said miserably, okay I agree to your request, however you are just going to sleep with them, right? I am still going to be the one you marry, right? Of course silly girl, I am just going to toy with them. You are the one I love the most. Aston smiled gently as he touched Scarlett's hair. Chapter 100 Mother-in-law gets hit. Translator Atlas Studios. Editor Atlas Studios. In the private room of the restaurant they were almost done eating, but Karen hadn't returned yet. Why isn't mom back yet? Could something have happened to her? Cheyenne said worriedly, finding that something amiss too. Charlotte stood up and said, I'll go check. She walked out of the private room and crossed a corridor. She was about to go to the washroom when she suddenly realized that there were a lot of people gathered in the corridor and there seemed to be a fight. You are trying to run her. I am telling you, if you don't pay up today I won't spare you, a woman shrieked in a shrill high-pitched voice. Charlotte frowned in displeasure and was about to continue walking toward the restroom when she suddenly heard an extremely familiar voice. Oh please, a wench like you is trying to extort me. Dream on. Do you know who my daughter is? It was her mom's voice. Charlotte was shocked and immediately stopped in her tracks. Her mom had gotten into an argument with someone again. There were many onlookers and she couldn't squeeze her way through, so she ran back into the private room and yelled, bad news, mom got into an argument with someone again. There are a lot of people surrounding them. What? Cheyenne was astonished. She stood up and was about to dash out. Lucas hurriedly pulled Cheyenne to stop her. Ill go take a look. You stay here and accompany Amelia. Cheyenne bit her lip. She was indeed quite worried about her mom, but she also knew that she couldn't leave her daughter alone in the room. Besides, Lucas was a man and would definitely be able to handle the situation better than her. Okay, you go then. Pay most important thing is to bring her back here. Actually she was just worried that it was her mother who caused the argument in the first place. Okay, don't worry. Lucas walked out with Charlotte following closely behind him. When they arrived the commotion was louder. After Lucas squeezed through the crowd with Charlotte they saw a chubby woman raising her hand and slapping Karen on her face. Oh my god, you wench, how dare you hit me? Karen would never let herself be a disadvantage. She immediately raised her hand and grabbed the woman's hair. In an instant they got into a messy scuffle. How dare you hit my mother? Charlotte shouted furiously and rushed forward to grab the woman by her clothes. She even slapped her a few times on behalf of her mother, making the woman wail in pain incessantly. The lobby manager rushed forth with some security officers and finally separated the three women. The three of them looked rather disheveled. Karen deliberately styled her hair today, but it was now a total mess and there was a red palm mark on her face. Charlotte's clothes were also messy and there was a long scratch on the back of her hand. The one who had it the worst was the chubby woman opposite her. It was hard for her to move about nimbly because of her body size, so she had suffered numerous hits from Karen and Charlotte. Her cheeks were red and swollen after being slapped and her hair was all messed up too. Dear customers, please talk things over calmly and don't resort to violence, said the hotel lobby manager trying to mediate the situation. The chubby woman gritted her teeth and stared at Charlotte and Karen. She took out her phone and exclaimed, damn it, daring to slap me? Just you wait. As soon as the call got through the chubby woman started bawling and complaining about being bullied. She then told the person on the other end to send some people over quickly. When Karen saw that some people were really going to come she couldn't help but feel a little scared. After Charlotte took a closer look at the chubby woman's face her heart dropped and she knew that trouble was coming. She was too focused on helping her mother slap the woman that hadn't paid attention to see who she was assaulting. Now that Charlotte recognized the woman's identity she secretly lamented in distress. Of all people, why did she provoke this woman at the side? Lucas had also long recognized the chubby woman to be the same one who almost hit Charlotte and Amelia at the kindergarten. Previously the woman's husband was James Wilson, whom he had seen again at Dominic's place. Wilson had even tried to make Lucas kneel down and apologize to him. He reckoned that she should have called Wilson to bring his men over. Enemies always meet. Meanwhile Charlotte also quietly told Karen about this woman. This woman is Sharon Hart, the wife of James Wilson, the owner of the Titanium Corporation. I almost got hit by the two of them when I went to the kindergarten to pick Amelia up before. Thanks to Lucas rescuing us we got away unharmed. As soon as Karen heard the Titanium Corporation her face turned pale because she knew that it belonged to the top tier Wilson family. Oh my god, this fat woman I just hit is James Wilson's wife. What do I do now? Karen's legs were trembling as she quickly said, what are we still standing here for? Let's run away. She pulled Charlotte along, but as soon as they ran for a bit Sharon stopped them. HMPH, now you are scared then want to flee her? Let me tell you, it's already too late since you two bitches had the audacity to hit me. Be prepared to suffer my retaliation. If I don't beat you two into a pulp later I won't be Sharon Hart. Having found someone to help her, Sharon was naturally arrogant. Karen was terrified. She was the Type to bully the weak and fear the strong. Previously she had the guts to yank Sharon's hair and curse her out because she didn't know her identity yet. Now that she did, she obviously would day. Looking around in panic, she suddenly caught a glimpse of Lucas and immediately ran and hid behind him, regardless of the fact that she often called him a good-for-nothing. Oh, so you have an accomplice. Don't worry, I won't let any of you shameless idiots off, Sharon barked smugly while glaring at Lucas. As well as Charlotte and Karen behind him. Lucas' expression turned dark. Mind your language. If you're going to continue being so foul-mouthed, I won't go easy on you even if you were a woman. Karen was so infuriated that she poked Lucas back and chastised, are you out of your mind, loser? Don't drag us down even if you have a death wish. After saying this, Karen poked her head out from behind Lucas and said to Sharon deferentially, excuse me madam, it was all just a misunderstanding just now. I am sorry. I am really sorry. Please be magnanimous and let us off. Seeing Karen stooping low and submitting to her, Sharon immediately raised her head and laughed out loud, but she looked extremely terrifying because of her swollen face and large red lips. After she was done guffawing, she said to Karen sneeringly, HMPH, are you scared now that I've called people over? Weren't you very haughty and arrogant just now? You two slapped me so hard, but you want me to forgive you after a simple apology? Dream on.